A mercenary who does not die is considered third-rate on a desolate battlefield. Beneath a gloomy sky, bodies fall as crows circle overhead. That is the reason their price is so high. A knight in battle-worn armor raises his sword, which shines with an intense light. It is because they are willing to die for their lord. The blade pierces a man, his life extinguished in an instant. Even if I have to listen to my employer's nonsense every single day, a golden liquid, probably liquor, is poured out vigorously. Well, what can you do? With a resigned gesture, a man spills the contents of his flask onto the ground. That is the life of a mercenary. A lone man sits atop a fortress wall, gazing at a landscape devastated by fire and war. This is Jack, captain of the Fang Mercenary Corps. With a cynical look, he thinks to himself, nobles, they're so predictable. As the wind ruffles his hair, Jack continues his thoughts. When they need you, they promise land and make grand requests as if they're going to grant you a title. But every single one of them changes their story as if on cue, spouting all kinds of creative nonsense. A bitter smile forms on his face. Standing on the wall, with the burning battlefield behind him, Jack addresses the person in front of him. But what you just said surpassed everything. Jack smiles in disbelief, his red eyes gleaming with a mix of defiance and mockery. I must have misheard you, he says sarcastically. The camera pulls back, revealing Jack on the castle wall, facing a commander in armor beneath a purple-tinged twilight sky. Before him stands the commander-in-chief of the army, a man with reddish hair and imposing armor. Jack questions the order he has just received. Commander's expression's cold and resolute. You did not miss here, he confirms in an icy voice. I just told you to die. Jack, shocked by the bluntness, asks if the commander has forgotten who he is, but the commander remembers perfectly. I haven't forgotten you, are Jack, captain of the Fang Mercenary Corps. Jack bursts into laughter, saying something like that while knowing who I am. He says incredulously, I didn't know you were capable of telling jokes. Jack grips the hilt of his sword. His expression hardens. He knew it was not an order, because otherwise you wouldn't be asking a worthless mercenary like me to die an honorable death on the battlefield, like one of your noble knights. His red eyes shine with contempt as he smiled coldly, exposing the hypocrisy of the situation. The wind blows across the wall as the two men stare each other down. The tension between mercenary and noble is palpable. The commander lowers his gaze for a moment, as if reconsidering his words. Perhaps I was too direct, he admits. Jack returns his gaze with skepticism, not believing this sudden change in tone. A misunderstanding, the commander asks, placing a hand over his chest and adopting a more solemn tone. I simply wish to entrust you with one final mission. Jack listens, his face impassive, already anticipating betrayal. The commander begins to explain. As you know, with our string of defeats, our downfall is nearly certain. A wide shot shows Jack on the wall, watching the city burn, a grim reminder of the desperate state of the war, and the forces drawing near. On the battlefield, a group of fully armored soldiers, bearing a purple banner, prepares itself. These are the forces that will soon decide the fate of this war. The commander continues, revealing that the swords of traitors, once protectors of this land, are now aimed at the throat of the Crawford family. Realizing there was no retreat, he trails off. The family banner lies torn against the walls of the ruined castle. Jack smiles smugly and opens his arms up. Given the circumstances, he says, as if accepting the madness of it all. With a malicious grin showing his teeth, Jack says, I understand perfectly, Commander, but his thoughts reveal his true intention. It seems it's already time for me to get out of here. In his mind, Jack reflects on the commander, a man with unparalleled talent throughout the empire. For someone like him to be cornered says everything. Still, for a noble, he was a sensible man. It's a shame things have come to this, and yet a final mission in the midst of all this. Jack still doesn't fully understand the order. Does he want me to scout an escape road or something? If that's all, I can chalk it up as one last job before collecting the rest of my pay. Finally, the commander reveals the plan. The mission is simple. Tomorrow, the traitors will launch a full-scale assault. Stay with me and stop their attack, even if only for a moment, until our lord escapes safely. The commander looks toward the burning city. No, if even that is impossible, then until I die. With a somber, resolute gaze, the commander reveals the true and fatal objective of the mission. As payment, the commander offers a massive red gemstone. I will settle the remainder of your pay with this when you withdraw, he says, his tone laden with sinister meaning. Jack catches the gem as the commander tosses it to him. His mind quickly calculates its value. A gemstone of this size should be more than enough to cover the operating costs of your company. For 3 years the red gem falls, symbolizing the blood that will be shed. Holding the gem, the commander's expression darkens as he asks calmly, what is the meaning of this? Jack's anger finally explodes. That's what I should be asking you, he shouts. Did you really take me for a fool? Just because I'm always smiling, you're ordering us to become your meat shields? Jack and his mercenaries are shown from behind, a small force facing an overwhelming fate. Jack's face twists with fury. Even if we help you, we can only hold out for a short time. You're discarding us, just to buy your master a little more time to run. Fine, let's say by some miracle we manage to hold them off. Then what the scene shows soldiers, bodies impaled on stakes. Grim reminder of the enemy's cruelty. Do you really think those bastards will let us go? Jack faces the commander once more on the wall, his silhouette cut against the sunset sky. You are Jack begins, his voice filled with accusation. The commander responds with cold, brutal logic. You are mercenaries, not knights. The enemy knows that too. Once I die the army will collapse. Jack bursts into manic laughter. Exactly, he shouts with a savage grin. That's how things work in this business. Then Jack's expression turns cunning. But you know it very well, don't you, he says, hinting that the commander has overlooked a crucial detail. To those demons a mercenary company is nothing more than a sworn enemy that must be slaughtered without hesitation. The scene shifts to a dark forest filled with corpses, revealing an ambush that has already taken place. In the dark forest a soldier coughs, while another wearing the same armor watches from a distance. The second soldier approaches, and raised in what seems like help or camaraderie, but it is a deadly trap. The approaching soldier is not a comrade, but one of Jack's mercenaries in disguise. The swift, silent motion. He pins the unsuspecting knight against the tree and drives a knife into his back. Eyes wide with shock and pain, the knight collapses. His death is the silent signal that unleashes hell. In the forest Yeka's ambush has begun, and the massacre follows. The knights, their guard down, are slaughtered one by one by the swords of disguised mercenaries. One knight, seeing his comrades fall, realizes the truth in horror. Ha! It's a trap, Jack shouts, looking out from behind his helmet, red eyes glowing in the darkness. Panic spreads. They're not allies, they're the Fang mercenaries. A soldier screams before being silenced forever. A furious commander on horseback roars, you bastards, to think you disguise yourselves as our fallen soldiers. His face twisted with rage, he continues, you know nothing of honor. Honor is for dogs. Before he can finish, Asura whistles through the air and cleanly decapitates him. His severed head hits the ground with a dull thud, bringing the battle to a brutal end. Jack, his helmet splattered with blood, observes the scene with chilling calm, his red eye visible through the visor. Back on the wall the red gem lies on the ground. Jack explains to the commander, I've taken the heads of several commanders. Surely you understand that this is how we've managed to survive for so long. Jack approaches the commander with a mocking smile. Right now those bastards are far more interested in tearing us apart than chasing after your lord. The commander's jaw tightens, visibly shaken by Jack's revelation and the audacity of his plan. Jack mocks the commander's naive strategy. Don't tell me you really counted on this, on us drawing all of their attention. The commander regains his composure and warns Jack coldly, you better focus on completing your mission, otherwise killing you and taking command of the mercenary corps is the only option left. The commander prepares to strike. With a swift movement he attacks, sending Jack flying and smashing him hard against the battlements. Injured and on the ground, Jack looks at the commander with disappointment and rage. I really thought you were a little different from the other nobles. Turns out you're the worst scum of all. From across the wall, the commander offers an apology. My apologies, and I mean that sincerely. Jack, his hand on the hilt of his sword, replies, there's no need to apologize. In fact, this is for the best. As for the head of a bastard like you, even if I offered it to those lurking demons, I doubt I'd regret it. Anticipating Jack's move, the commander asks, are you thinking of offering my head to the traitor and begging for your life? Then he answers himself, yes. As much as I would love to hand you over and flee, I'm certain you've already made arrangements to stop us. His eyes gleam, acknowledging Jack's cunning. In that case, as commander I must fulfill my duty to the very end. The rebels will be satisfied with the heads of 2 commanders. In exchange they will spare the lives of my men. Jack is left speechless too. He says, staring at the commander in disbelief, don't tell me to save your subordinates. You plan to offer your own head as well. An open box reveals the severed head of the commander. Jack's men killed in the forest. The commander's gaze grows distant and melancholic. All those people, he says, referring to his soldiers, I dragged them along with me. I promised them I would show them that dreams can still be reached, even if you start from the very bottom. With a glint of respect in his eyes, the commander continues, they placed their faith in me, and I followed me all the way here. So I too must shoulder that responsibility. Jack, standing with his sword in hand before the silhouettes of his mercenaries, understands the weight of those words perfectly. Because I am their leader. The commander, hearing the echo of his own sense of duty in Jack's words, is momentarily left breathless. Surprised by the similarity between them, a bitter laugh escapes Jack's lips. Yeah, that's right. Both of them are bound by loyalty to their men. That is the mark of a true leader. The commander thinks, gazing at the wall where their conflict reached its climax. What a pity, the commander says, covering his mouth with his gauntlet. If only it weren't for Crawford. With a look of deep and genuine regret, the commander voices his final wish. If only you had been my lord. Driven by duty, the commander lunges forward, his sword ready to deliver the final blow. Jack, already wounded, can only let out a cry of rage and pain as the commander's attack strikes him. The commander straightens solemnly, his duty fulfilled as Jack's body lies motionless, his green eyes narrow with a mixture of determination and sorrow. He has done what he believed was necessary. His final plea echoes in the air. Do not forgive me, Jack. With a flash the scene cuts, symbolizing the fatal strike as life fades from his eyes. Jack thinks, I expected this outcome. I never imagined the gap between us would be so great. His body is thrown backward by the force of the commander's final blow. As he falls, he reflects on the injustice of fate. This thing they call talent. Well, I suppose this is it. With one last satisfied smile, Jack finds peace. I told them to flee immediately if I didn't return by the appointed time, so I can die without worries. Blood drips onto the stone floor, marking the end of his life. After all, I was always prepared for an ending like this. Still, there's only one thing I wonder. His consciousness dissolves into darkness, surrounded by what seem like droplets of blood or memories. If only I had been given the same opportunity as you. In the darkness, a distant, pleading voice calls out, Master, please. Jack's eyes slowly open. A blinding light floods everything. A voice insists, wake up. A young man lies in a luxurious bed while a servant leans over him. Jack, now in the body of a blonde youth, looks around in confusion. Who are you? He asks weakly. He raises a pale, delicate hand adorned with lace, one he does not recognize as his own. Suddenly the desperate young servant slaps him. Please wake up, he shouts, his face filled with anguish. Jack's eyes snap open, startled by the impact. He feels the sting on his cheek. What is this? He thinks, completely disoriented. I just got slapped out of nowhere. What a bastard. His mercenary fury resurfaces, but it is interrupted by the servant's sobs. The young man with orange hair begs him desperately. Please recover, the servant shouts. The name that changes everything. Young Master Lucian. Jack sits upright in bed, his mercenary mind utterly lost in the luxurious bedroom and the unfamiliar name he has been given. His golden eyes widen in disbelief and confusion as his thoughts go blank. This is not his body. This is not his name. His entire world has been turned upside down. Lucian awakens in a lavish bed, feeling completely disoriented. Beside him, the young servant appears to be crying in his mind. A single thought repeats wherever he looks. With panic on his face, he stares at his hands, realizing something is terribly wrong. His thoughts race. He remembers his mercenary hands, rough scar and full of blisters. What happened to them? He looks at his current hands. Not only are they clean, they are delicate, soft hands, befitting a young noble, something he never had. As he gets out of bed, completely confused, the red-haired servant clings to the sheets, sobbing uncontrollably. Lucian understands nothing. Who is this guy? A moment ago he almost killed him, and now he's crying his eyes out. The shock is too much, and Lucian collapses back onto the bed, overwhelmed. Seeing him move, the servant bursts into tears of joy, shouting in relief that the young master is alive. He thought he had died, and his heart nearly stopped. Hence his personal attendant drops to his knees. He murmurs that if something had happened to him, it wouldn't have been just his problem, but a great tragedy for the house. Lucian listens in disbelief. He has no idea what nonsense the servant is talking about. Young master, personal attendant, house, none of those words have anything to do with the life. He knew more than anything. He is certain of one thing. He died on that battlefield. It was a death no one could have survived. He touches his neck, finding it intact, and wonders how it is still attached to his head. After being decapitated, a tense silence fills the room as Lucian processes the impossible reality of his situation. With Hans kneeling beside him with a serious look, he begins to connect the dots. All the clues point to a single shocking conclusion. At this moment, he has taken over the body of a complete stranger. He rises from the bed, determined. A mischievous smile forms on his face as he realizes his new opportunity, and it is no ordinary body. He looks into the mirror and discovers that he now possesses an incredibly handsome face. He examines himself from head to toe before an ornate mirror while Hans watches from a distance, bewildered. He touches his reflection. At a glance, it is obvious that this elegant body belongs to a noble, and not just any noble, but one from a disgustingly wealthy family. Judging by the luxuries surrounding him, Lucian turns to Hans. First things first, he needs to gather more information. He clears his throat and addresses the servant. Look, Hans, I have something to ask you. Startled, but eager, Hans assures him that he can ask anything. Lucian gets straight to the point with his first crucial question. What year is it? Hans, surprised, attributes the strange question to the effects of the medicine. Thinking his master is still dazed, with a nervous smile, Hans answers that it is the year 846 of the imperial calendar. The answer leaves Lucian in shock, unable to process what he has just heard. What he whispers to himself. As the stunning truth settles in, the realization hits him hard. The year 846, that is 15 years before the day he died. He realizes that not only has he reincarnated, he has gone back in time. Lucian sighed, running a hand through his hair. He has no idea how any of this happened. but he knows panicking over every detail will solve nothing. He decides to remain calm and think clearly. With a determined gaze, he focuses on what needs to be done. His first task is to extract information from his personal attendant Hans. With an icy, threatening voice, he says, "It seems you've decided to die today." The poor servant freezes in terror, unable to understand his master's sudden change. Lucien grabs Hans, acting like an offended noble. How dare a mere servant lay a hand on the unconscious body of his master, without permission no less. He continues applying intimidating pressure. "Have the rules of this place changed? If not, answer me this." The piercing gaze that freezes Hans to the soul. Lucien asks the key question that this entire act was meant to uncover. "Who am I?" Hans's eyes widen in pure panic and confusion at his master's question. Terrified, he bows deeply. "Please forgive me, young master. I made a grave mistake because I was too shaken." He cries desperately between sobs of panic. Hans finally reveals his master's identity. "You are the young master Lucien Valdec, the third son of the esteemed House Valdec." Lucien freezes. The name Valdec echoes in his mind, bringing with it a flood of memories from his past life. The banner bearing the golden lion emblem of Valdec appears in his thoughts. Impossible. The Valdec family. The image of an incredibly opulent mansion comes to mind. It is the same House Valdec that he knew as a mercenary. The emblem of House Valdec, one of the most powerful noble families in the empire, shines vividly in his memory. He recalls their prestige, a noble family that as a pillar of the empire has long stood beside the emperor himself, a house so distinguished that its power rivals even that of the imperial family. Lucien Jack remembers being intimately familiar with this family's affairs because 15 years ago, he worked as a guard at House Valdec for several years. The irony is brutal. He died and awakened in his former workplace. Reality strikes him again. Not only has he reincarnated into the family he once served, but he is the third son of House Valdec. A small ironic smile forms on his face. How this is ridiculous, he thinks to himself. He recalls his past life, his low social standing, being despised and humiliated by nobles who tossed coins at him like he was a dog. He remembers enduring every imaginable hardship, walking bloodied and alone through cemeteries filled with fallen comrades. And now, after all that suffering, he is given an opportunity now of all times. The question echoes with a bitter taste of irony. He always wondered how high he might have risen if he had been given the same opportunities as others. Now it seems fate itself is giving him the chance to find out. The image of his former self shatters, and with it the chains of his old life. He accepts his new reality with steely resolve, making a vow to fate. "Very well, if this is the opportunity you're giving me, then keep your eyes open and watch." With renewed determination, Lucien opens the door to his room, ready to face his new life. He steps onto a balcony bathed in sunlight, a symbolic new beginning for his second chance at life. With a confident smile, he promises himself and the world, "Just watch how high I can climb, and what kind of life I'll live." The camera pulls back to reveal the magnificence of the Valdec estate, a palace that dwarfs anything he has ever known. Now dressed in noble attire, he walks through the opulent corridors alongside Hans. He thinks to himself that, as expected of the Valdec estate, the luxury is overwhelming. He has been to many places as a mercenary, but this is by far the most extravagant and ostentatious place he has ever seen. As he observes the other servants, he realizes that this is the place he will have to get used to, and quickly. However, his sharp mercenary instincts notice something strange in the atmosphere. He realizes that ever since he left his room, all the servants have been staring at him oddly, whispering among themselves, "Is that really young Master Lucien?" Some murmur in surprise. He finally came out. "How long has it been?" Shock is evident on their faces. Lucien feels the weight of the household staff's gaze, watching him from the shadows. With curiosity and unease, he turns to Hans and asks whether it's just his imagination or if the atmosphere feels strange. Hans explains that it's natural, since the young master locked himself away and saw no one but him for a year and 2 months. Revelation comes as accompanied by a grim image of the original Lucien, lying collapsed on the floor of a dark room. Stained red. Lucien cannot understand it. Locked away for more than a year, he wonders what could possibly be lacking for the son of a duke to behave in such a self-destructive way. He reflects that, even without understanding the logic of nobles, it should have been impossible for Lucien to act so freely in a household this strict, especially considering the head of the family, Archduke Sigmund, a giant of a man who protected the empire with unshakable principles and convictions. Lucien knows there is no way a man like the Archduke would allow his own son to waste away. In a corner, the image shows the Archduke watching a bedridden Lucien. Lucien reaches a logical conclusion. Either Lucien was such a troublemaker that he was on the verge of being disinherited, or there was a reason compelling enough for the Archduke to turn a blind eye. He decides that until he uncovers the truth, he must avoid the Archduke at all costs. But at that very moment, a figure blocks his path. An older man approaches. "So it seems the reports of your complete recovery were true," he says in a calm voice. Hans and Lucien stop in surprise. is the chief butler, a gray-haired man with a gentle smile who expresses his immense joy at seeing the young master's face. After a full year he addresses him formally. Young Master Lucien the butler asks whether he is having any difficulty moving. Lucien recognizes him as a member of the household while hands trembles visibly at his side. A profile introduces this new character, the chief butler Edwin. Although he arrived at the mansion as a hostage from an enemy family, his exceptional talents were recognized and he was placed in charge of all domestic affairs. The most important revelation about Edwin is that, despite his kind smile and green eyes, he is the right-hand man of Archduke Sigmund. Lucien looks at him and curses his luck. This is bad. He has run into one of the last people he wanted to see. He knows that a man as sharp as Edwin would immediately notice the manners of someone from the streets. Lucien thinks quickly. His only saving grace is that the chief butler likely has not seen Lucien for an entire year. There is no recent point of comparison. In that case, his mercenary cunning offers a solution. He will have to imitate the most noble person he knows, based on years of observation. With a perfectly practiced smile, he addresses the butler. Thank you for your concern. Chief Butler Edwin putting on his performance, he adopts a charming posture. I've improved greatly thanks to you, he says, playing the role of a grateful young noble perfectly. He justifies his sudden appearance. Since I've been shut away all this time, I came out to assess the state of the family. He adds flirtatiously, to think I would run into you. The gods must be smiling on me. Cleverly he turns the conversation back to Edwin. So I trust the family has been well. Yes. Edwin watches him silently for a moment, evaluating him. Then Edwin replies with a courteous smile, yes. Young Master House Valdic is as strong as ever, and it is a relief to see that you two are well. Lucien laughs inwardly in relief. Haha. Come to think of it, how could there be any problem with you here? Internally, he concludes that Edwin does not seem suspicious. Believing he has passed the test, he decides to withdraw. It seems I worried for nothing, he says as he turns away. Well then, I'll take my leave in peace. It's my first time out in a while, and I'm exhausted. But Edwin's voice stops him cold. Forgive my bluntness, young master, but I must ask you to delay your return. Lucien's blood runs cold. His escape plan has failed. With a serious expression, Edwin delivers the news Lucien feared most. Archduke Sigismund wishes to see you immediately. Young Master Lucien slowly turns around, panic reflected in his eyes. The very person he had decided to avoid at all cost. The scene shifts to a vast, imposing office. Lucien stands alone before the enormous desk of his father. Seated in a chair that resembles a throne is Archduke Sigmund, an imposing man, wearing a mask that conceals part of his face. Silence is heavy as he calls out to his son. Young Master Lucien stands rigid and motionless before the most powerful man he has ever known. His new father. The Archduke speaks, his voice echoing through the room. I will ask you a question. Lucien Valdic. Lucien's face tightens in fear, cold sweat forming under his father's gaze. The Archduke leans forward, his visible eye gleams with a menacing light, as he asks the most terrifying question Lucien could have imagined. How are you still alive? Continuing from the previous chapter, Lewin Walk is summoned before his father, the Grand Duke Sigmund Walk. The atmosphere in the room is tense and oppressive, with the Grand Duke sitting imposingly behind his desk, staring at his son Lucien, or rather Jack in Lucien's body, who looks utterly confused by the situation. Lucien asks his father what he means by those words, unable to comprehend the hostility directed at him. Grand Duke Sigmund responds coldly, stating that he had intended to overlook Lucien's actions, implying that his patience has run out. The Duke accuses Lucien of using his mother's death as an excuse to neglect his duties and behave like a spoiled child. A portrait of his deceased mother is revealed, adding weight to his harsh words. Clenching his fist, the Grand Duke continues, declaring that Lucien has finally crossed the line. He accuses Lucien of staging a protest by locking himself away for over a year. Sigmund's anger reaches its peak when he accuses Lucien of treating his own life lightly and attempting to harm himself, referring to an alleged suicide attempt. Lucien is completely bewildered, as Jack has no memory of the actions of the body he now inhabits. He wonders what his father is talking about. Suddenly a fragmented image appears in Jack's mind, not from his own memory, but perhaps from the actual event. The young Lucien lies in bed, someone beside him in panic. The vision reveals the servant Hans, crying uncontrollably, realizing the reason behind the commotion. This is what truly happened, an event Jack had never known about. Back in the present, Lucien tries to calm the situation, addressing his father and suggesting that there must be a misunderstanding, but the Grand Duke interrupts him. His patience is clearly exhausted. His authority absolute. Grand Duke Sigismund demands that Lucien confess his true intentions and the thoughts he has been hiding. He continues pressing him, asking whether the purpose of his actions was not, in fact, to use his weak body to cause a scandal. The Duke reveals the full accusation. Lucien took sleeping pills to create an uproar. The revelation strikes Jack hard, as he realizes that the original owner of the body attempted a fake suicide to draw attention. At that moment the truth hits Jack. He remembers why the name Lucian had never sounded familiar in his past life. Finally the missing piece falls into place. The scene rewinds 15 years. Jack recalls his past life as a guard at the Valdek estate. He remembers hearing about the third son of the family, Luan Valdek. The key memory that surfaces is devastating. Jack remembers that the original Luan Valdek died. That is why he had no memories of him. He was supposed to be dead. The head of the family is formally introduced, Grand Duke Sedman Valdek, linking the man of the present with Jack's memories of the past. Jack recalls the complex family structure. The Grand Duke has 4 children, each from a different mother, creating a potentially volatile family dynamic. During his 10 years as a guard, Jack encountered the other young lords and their mothers on several occasions. However, he realizes that he never came face to face with either Lucian or his mother. They were absent figures in his memories of the estate. Jack recalls the facts as he knew them. Lucian's mother died of illness shortly after Jack began working there, and shortly after that, for reasons unknown to him at the time, the young Lucian also died, following his mother into death. Back in the present, Jack's mind races. He realizes that the story he had always assumed, that mother and son were simply ill, was a facade. There was a hidden reason behind their deaths. Jack now understands the immense pressure the original young Lucian must have endured. The death of his mother, combined with his precarious position within the family, became a burden far too heavy for his young age. Thus the truth is fully revealed. In a desperate attempt to gain even a sliver of his father's attention, the fragile Lucian took a nearly lethal dose of sleeping pills. It was not an act meant to end his life, but a cry for help that tragically led to fatal consequences. Jack's internal monologue continues, uncovering the grim reality. During his year-long seclusion, the weakened body of the original Lucian could not withstand the effects of the drug he took to draw attention. The result was a fatal accident. The young Lucian simply died there, a silent, unintended end to his desperate plea for help. With this new understanding, Jack realizes the complexity of the situation. He thinks that the Grand Duke's harsh reprimand, though severe toward a son he had not seen in a year, now makes sense from the Grand Duke's perspective. Such rage is natural. After all, his son had toyed with his own life, pushing his father to the brink of despair. Jack reasons that regardless of his title, Sidman is first and foremost a father whose child stood on the edge of death. His inner fury must be immense. However, with iron determination, Jack decides that this is not the time to be considerate of others' feelings. His own survival is at stake. He stands on the edge of a precipice. He recalls the Duke's last words, recognizing them as a final ultimatum. One wrong move could ruin everything. He feels immense pressure, as if the ground beneath his feet is cracking. His golden future, this second chance at life, hangs by a thread. The risks are enormous. If he gives an answer that fails to satisfy the Grand Duke, his fate could be grim. He imagines the possible punishments: being sent as a priest to a remote monastery, forced to renounce the secular world forever, or worse, being dragged to a harsh northern territory, condemned to a life of suffering, battling cold and beasts for the rest of his days. Jack vehemently rejects those futures. This new life was hard-earned, obtained even after having his head cut off. In his previous life, he will not waste it. With a defiant smile, he asks himself whether he will allow the personal affairs of another family, the tragedy of the original Lucian, to ruin this precious future. Having made his decision, Lucian addresses his father. He begins by saying that he will speak as he was asked to do first. He apologizes for staining the name of Valdek with his foolishness and for causing his father great worry. With a bow of his head and a hand over his heart, he offers his sincerest apologies, adopting an appearance of remorse and respect. While meanwhile the head butler, Edwin, watches in silence. Surprised by the sudden change in the young master's behavior, Lucian continues, declaring that the fault is his alone, with no excuses, and that he will accept whatever punishment his father chooses to impose. But then he changes tactics. He argues that saying this now will change nothing, and therefore this is the moment to look forward. He boldly asks his father whether it would not be right to rejoice, wholeheartedly celebrating the fact that his son, whom he believed lost, is still alive. The Grand Duke appears taken aback by the sudden turn, repeating Lucian's words, "What has happened has happened." Is irreversible. Lucian steps forward with confidence, arguing that instead of tying the life that was saved from the brink of death to the past any longer, he should move on. He brings his heels together with newly found determination, ready to declare his new purpose. With a clear and steady voice, he proclaims, "I intend to live diligently for the future that awaits me." With a sly smile, he makes his bold request, "I ask you, not as the Grand Duke, but as a father, please offer me just a single word of encouragement." But the Grand Duke, Sigismund, listens with a hardened expression as Lucian presents his final and most manipulative argument. Lucian claims that it is a father's duty to willingly embrace a child who sincerely repents. appealing directly to the bond between parent and child. Above status and duty, he concludes by framing his audacious request not as insolence, but that is the sacred duty that binds a father and son. Under the laws of heaven, the head butler, Edwin, is completely stunned by the scene unfolding before him. Incredible, he thinks to himself, unable to process the change in the young master. Edwin had sensed that Lucian's aura had changed. This far exceeded his expectations. He remembers Lucian from the past, as a child who was always cowering in fear and anxiety. The person now, standing confidently before the Duke, is unrecognizable. In disbelief, Edwin wonders if this truly is the young master Lucian. The transformation is so drastic that he doubts his own eyes. Intense silence fills the room. As the Grand Duke processes his son's words, the tension is palpable. Lucian waits, his heart pounding, watching his father for any sign of how he will proceed. At last the Grand Duke breaks the silence, his voice filled with feigned anger. "How dare you," he begins, raising his voice as if to lecture him on the duties of a father. But then a faint smile forms on his lips, breaking his severe facade. The Duke leans back, a chuckle of amusement in his voice. "I've lived long enough to have seen it all," he remarks, more entertained than angry by his son's audacity. Internally, Lucian lets out a sigh of relief. His gambit has worked. He can barely contain his joy. Sweat from the tension drips down his forehead as the realization of success washes over him. It worked, he thinks, his heart racing, reflecting on his strategy. He knows that clumsy apology would have been useless. Confronting him boldly was the only answer. This was the Grand Duke Waldeck that Jack remembered from his previous life. A man who valued the spirit of a wild dog that knows how to bite more than that of a rat tiptoeing on eggshells. This bold move was calculated to appeal to his father's true nature. The Grand Duke comments dryly, "It seems you've learned to be quite shameless." After returning from the debt, acknowledging both Lucian's audacity and the seriousness of his recent condition. "Very well," the Duke says, conceding, "since you yourself mentioned diligence, I'll ask you first." He asks him directly, "Lucian Waldeck, what do you intend to do from now on?" Having won this battle, Lucian replies that first of all he will fix his broken body. A flash of his past life passes through him. The image of his former self, a powerful mercenary at the peak of his strength, recalling the feeling of a sword in his hands, gleaming with power. That is the self he aspires to return to. The vision of his battle-hardened former self contrasts sharply with his current state, fueling his determination. Back in the present, he declares his next intention. "I intend to properly learn the sword." The Duke is surprised. "The sword?" he asks skeptically. Lucian confirms, acknowledging that he first needs to resolve the problem of his paper doll body. He adds casually that if he eats and sleeps diligently, it will somehow work out. The Duke watches him in silence, processing the bold declaration. Finally, a smile spreads across the Grand Duke's face. "You certainly have a way with words," he admits, granting his son the verbal victory. Intrigued, the Grand Duke decides to test Lucian, to see whether his bold words are merely a bluff, or if there is truly new determination behind them. As a first sign of his decision, the Duke turns to his butler Edwin, and orders butler give him that again. Edwin smiles, inwardly thinking that rather than a few hollow words, this would be far more useful to the young master. In his current condition, Lucian, on the other hand, is utterly confused, a bead of sweat running down his forehead as he wonders what that could be. Edwin bows and confirms the order. "Understood, my lord. I will process it so it is available immediately." Back in his room, Lucian remains perplexed. What is that? He wonders completely in the dark about what awaits him. Soon the answer arrives at his door. An enormous heavy wooden chest is carried across the mansion grounds by two servants. The chest is so heavy that the servants struggle to bring it into Lucian's chambers. When it is opened, a dazzling treasure is revealed. The chest is filled to the brim with gold coins, jewels, and precious necklaces. Lucian and his personal servant Hans stare in astonishment at the incredible wealth. "This is ridiculous," Lucian exclaims, overwhelmed by the scene. Looking out over the vast city from his window, he realizes the truth. This was an absurdly enormous monthly allowance, a scale of wealth possessed by a high noble. He scoops up a handful of gold coins, astonished that such a fortune is meant for a single month. With this, the possibilities are endless. A mischievous smile spreads across his face. With this amount of money, his ambitious plan might actually work. With this is worth trying. At last his true goal is revealed. With this wealth, he can gather the ingredients to completely reform this weak body. With burning determination, he declares internally, "I can make that elixir," connecting the knowledge of his past life with the resources of his new one, to forge a powerful future. The scene opens in a magnificent, brightly lit greenhouse filled with beautiful flowers of vibrant colors. The Grand Duke, an imposing man with blonde hair and beard, walks with an authoritative air. Behind him follows his loyal and veteran butler Edwin. As they walk, Edwin reflects that this greenhouse was a place especially cherished by the late Grand Duchess during her lifetime. He continues, thinking to himself that the Grand Duke had not visited this place for quite some time. so his presence here must hold special meaning. The reason Edwin concludes is the recent and remarkable change in the young master, Lucian. Although he briefly lost his father's favor, Edwin knows that as the son of the Grand Duchess, whom the Duke loved so dearly, there's no way he would abandon him so easily. The Grand Duke continues his firm, decisive stride through the greenhouse corridor, lost in his own thoughts. His thoughts, however, are far more critical. He recalls Lucian's past behavior, considering it truly pathetic. The image of the old Lucian lingers in his mind, boy constantly looking around nervously, as if afraid of something, who would whine like a wild dog. If his voice was raised even slightly, Edwin addresses him respectfully. My lord. Despite the harsh thoughts occupying the Duke's mind, the Duke reflects that Lucian's attitude was very different from his mother's, and that he resembled her only in physical appearance. Edwin's expression shows surprise, as the Duke's inner monologue takes a turn. For the first time that day, with a faint smile, the Grand Duke admits to himself that the thought crossed his mind, that he might have been wrong about his son all along. The Duke says to Edwin, you must have seen it too. That child looked me straight in the eyes and expressed his opinion. Edwin confirms yes. There was not a single hesitation. It was a truly resolute and confident bearing. With a gentler perspective, Edwin thinks that the young master, Lucian, had a tender heart and deep thoughts. Merely hesitating slightly compared to the other young masters, he concludes that after all, Lucian has inherited his lord's blood. Despite Edwin's remarks, the Grand Duke remains skeptical and reserved, replying simply, that remains to be seen. He adds that the tasks that will confront that child from now on are things that can never be resolved. With just a few words, hinting that he intends to test Lucian. With a worried expression, Edwin interrupts his lord's thoughts. My lord. However, there is a problem. The Duke, intrigued, asks a problem. Edwin explains. Although the support funds for the young master, Lucian, have been reinstated, it has been confirmed that the circumstances of some of them have leaked outside. The scene shifts to reveal the culprit. After an investigation, it appears that the second young master, Geordie Waldeck, is involved, burning a letter with a malicious smile. Edwin reports that Geordie dismissed the head maid, who had been attending Lucian, and replaced her with one of his own close associates, revealing his intention to keep Lucian under surveillance. The Duke clicks his tongue, acknowledging that Geordie is capable but narrow-minded. With a somber expression, he reflects that he understands Geordie harbors deep resentment toward Lucian due to matters involving their maternal families, but he did not expect him to be this persistent. Edwin asks whether they should take separate measures, but the Duke stops him. No, Butler, do not interfere in this matter. Concerned, Edwin questions whether that is not too harsh for someone who has only just taken his first steps. The Duke looks at the pawn, dismissing Geordie's actions as a trivial trick. He states that even this is the price Lucian must pay for failing to come to his senses over the past year, and the perfect test of his new determination. With a calculating gaze, the Duke concludes that the situation actually works well as a test. Let's see how that child handles this. He thinks if he cannot manage even this, there would be no reason to hold expectations, for true strength must be forged by one's own hands. The Duke's thoughts end with a powerful visual metaphor. A majestic lion, the symbol of the Waldeck family. Even if the blood of the Waldeck family becomes the key, the door must always be opened with one's own hands. The scene shifts, and a sign indicates that several days have passed. We see that the imposing and luxurious mansion of the Waldeck family stands beneath a bright blue sky. In the corridors, two maids gossip as they watch Hans, Lucian's servant, standing guard. How many days has that guy been doing this? They whisper. The young master has locked himself in his room again. A close-up of Hans shows his face filled with fury and determination, making it clear that he will not allow anyone to disturb his master. The narration dives into Hans's memories. He is seen in a state of panic, recalling his desperation. Is the third day since the support funds that had been cut off arrived again. In his memory, Lucian had assured Hans that the support was restored because the conversation with the Grand Duke went well. The image shows both Hans and Lucian visibly relieved and happy, standing beside a large chest. Glimpse inside reveals that it contains not only gold coins, but also jewel treasures of great value. Considerable fortune still within the memory. Hans looks at Lucian with concern. He knows that, given the tense relationship between father and son, that conversation could not have been easy for his young master. Hans understands then that Lucian must have gathered tremendous courage to face his father in that way. Hans's loyalty and affection for Lucian are evident. He wipes away his tears, moved by the realization that his master now intends to move forward, even if he must leave sorrow behind. Lucian holds the gold coins indifferently, while behind him Hans is still visibly emotional over the change in his master. Intensity takes hold on Lucian's gaze. His eyes shine with fierce determination and a hidden plan. A cunning, confident smile forms on Lucian's face as he grips the coins. With this amount, it's worth trying, he thinks to himself. Lucian reveals his ambitious goal, to completely rebuild this weak body. I can make that elixir. An image of a shining potion and a magical herb illustrates his plan. The scene shifts to Lucian's room, which now resembles an alchemy laboratory where he works diligently at his desk. Lucian pauses to wipe the sweat from his brow, his expression one of pure concentration and effort. As he works, he thinks of his loyal servant. That guy Hans must be bursting with curiosity, but seeing him guarding the door as ordered, is quite loyal. The desk is covered with alchemy books and strange preparation tools, things the son of a Grand Duke would normally never have touched in his life. The focus centers on one of the key ingredients, a herb that is extremely expensive because it only grows under moonlight. More information is added about the mysterious plant. Its common use has not even been established yet, making Lucian's gamble even riskier. At last, the name of the plant is revealed: Moonlight Herb. Lucian recalls that he squandered his entire allowance to buy it, huge gamble based on his future knowledge. In a flash, we see Lucian giving a crucial order to his servant. Hans, it's not too late, buy all the Moonlight Herb. Lucian is aware of how others must see him right now, investing a fortune in sacks of an unknown herb. He might look like a madman, but his confidence is founded on a secret. Only he possesses knowledge of the future. His eyes shine with absolute certainty, as he predicts that in just 1 year, the price of Moonlight Herb will multiply tenfold, no more than 20-fold. The realization of the immense profit he is about to gain consumes him, and a near maniacal euphoria takes hold. With a crazed expression of pure greed and anticipation, Lucian rejoices inwardly, exclaiming, it will skyrocket without limit. Calming himself, Lucian reflects, now that I think about it, I have to acknowledge the boldness of the alchemists. He remembers that at the time, the success of their research on Moonlight Herb must have been uncertain. Despite that uncertainty, the Alchemist Guild gathered every Moonlight Herb in the Empire for their research, burning them all in a reckless gamble. It was, as the text says, a lifetime wager on the fate of the guild itself. Lucian reaches out his hand toward the potion he has created, acknowledging that thanks to that past audacity, he succeeded in developing an unprecedented elixir that shook the empire, the drink of the god's nectar. He remembers that due to the arrogance of calling a mere drug god, he even faced the danger of being accused of blasphemy. Yet once its effectiveness became known, everyone rushed to praise it as if nothing had happened, forgetting all accusations. Lucian smiles, smugly aware of the full story and the power he is about to wield. The narration explains the fundamental law of that nectar shattered, a proposition that had not been denied for more than 1,000 years. At a martial artist's realm is determined at birth. That limit was an absolute law that no one could challenge. Innate nature was destiny, and constitution never changed. A belief as strong as iron chains, what shattered that common sense, that unbreakable law, was nectar. Its power could transform a person from their very essence simply by drinking nectar. Even those with zero talent could be turned into usable swordsmen, an unprecedented miracle. Lucian looks at his own creation, a bright red potion. He admits that what he made falls far short of the original's effectiveness, and is nothing more than a kind of mass-produced substitute. However, as he rolls up his sleeves, his resolve is firm to raise a body as broken as this. There's nothing better than this right now. With an ironic smile, Lucian addresses the spirit of the previous owner of his body. Consider yourself lucky, noble young master. He recalls the end of Nectar's story later. What a chaotic era spread across the empire. The Alchemist Guild became the first target, because the recipe for nectar, which had shaken the balance of power, was itself far too dangerous. Because of that, the recipe vanished from the world. However, Lucian's eyes gleam with a secret. He knows something others do not. Lucian reveals his advantage. I managed to gather the clues and make something similar somehow. He remembers the painful experiments of his past life, where most test subjects died from side effects. Anyway, enough talk. He concludes, casting aside the dark past. Without further hesitation, Lucian brings the elixir to his lips and drinks it in one gulp. A wave of blue energy erupts inside him. The moment the liquid enters his body, what matters starts now. The potion releases its power. Threads of energy began to coil within him, the first step in transforming the power of nature into his own. This energy, the vital force now awakening within his body, has a name: mana, and its true power lies in how it circulates through the body. It is explained that the quality and output of the power one can draw differ drastically depending on how well the process of mana circulation works, spreading it throughout the body and then reclaiming it. Lucian explains his condition. At present, he has borrowed the power of nectar to forcibly widen the blocked pathways inside his body. The energy flows through his astral form. But then Lucian encounters a surprise. He opens his eyes in confusion. The resistance and pain that should occur when accepting mana for the first time do not exist in his body. On the contrary, the mana is spreading without obstruction, as if it has found its rightful place. Currents of energy flow freely and powerfully through him. Lucian is in shock. His eye changes, reflecting his astonishment. Even the body of a newborn baby usually has impurities that block circulation. An incredible truth begins to take shape in his mind. In a striking symbolic scene, he finds himself underwater, looking upward in disbelief. Don't tell me this guy. The final revelation crashes over him like a wave. Colossal majestic creature, a celestial whale swims above him, symbolizing the immense potential. He has just discovered he's the type known as a genius. The morning sun bathes the city in warm light, promising a new day. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, someone waits anxiously by a window. It is Hans, Lucian's personal servant. Pacing back and forth, consumed by worry for his master. Suddenly a sound from the door startles him. His heart leaps with anticipation and fear. The door opens and Lucian appears, disturbingly calm. Nothing happened while you were waiting, right Hans? Lucian asks Hans. On the verge of tears, rushes toward him. Young master, he cries, do you know how long you've been in there? Relief and frustration overwhelm him as he continues through sobs. You didn't even respond when I called you, and you strictly told me not to enter. No matter what happened, I was terrified that something terrible had happened, he confesses, wiping his tears in a mix of anger and relief. Lucian places a hand on his servant's shoulder, and Hans finally breaks down, admitting how worried he was, but there is not a trace of guilt on Lucian's face. Instead, a sly, calculating smile curves his lips. A close-up of his eye reveals a sharp, feline pupil. Something has definitely changed in the young master. Hans steps back, unsettled by the strange aura emanating from his lord. The young master, he asks hesitantly. Hans watches him closely, thinking to himself, it's definitely the young master, but why do I have this unsettling feeling that it isn't Lucian? Or rather the mercenary within his body. Smiles inwardly that Hans, since he cared for Lucian more closely than anyone, he must have noticed the change, that the servant's intuition has not failed him. Lucian places a hand on his chest, evaluating his new vessel. The physical body will need time and proper nutrition, so there are no major changes yet. What matters is the inside within him. A mana heart glows with turquoise light, pulsing with newly awakened power. With a smug smile, Lucian knows that his interior is changing at an incredible speed. All of this was possible thanks to Lucian's innate constitution, a potential the original boy never knew he possessed. I'm sure of it, he thinks. Conviction burning in his golden eyes. This guy's potential is in the same league as the legends who changed the world before him. He sees a gigantic chessboard, and he is the main player. If I play my cards right, I could easily surpass my peak as a mercenary. Within a year, he concludes with a malicious chuckle. With his plan set, Lucian turns to the bewildered servant Hans. Now that I think about it, I owe this opportunity to you. Hans's confusion is evident, unable to understand what his master means. Before Hans can respond, Lucian grabs him firmly. After all, rewards and punishments must be clear, he declares with an intense gaze, laying the groundwork for an order that will change Hans's life forever. Listen carefully, Hans. I'm only going to say this once. With a manic expression, Lucian commands, gather everything you have. Sell even your underwear if you must, and bet it all on me. I guarantee you a smooth journey to the top, he exclaims this with wild laughter, an unwavering confidence overflowing. Then, with a theatrical gesture, Lucian spreads his arms wide and shouts, let's go to the heavens together. Leaving Hans completely dumbfounded in his thoughts, the mercenary revels in it. I'm so jealous of you, Hans. In my time we didn't have nobles like this. Hans, for his part, and only processed the situation with a look of total bewilderment. Young master. 1 week later, the scene shifts to a quiet, lush forest brimming with life and light. Lucian and Hans walk along the path for the first time in a long while. Lucian feels relaxed and at peace. He walks with his hands behind his head, whistling a tune, while Hans follows with a worried expression. This is so refreshing, Lucian thinks. With a satisfied smile, he allows life to be this easy. He recalls the previous week, banquets served with clockwork precision, an endless stream of delicious food. His room was cleaned without him lifting a finger, attended by a retinue of maids. He even prepared a soft, cozy bed for him, a luxury he had never known before. The contrast is brutal when he remembered how hunger was part of his daily routine. In his previous life, a bitter laugh escapes him. Thanks to this, not only was he able to focus fully on his recovery, but he also had the chance to deal with the one thing that had been weighing on his mind. His expression turns serious as he prepares to face his past. He thinks about the existence of Jack, the guard of the Baldock family himself, from a life that feels increasingly distant and blurred. He remembers investigating it. I confirmed with the captain of the guards that no one fitting that description ever applied for the position, and a shift I used to work back then was filled by a complete stranger. The past he remembered simply did not exist in this reality. Lucian clasps his hands, accepting the situation. Honestly, this is for the best. There's no benefit in finding him. It would only be a distraction, and I don't have the confidence to face my past self. Anyway, he admits, bead of sweat forming. I definitely die of embarrassment back in the present. Lucian stops, and a chill of determination runs through his body. Hans looks at him, sensing the change in atmosphere. Lucian turns around with a resolute gaze. Young Master Lucian Hans stammers nervously, with panic written all over his face. He asks in a trembling voice, "Are you really thinking of going in there?" The camera shows the brightly lit training grounds as Hans's voice echoes almost like a plea. "You said you would never set foot near this place, because you hated it with all your soul." Lucian feigns innocence. "I did," he asks. Hans, exasperated, shouts, "Yes, you did," with a trembling voice. He reminds him, "Ever since the second young master beat you during training, you said you would never come back." Lucian processes the information. Judging by Hans's reaction, he gets the picture. Since swordsmanship is a required skill for the sons of the Grand Duke, it was the perfect opportunity for the second young master to torment him. Under the pretense of training, in a flashback, he sees the young Lucian lying injured on the ground. He realizes that his brother instilled a deep terror of violence in him. It was the perfect way to ensure he would never set foot in the training hall again. A cruel plan, executed flawlessly. Lucian smiles at his servant. "I understand why you're acting like this, but there's nothing to worry about. That's all in the past," he says indifferently, leaving Hans even more confused and afraid. With a malicious smile, Lucian moves forward. "You just need to believe me and follow my lead." His determination is absolute. Finally, Lucian and Hans enter the imposing training hall. Inside, a pair of guards are gossiping. "Is that really true?" one asks incredulously. "Yes, I'm sure," the other confirms. The third young master is looking around the training hall with his personal servant Hendrik. A man with a twisted mustache overhears them. He strokes his mustache with a disdainful expression. What the hell was that brat thinking? Setting foot in here, he thinks. It's impossible. Lucian has forgotten what happened, but then a malicious idea crosses his mind. "No, actually, this could be for the best." Hendrik orders his subordinate, "You go inform him right now." With a sinister smile, he adds, "I'll make sure he's thoroughly cooked." By the time he arrives, his intentions are clear. He intends to make Lucian's life miserable. Meanwhile, Lucian is completely absorbed, admiring the place. He had high expectations, but this exceeds them by far. Not only is there a plentiful supply of spare weapons that can be used without worrying about breakage, but there's also a massive space that doesn't restrict even the most intense movements. For the mercenary inhabiting Lucian, it's almost unbelievable to think that a single individual owns a facility like this. Melancholic thought strikes him. "If we had trained in a place like this, maybe more of my guys would have survived." Footsteps approach. Hendrik comes forward with a mocking smile. Well. So I wasn't seeing things after all. To think it's really the third young master. It's such a big surprise that I honestly couldn't believe my eyes." Hendrik continues, dripping with venom. "I still vividly remember how you turned tail and ran without looking back after your lesson with Nord Jordy a year ago." Hans shudders at the words, with a cruel smile. Hendrik mocks how Lucian fled like a frightened lamb. Then his attention shifts to the servant. Seeing Hans trembling, he asked mockingly, "Is that why you look so terrified of this place too?" Hendrik continues his ridicule, criticizing Lucian for dragging a servant into this sacred hall of warriors. Hans, embarrassed, lowers his head in a shallow bow. "It's been a long time. I'm Hendrik. I offer my humble greetings." Lucian stares at him unfazed. His eyes glint with malice. "A year ago I personally instructed you on your stance alongside the second young master. Do you remember?" Hendrik asks, savoring the memory. Flashback shows the original Lucian trembling in fear, holding a wooden sword, unable to defend himself. The trauma is palpable. Hendrik covers his mouth to stifle a cruel laugh. "It was a truly pleasant moment," he says, delighting in another's suffering. But instead of the fear Hendrik expects, Lucian's face lights up with a smile. A dark, hungry smile that bodes ill. Lucian's eyes shine with a predatory light. "Look at this insolent little runt," he thinks, smiling to reveal sharp teeth. The mercenary within him concludes, "This is going to be fun tonight." The embodiment of honor and loyalty, usually born of noble blood, it is customary for them to master both martial arts and proper etiquette from a young age. Only after establishing merit on the battlefield or through missions, and having those achievements duly recognized, do they finally receive the title of knight from their lord and fulfill the purpose of their existence. However, to Lucian, in the end, they are no different from house dogs with expensive collars. That is why they are obligated to show courtesy to the lord who provides them with wealth and honor, and to his lineage as well. But Sir Hendrik, with his arrogant attitude, seems not to understand this. Lucian thinks the low standing of Hendrik's family must have played a role in his insolence, but the real problem is that he acts this way because of the backing he has. If it were up to Lucian, he would tie him to a target and throw knives at him. To reforge his mind through intense training methods, he imagines how the knight would tremble if he hurled an axe at his face. But the Grand Duke, his father, would not stand idly by if that happened. Regardless of everything, a knight is a central military power and a vital asset to the family. Punishment without formal procedure would only create unnecessary friction. Lucian clenches his fist, deciding that it is not the time yet. Lucian changes the subject and says to Sir Hendrik, "It seems foolish to avoid the training hall, simply because of what happened in the past. I plan to come here often from now on, even if it's just to learn the sword forms." He continues, "As you said, sir. It's been a year, so I shouldn't be scrambling to catch up." Sir Hendrik responds in disbelief. "Sword forms, you say?" Third young master, he bursts into laughter. "You're quite skilled at joking. It's already too late. And yet you wish to learn sword forms now?" Lucian asks calmly. "Too late." Sir Hendrik leans forward and explains smugly. "It seems you don't know, so allow me to inform you. If you've passed the age of 15, you can consider it over. Sword forms are the secret techniques and legacy created by our ancestors. Simply imitating the movements grants enlightenment and evolves the physical body. They are the essence of ancestral wisdom." However, he continues, "that only makes sense on the premise that the path of mana is open. Since that path closes at 16, it would be nothing more than useless for you." Sir Hendrik concludes with an air of superiority. "Sword forms without enlightenment are just an empty shell, nothing more than a dance." With a mocking smile, he steps closer and whispers, "Now that I think about it, perhaps that would suit you, young master. Why not become the #1 dancer in the empire? That way you save time and find your true aptitude, don't you? If not, you could simply spend your time gardening. After all, everyone has a role that suits them best." Sir Hendrik thinks smugly. Hawk looks speechless and unable to say a thing. But in Lucian's mind, things are very different. First of all, the claim that the mana path closes at 16 is a complete lie, he thinks, in a foolish one that could be exposed with a bit of research. But it doesn't matter. I can feign ignorance later to smooth things over. He continues thinking, and the objective has already been achieved. The objective of presenting the image of a fool, crushed by his own ignorance, unable to utter a single rebuttal, a worm mocked by a servant too terrified to move. Showing that same pathetic nature as a year ago, Lucian begins his act up. Sir Hendrik, for some reason that seems a bit different from what I know. Lucian refutes him, to the surprise of both Hendrik and Hans. The monopath closes around the age of 25, not 16, so I understand. There's no problem learning even now. Sir Hendrik, startled, says, "Ha, are you certain of those words?" At this moment, Lucian presses on. "It seems you're mistaken, sir. Does Brother Geordie share this opinion as well?" Cornered, Sir Hendrik replies, "Of course. It's such obvious common sense." Sir Hendrik feels victorious. "This finishes it, as I said. He can't even think of refuting me." Lucian feigns collapse. "Yes, that's right, even my brother said that." Suddenly he grabs his servant Hans by the shoulders and exclaims, "Hans, it seems the Valdec family is doomed." Lucian shouts at his terrified servant, "You think so too, right? You must." Hans, confused and frightened, can only think, "Young master, why are you dragging me into this?" "Dragging me into this?" Lucian clutches his head in feigned despair. To think he's confused about common sense that even a stray dog knows at his age. Does that make any sense at all? Lucian continues his dramatic speech. "How many talents have been deprived of opportunities because of such incorrect knowledge? Tears cloud my vision. To think my brother possessed a skull so hollow." Lucian shouts, making both Hans and Sir Hendrik flinch, as his theatrical fury erupts. "Don't stop me," Lucian roars. "If what the knight says is true, then this is a disgrace to the family, and a clear crisis, isn't it?" With a malicious smile that reveals his true intentions, Lucian leans towards Sir Hendrik. "Surely you're not trying to deceive me, the son of your lord, are you?" The scene turns chaotic. Completely cornered, Sir Hendrik panics, cold sweat pouring down his face. "What do you mean by that? Are you implying that a knight tried to deceive you?" Young master, seeing that denial isn't enough, he desperately tries to backtrack. "Please forget what I just said. I simply misspoke, because I couldn't believe the situation." With a twisted smile, Lucian replies, "There's no way a knight of the Valdec family would do something so petty, right, Sir Hendrik?" Sweating and stammering, Hendrik nods. "Of course," Lucian answers calmly. "Good. I knew it." He continues, "In that case, this is a matter we cannot overlook lightly." In his thoughts, Lucian's true intention is clear. "I'll teach you what happens when you move your tongue the wrong way, Sir Hendrik," Lucian says, as if unaware of how serious this matter truly is. Hendrik asks what he means, and Lucian explains that if Hendrik had merely intended to humiliate him, he would have let it slide. Continuing his act, Lucian adds, "The reason you and everyone else don't look kindly upon me is due to my own shortcomings, forgetting my duty and wasting time in vain." With false humility, he exclaims, "How could I possibly reprimand you for that?" But then Lucian's tone changes. "However, aside from that, if you, a knight and my brother, the pillar of the Grand Duchy, are obstructing the recruitment of talent with incorrect knowledge, that is something I cannot turn a blind eye to." Lucian argues that this would cause cracks in the military power of the Valdec Knights and, strictly speaking, become a serious danger to the safety of the people of the territory. As someone who bears the Valdec name, it is only right that I be outraged. While acting, Lucian thinks to himself that he's finally reached the core of the matter. Lucian turns again to Sir Hendrik, who is frozen with fear. Sir Hendrik now clearly understands the gravity of the situation. Lucian lightly pushes him in the chest and warns him, better prepare yourself with a threatening gaze. Lucian delivers his final blow. I intend to report this to my father and request an internal investigation. Panic seizes Sir Hendrik. Wait. He thinks this guy used to tremble just hearing my name. Why is he making such a big deal out of this? Hendrik's mind spins. No. This brat was always like this. He was as fragile as a newborn lamb and as fear. But now he sees Lucian not as a lamb, but as a massive, threatening wolf emerging from a dark forest. Gloved hand adjusts a ring set with a red gemstone. A new voice interrupts the scene. What's going on that caused such a commotion? Sir Hendrik looks up in shock, his face twisted with fear and relief. Lord Geordie. Lucian, however, smiles inwardly. Right on time. He thinks Geordie Waldeck, the second son, approaches with an expression of disdain. Is it you again, Lucian Valdec? The scene continues from the previous chapter. Geordie Waldeck, the second son, confronts Sir Hendrik and his men in the training yard. Sir Hendrik rushes toward Geordie, trying to explain frantically. Second young master, I'll explain. Panicking, Sir Hendrik stammers, unable to form a coherent sentence. It's this situation right now. It's Geordie cuts him off with a brusque wave of his hand and a single word, stop. With a condescending smile, Geordie says he doesn't need any explanation. He steps closer, invading Sir Hendrik's personal space, and then whispers with an intense gaze, because I saw your disgraceful behavior with my own eyes. Sir Hendrik's face contorts in fear as Geordie continues his rebuke. To be influenced by a child who hasn't even lived half your age is utterly disappointing. He grabs Sir Hendrik's shoulder and warns coldly, control your expression. Finally, he releases him and wipes his hand with a handkerchief as if he dirtied it. Unless you intend to put me in an even more troublesome position. Geordie turns and strides toward the two figures who have been watching his younger brother Lucian and Lucian's servant Hans. Terrified Hans hides behind Lucian, trembling. But Lord Lucian, I think he's very angry, unlike his servant. Lucian watches the scene with an amused smile, finding his brother's expression entertaining. Indeed, it's quite a spectacle. We are formally introduced to the second son of the Waldeck family, Geordie Waldeck, a worthy successor of a traditional noble house, a true noble among nobles. The background is revealed. It's rumored that Geordie recruited people from outside because his influence was weakened by the first son. He himself announced that he brought them in. Geordie's plan is clear. If he judges these recruits to be useful, he will try to use them to turn the tide in the family's power struggle, maintaining a facade of respect and submission. Lucian greets his older brother with a radiant smile. Greetings to elder brother Geordie Waldeck. Geordie's expression sours at the greeting. The narrator conveys the chill in Lucian's polite words. It's been a long time, second young master. Have you been well? Geordie wastes no time on pleasantries and calls Lucian foolish, fainting innocence. Lucian asks what he means by that all of a sudden, and then reveals his card. As for the words you exchanged with Sir Hendrik, I was watching everything with a smile. Geordie directly accuses his younger brother. Did you dare to do something that damages the dignity of the family? Lucian opens his eyes in exaggerated surprise. Damage the dignity? Could you explain so I can understand better? Geordie begins his condescending explanation, saying that since it's been a long time since Sir Hendrik withdrew from the front lines, there seems to have been a mistake. He points out that Hendrik's mistake was using Geordie's name to cause unnecessary chaos, and that he cannot evade responsibility. However, Geordie adopts a magnanimous stance, declaring that he has no intention of reprimanding Hendrik. He claims he knows very well the knight's loyalty and how much blood he has shed for the family, acknowledging the weight of his servant. But that acknowledgement of loyalty becomes a weapon. Geordie casts a contempt-laden glance at Lucian, delivers his final attack. Unlike you, he continues his verbal assault, pointing at Lucian. Furthermore, for someone who couldn't even endure sword training and ran away, do you really think you have the right to accuse him from a position of superiority? He lectures his younger brother, Lucian Waldeck. You must first learn to respect the knights. With an arrogant smile, he revels as he looks at the gathered knights. With an arrogant smile, he revels as he looks at the gathered knights. Because they exist, the Waldeck family can exist. The broad sweep of his hand, he emphasizes that the family's existence depends on the loyalty of these men. One of the higher-ranking knights steps forward, apologizing on Lucian's behalf. Everyone, I apologize in his stead for today's disturbance. It is the mistake of an immature child, so please show generosity. With a twisted, self-satisfied smile, Geordie thinks to himself, completely pleased with the outcome. I'll take special care of my foolish younger brother. However, Lucian's expression reveals his true thoughts. Cunning smile forms on his face as his mercenary mind analyzes this situation. So this is how you want to play. He thinks Lucian understands Geordie's strategy. Although the insults were aimed only at Sir Hendrik, his brother is manipulating the situation to make it seem like an attack on all the knights. Lucian's internal monologue continues to unravel Jordy's plan. He's not only suddenly provoking Lucian into insulting them, but also saving face for himself. With a barely perceptible smile, Lucian decides to play along. Fine, I'll grade you that gladly. Lucian begins his performance, looking at Jordy with an expression of false admiration. As expected of elder brother, Jordy, thrown off by the sudden change, can only respond silently. Placing a hand over his heart, Lucian continues his dramatic speech. Although there was a misunderstanding between Sir Hendrik and me, the proper thing would have been for you to scold me for daring to insult you, elder brother. But instead of that, he exclaims with exaggerated fervor, clutching his collar as if overwhelmed by emotion. To think you would bestow such valuable teachings upon me. As Lucian confesses his supposed verbal crimes, Hans falls into total panic, whispering desperately, "Young master, please close your mouth." Lucian ignores his servant and concludes his false apology. "In any case, I'm ashamed of myself for spewing such disgraceful words." Jordy watches it all with a bright, satisfied smile, believing he has won completely. Raising his fist, Lucian declares his supposed epiphany to all thanks to his elder brother's benevolence. This younger brother has learned once again today. Lucian turns to the knights and shouts orders to his servant Hans. "I must record my elder brother's teachings as soon as possible. Paper won't be enough, better to leave it on the finest silk." Meanwhile, in his mind, he reveals his true objective. By using this, I'll wipe away Lucian's weak image. As Jordy smiles smugly, Lucian's thoughts continue, revealing the second part of his plan. "And I'll imprint a clear presence in everyone's minds." Lucian's face twists into an almost manic expression as he shouts his final proclamation internally. At the third, young master of the past no longer exists. When his act ends, Lucian's mask falls away, replaced by a chilling calm. He turns to leave and asks a stunned Jordy, "Therefore, I intend to take my leave now. Will you permit it?" As he walks away, Lucian adds one last provocation, making the rift between them clear. "After all, there's no benefit for either of us in staying together any longer." Jordy's composure finally breaks. Unable to process the challenge, he explodes in fury. "Damn it. It seems you really aren't afraid. Do you think you can just leave like this, as if nothing happened?" A close-up of Lucian's golden eye reveals his calm. In a steady voice, he reminds his brother of a crucial piece of information. "You've forgotten." Lucian lays out his checkmate, reminding Jordy of the delicate balance of power. "Father is watching me closely right now. As for me, I have nothing to lose." It is a veiled warning that any scandal will harm Jordy far more than it will harm him. Faced with Jordy's stunned silence, Lucian reads the situation clearly. Turning the situation to his advantage, Lucian calmly turns around and begins to walk away, declaring, "Men, I'll take that as your consent." One final dramatic farewell, Lucian drags his servant Hans, who is still in a state of shock, away from the scene. "I will take my leave now, elder brother." Jordy, in a comedic panel, Lucian hurriedly urges his servant to escape while Hans screams desperately, "Young master!" Back in the training yard, the silence is suffocating. Sir Hendrik cautiously approaches the furious Jordy, who is his back turned. "Sir Jordy?" Sir Hendrik asks in a trembling voice, wondering whether it was truly right to let Lucian leave so easily. Jordy gives no answer. His silence is more threatening than any shout. A close-up reveals the fury boiling inside Jordy. His eyes glow with a golden light, his expression filled with pure rage, promising future revenge. The scene shifts to a quiet path leading away from the mansion, marking the distance Lucian and Hans have put between themselves and the conflict. As they walk, Lucian maintains his composure, but Hans is visibly shaken, hunched over and constantly glancing around in fear. Hans can't take it anymore. He stops and looks back, sweat streaming down his forehead, clearly terrified of what might come next. Finally, he turns to face his master, his voice trembling. "Young master, will everything really be all right?" Lucian stops and listens as Hans continues, reminding him of his brother's ruthless nature. "You know Lord Jordy's personality better than anyone." "Young master!" Hans's fear erupts into a desperate, tearful cry reduced to a small panic. Almost comical animal in his imagination, he envisions the worst-case scenario. "I'll definitely be captured by that terrifying mustache knight, without anyone ever knowing." Lucian, without losing his calm, tells him to settle down. Lucian's expression grows serious. Hans's fear triggers a memory from Lucian's past life as a mercenary. That's right, only those who had suffered under that kind of temperament would truly understand. A grim image from his past appears. The flashback continues, showing him in a desperate situation, possibly imprisoned. He recalls the frustration of dealing with an incompetent superior who made matters worse and then pretended ignorance afterward. With a bitter half smile, Lucian remembers how utterly miserable it felt. Returning to the present, he reassures his servant, "That won't happen, so get up quickly." Hans looks at him with tear-filled eyes as Lucian firmly assures him, "A mere knight wouldn't dare do such a thing. And I won't allow it either." Lucian bends down toward the kneeling Hans, his voice filled with a newly found empathy. "You've suffered a lot because of me all this time." Hans, bathed in warm, gentle light, Lucian reflects on his past mistakes, or rather the mistakes of the original Lucian. When a master acts like a fool, it's the subordinates who suffer the most. The tender gesture Lucian gently pats hands on the head. Especially since you're my personal attendant, it must have been even harder for you. Deeply moved hands can only whisper. Young Master Lucian's expression sharpens. Filled with resolve, his gaze becomes intense, as he prepares to make a promise. I'll promise you one thing. Looking straight into the eyes of his loyal servant, Lucian begins his oath. From now on, I will never allow my foolish actions to make my people be looked down upon, or tremble in fear. His vow echoes beneath the open sky, marking the beginning of a new era. The chapter ends with a powerful symbolic gesture. Lucian firmly takes Hans's hand, sealing his promise and forging a new bond of trust and protection. On a bright sunlit day, inside the palace, Lucian and Hans walked silently through the long corridors. Their footsteps echoed faintly, matching the heavy expressions on their faces. Ever since the incident at the training wall, an uneasy feeling had taken root in Lucian's chest. The palace had become far too quiet, dangerously quiet. He knew Jordy, the second young master, better than most. That man was not the type to swallow humiliation and move on. He always retaliated. As Lucian tightened his grip around a folded sheet of paper, his suspicions were finally confirmed. His eyes scanned the document once more, filled with open disgust. So, this is the trick you've been preparing all this time, he muttered coldly. Do you have any idea how long I've waited for this day? Beside him, even Hans, normally timid and soft-spoken, could no longer suppress his anger. His fists clenched tightly as he raised his voice, saying this could not be allowed to pass. Lucian turned to him calmly and asked if he was ready. Hans didn't hesitate. He answered immediately that he was. How dare he, Lucian said, his voice sharp and icy. How dare he touch my allowance? Hans shouted along with him, adding that his own salary had been cut as well. Lucian explained how everything had started with the budget plan he received that very morning. It was supposed to be a simple day, one where he replenished his funds, bought extra moonlight grass, and stocked up on supplies. That was how things should have gone. But the moment he opened the letter, his expression froze. The paper slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor. Printed clearly at the top were the words, Budget Summary. Lucian's allowance had been reduced by 75, hence his salary had been cut by 30. That bastard, Lucian said quietly. Jordy, the second young master, had laid his hands on his allowance. He had used authority as bait and planted a spy through paperwork itself. Even among nobles, embezzlement was a crime punishable by execution. Soon they arrived at a private room. Lucian opened the door, his mind already calm as he reflected on the situation. The only reason this absurd power play had succeeded was because there had been a cap in his defenses. After his mother's passing, Lucian had entrusted budget management to another. That responsibility had once belonged to Dana, the former head maid who had served him loyally for years. But now, that authority had ended up in the hands of someone entirely different. A woman stepped forward and bowed politely. She introduced herself, saying it was her first time meeting Lucian face to face. Her name was Jenny, the newly appointed head maid assigned to replace Dana. She added that she had wanted to greet him earlier, but at the time, Lucian had shown no intention of leaving his room. With a faint mocking smile, she remarked that his long period of seclusion finally seemed to be over. Hans bristled at her tone and immediately protested, but Lucian raised his hand, signaling him to stop calmly. He said that Jenny wasn't wrong. Then, with a faint smile of his own, Lucian stated that they would keep their conversation brief. There was a more important matter to address. Tightening his grip on the paper, he asked her directly whether she had drafted the budget plan and held the document out in front of her. At first Jenny looked startled, then she smiled, and then she laughed. She said she couldn't understand why Lucian had summoned her over something as trivial as a budget issue. Yes, she admitted that she had written it, hence Lucian had granted full authority to the former head maid. She explained the responsibility had naturally been passed down to her. She had merely carried out the duties entrusted to that position. With a composed smile, she added that this was originally work Lucian should have handled himself. Lucian's expression hardened slightly. He had expected this answer. It was true, this neglect was partly his own fault. Accepting, they nodded and said he understood. However, something still did not sit right. Calmly, he pointed out that the majority of the funds allocated by his father were meant to raise servant salaries, meant to compensate for his past neglect. As he spoke, the surrounding maids began to tremble. Their eyes darted nervously between Lucian and Jenny. Lucian then asked a simple question. If that is the case, he said evenly, why was Hans's salary cut instead of raised? His gaze sharpened. Isn't that far too blatant? Jenny smiled once more, feigning surprise. She claimed there must have been a mistake. After all, managing an entire household involved countless responsibilities. Turning slightly, she asked the others if they could testify to how overworked she was. Immediately, the surrounding staff nodded in agreement. One after another, they awkwardly voiced their support, shifting the blame onto themselves and insisting it must have been an oversight. Lucian watched quietly, then he spoke. Enough His calm voice carried unmistakable authority. The room fell silent at once. Stepping forward, Lucian said that while the body might belong to one master, the hands and feet were clearly obeying another. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. He looked directly at Jenny. "I'll ask you one final question," he said. "Answer carefully." His eyes narrowed. "Do you know who the master you are truly supposed to serve?" Jenny's smile faded. Her reply came sharp and cold. "If you want an answer," she said, "you'll have to ask Lord Jordy." The scene shifted. A dark alley stretched ahead. Damp and narrow. Lucian walked forward, his thoughts steady but ruthless. Infected flesh had to be cut away for the body to survive, even if the process was painful. His heart beat faster with each step. At the corner of the alley stood a rowdy bar, loud voices spilling out into the street. Lucian and Hans entered, both cloaked and disguised. Hans glanced around and frowned. "I thought you said you were going fishing." "To calm your mind," he muttered. "This place doesn't exactly match that image." Lucian ignored him. His gaze locked onto the center of the bar, where two fighters were brawling brutally while spectators cheered wildly. People shouted bets, screaming for blood and victory. Hans smiled faintly and leaned closer. "Looks like the perfect place to catch a big fish." They moved to the counter, the bartender wiping a glass. Eyed them suspiciously and warned that this wasn't a place for shady figures to linger. Without a word, Lucian placed a heavy sack on the counter. The bartender froze. Lucian removed his disguise and then asked calmly why a gambling bar was being so picky about its customers. He questioned whether the man even wanted business. There were several reasons. Lucian had not dealt with the head maid rashly. First, Jenny was no ordinary maid. She was the daughter of the nanny who had raised Jordy since infants. Acting against her carelessly would only worsen the situation and invite unnecessary backlash. Second, and more importantly, this situation existed because of Lucian's own mistake. Before reincarnating and taking over this body, he simply hadn't known how to handle matters like this. He had entrusted authority without fully understanding the consequences, assuming that such an unreasonable situation could never arise. Reality proved otherwise. Lucian realized this problem went beyond common sense. It required a proper response, and this time he would not be lenient. More than that, there was no way the Archduke was unaware of what was happening behind the scenes. In other words, resolving this mess was not just necessary, it was part of a test, and if that was the case, then Lucian would show him. As these thoughts passed through his mind, the same staff member from earlier led him through the bar once again and seated him comfortably at a table. Cards were scattered across its surface, clear evidence of countless games already played. Lucian picked up a deck, his expression calm. Since he was already here, he might as well make some money too. Before long, the man sitting across from him was visibly trembling. A large crowd had gathered, watching in stunned disbelief. How many rounds had Lucian won in a row? His opponent was supposed to be a seasoned gambler, yet he looked completely crushed. Finally, the shaking man spoke up. "I quit." Lucian casually flipped a coin between his fingers as the man hurriedly withdrew. "This is only the beginning," Lucian said lightly. "Things are just starting to get interesting. Why not stay a little longer?" The man paled and refused at once, saying it would be better for him to leave now. Beside Lucian, Hans stood frozen, clutching his head. When did the young master gain such terrifying skill? Clearly bored, Lucian leaned back in his chair and rested one leg on the table. "Next round," he announced calmly. "Isn't there anyone else willing to play?" He had come here to spread rumors, but this felt underwhelming. Lowering his gaze, Lucian thought that after taking so much from them, it was about time for the real target to show himself. Almost on cue, the door opened. Lucian glanced sideways and saw a man entering. While adjusting his buttons, he wore a polite smile, but his presence alone caused the atmosphere to shift. Well, the man said smoothly. "I failed to recognize someone important. Please forgive my late greeting." He stopped in front of Lucian and introduced himself. "My name is Hugo," he said. "I am the manager of this establishment." With a snap of his fingers, a butler appeared instantly. The man bowed deeply and announced that the bar would be closing for the day. Due to unavoidable circumstances, servants quickly moved through the room, delivering the same message and escorting all guests outside. They promised generous compensation on their next visit. Turning back to Lucian, Hugo spoke respectfully. "It may inconvenience other customers," he said, "but that is a small price to pay if Lord Lucian can enjoy his time in comfort." Lucian smiled faintly. "It's been a long time since I last went out." He said, "You have a sharp eye." Then he added casually, "That kind of intuition is necessary to survive in this line of work." Hugo bowed again and apologized for his delayed greeting. Lucian waved it off, saying he had only come for a change of pace. Hugo's gaze drifted to the coins piled high on the table. He admitted that it was astonishing. It had been a long time since he had seen a guest stack the pot like this. Then he looked back at Lucian and spoke again. "May I ask," Hugo said politely, "if you would allow me to be your opponent?" Lucian met his gaze. Hugo smiled calmly. "I wouldn't stand a chance against the young master, but as the manager." Hugo had picked up a few tricks over the years. At the very least, it would help pass the time. At that moment, Hans stepped closer and whispered urgently, "Master, we should go home. We've already won enough, and I have a very bad feeling about this man." Hans had seen countless, frightening figures in the palace, but Hugo's presence was different, truly one of a kind. Lucien acknowledged Hans's instincts with a faint nod. He hadn't become a personal attendant for nothing. Just by glancing at Hugo's hands, Lucien knew exactly who he was. A black shark Hugo. Lucien remembered him from his previous life, rougher, more ruthless, a name destined to one day shake the underground. Hugo's journey had begun in the dark alleys of the city. Armed with nothing but brute strength and cunning, he had crushed every obstacle in his path. He expanded into gambling, smuggling, and even contract killing, eventually becoming the king of the night, ruling 5 territories from the shadows, later exploiting the empire's instability. He declared himself a baron and re-emerged as one of its warlords, but for now Lucien noted he was still a rookie. Even so, that only made him more dangerous. Lucien smiled faintly. Today he had come to catch the shark. As the cards were spread across the table, Lucien suggested keeping the game simple. Hugo agreed immediately and removed any upper limit on the betting. I cannot allow the young master to grow bored. After coming all this way, he said politely. Lucien's expression brightened. Finally someone who understands me. Behind him Hans grew even more anxious. Hugo maintained his polite smile, but inwardly he dismissed Lucien as a spoiled brat, relying on his family name. He didn't realize that the words they had just exchanged would soon become the foundation of his own downfall. As the dealer prepared the cards, Hugo thought the timing was perfect. Even though his planted gambler's losses hadn't gone according to plan, he suddenly tapped the table. The dealer noticed. Hugo believed that someone like Lucien would sink deeper the more he lost. He intended to devour him down to the bone. At the table, Lucien beamed cheerfully, as if nothing was amiss. Hugo, suspicious, asked if something was wrong. Lucien replied casually that it was nothing, but before they began he had a question. Hugo assured him he would answer honestly. Lucien leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. Although we are meeting for the first time, I have to admit, I've already taken quite a liking to you. A leader can be judged by his subordinates alone. Managing an operation of the scale, even elitely, is no simple feat. If you had crossed the line, you would have been eliminated long ago. Hugo's smile remained polite, but he stiffened slightly. I understand my position, he said carefully. I make sure not to offend my superiors. Lucien chuckled softly. Don't be so stiff. Even though I come from House Weldon, we are not inflexible. He peered at his cards for a moment before asking calmly, when do you plan to begin large-scale production? Hugo froze. What are you talking about? Lucien smiled faintly, leaning back. Don't pretend I've seen the signs. Lucien's gaze sharpened as he spoke, bringing up the word that carried weight in the room. The moment it left his mouth, the atmosphere grew heavy, suffocating. Even the servants began to sweat nervously. Hans stiffened beside him, his eyes wide with unease. Hugo froze in place, his body suddenly rigid, as if an unseen force had struck him. Trying to maintain his composure, Hugo forced a smile and asked cautiously what Lucien meant. Pretending to misunderstand, he claimed ignorance, insisting he had never heard of anything illegal. Lucien did not respond immediately. Instead, he calmly placed more coins on the table, the action deliberate and unsettling. There's no need to pretend, he said softly. I heard you clearly. Asking again is pointless. A faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on Lucien's lips as he revealed the truth. Hugo had been commissioned by the Marquis Laurent family to destabilize Waldeck territory through illegal drug distribution. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Lucien's gaze turned cold, a hand waving lazily, but decisively. For a Marquis family to give such cheap and reckless orders, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. There is clearly no respect. There's a line that should never be crossed, and you have crossed it. Do you agree? Hugo said nothing. Sweat rolled down his face, and his breathing became uneven. Lucien's calm eyes bored into him, unyielding. I must admit, he continued, there is something almost impressive about your audacity. Smuggling illegal drugs into another city, especially into Waldeck territory, takes a certain nerve. The compliment was sharp as a blade. The moment something goes wrong, Lucien warned, and you are caught, everyone associated with Waldeck will tear you apart. Not one person will hesitate. Not a single soul will show mercy. The pressure in the room intensified, thickening the air. Lucien observed Hugo in silence, noting the chaos in his mind. Failure now meant death. His plan had been exposed before it even began, and the opponent standing before him was the Waldeck family, one of the deadliest forces he could face. Normally this operation would have remained hidden for another 2 years. By that time, the drug reports would finally reach the Grand Duke, and Hugo would have fled the city. But Lucien's experience allowed him to see the situation before it spiraled out of control. Finally, Hugo forced a shaky response. He claimed it was a misunderstanding. Lucien's lips curled faintly as he repeated the words slowly, deliberately. What exactly is being misunderstood? Trembling, Hugo insisted. He was nothing more than a small-time shop owner, barely scraping by. He swore that dealing drugs made no sense, and that someone jealous of him must have spread a false rumor. If given the chance, he claimed, he would uncover the source himself. Lucian cut him off coldly. A false rumor, he said. His tone almost amused, just like the flower. Mill Run is supposedly a normal shop, and the underground passage beneath it is merely a secret escape route leading outside the castle. He leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving Hugo. This is the last question I will ask. What stage are you at right now? Hugo was completely stunned. Words failed him, sweat poured down his face, his body trembling. As the weight of Lucian's knowledge pressed down, the silence stretched thick with dread. While Lucian's calm, unyielding gaze left no room for pretense, at last Hugo collapsed back into his chair, his body trembling. For a fleeting moment his thoughts cleared. Lucian knew. He knew about the fake shop and the secret passage. Excuses were meaningless now. A dangerous thought flickered in Hugo's mind. Should I kill him? The servants sensed the shift in the air. One by one they suddenly moved hands, inching toward their weapons. After all, a noble without guards could be struck down in the middle of a conversation. Before Hugo could act, Lucian's voice cut through the tension, cold and sharp. Think carefully before making a foolish move. The chip in this gamble is your own life. Hans trembled behind Lucian, fear etched clearly across his face. Hugo's clenched fists loosened slowly. Lucian's words reminded him of how far he had worked to climb to this position. What kind of stupid thought was that? He scolded himself internally. Attacking a successor of the Waldeck family would be no different than begging for death. His mind raced as he imagined the consequences. If he were caught, the punishment would be far worse than a quick death. Slowly Hugo closed his eyes and exhaled. He chose survival, lowering his head. He begged Lucian to spare him. There must be a reason Lucian had come personally, instead of ordering his execution. Otherwise, his head would already be rolling across the floor. Desperation overtook him. If you tell me to be a dog, he said, voice trembling, I will be a dog. If you order me to bark, I will bark. If you order me to crawl, I will crawl. The moment he spoke, all the servants dropped to their knees, pleading for mercy. Lucian remained silent for a heartbeat, then slowly stood. A dog to keep around wasn't such a bad idea. He just needed hands and feet he could trust. Relief surged through Hugo's body. He repeatedly thanked Lucian, swearing he would obey any order without hesitation. Lucian stepped closer, then abruptly stopped. Simply being a hunting dog sounds boring, he said thoughtfully. Hugo wasn't the type to be satisfied with that forever. He placed a hand on Hugo's shoulder and asked a single, unexpected question. Do you want to try becoming a knight? Hugo's eyes widened. The room fell silent for a moment, all attention fixed on him. Becoming a knight had once been his dream. Something he had pursued obsessively, but reality had crushed it. No matter how skilled he became, he had always been risking his life for a master, reduced to a disposable tool for nobles. His low birth seemed an unchangeable barrier. Do I want to become a knight? Hugo pressed his forehead to the floor. If given the chance, he said, voice full of raw desperation, I would even sell my soul. Please tell me it's possible. Lucian answered without hesitation, I swear on the honor of the Waldeck family. If you hold integrity and honor, and do not shame yourself in the future, then mere status will never be a stumbling block. He leaned closer, voice soft but commanding. One final question. Do you want to live as a person, not as a tool? Hope, something Hugo had not felt in years, filled his chest. A few days later, inside the palace, the servants gathered. Tense and curious, Lucian appeared at the front, sitting casually with one leg resting on the table. Hans and Hugo stood behind him. Lucian turned his gaze towards Hugo and said, calm yet commanding, introduce yourself. Hugo stiffened slightly, clasping his hands behind his back. He stepped forward and introduced himself in a calm, measured tone. I am Hugo, he said, and I will be assisting the Lord from today. A sharp, restrained smile formed on his face, like a hunter quietly assessing his surroundings. I look forward to working with everyone, he added sometime later. Inside the palace, Lucian sat calmly at the center of the room while the servants formed a semicircle around him. He clapped his hands lightly. Now that introductions are finished, he said, his voice even. Bring the head maid in. One of the servants hesitated. Why summon the head maid so suddenly? He asked. Lucian swung a finger casually. The head maid needs to greet me, he said. His mind drifted briefly to the previous day, recalling how she had scolded him without restraint. We cannot allow such behavior again, he added silently. The servants would need to report properly first. No matter how busy she was, Lucian observed their reactions with quiet interest. As expected, the servants were uneasy. The one who had questioned him looked around nervously. Everyone, don't do anything rash, he muttered. Another quickly agreed, adding, we don't want to get dragged into trouble. Lucian realized then that their fear had reached a point where words alone would not sway them. To their eyes he must seem like a weak, expendable figure, a rotten rope barely worth holding onto. If that was their perception, he would make sure they understood otherwise. A servant stepped forward from the middle of the room, speaking cautiously. Please, Lord Lucian, consider our situation. Lord Geordie pays special attention to the head maid. What authority do mere servants like us possibly have? As soon as he finished, others immediately chimed it in. They nodded and murmured agreement, pleading with Lucian to be understanding. Why fan the flames deliberately? They asked. We only wish to leave quietly as before. The overlapping voices grew louder. Hans could no longer contain his frustration. He clenched his teeth, his voice rising. Get a grip, he shouted, his eyes glinting with suppressed anger. The master of this palace is Lord Lucian, not the second master, Lord Geordie. Hugo watched the entire scene quietly from the side, a faint smile playing on his lips. He stepped forward and calmly addressed Hans. Leave this matter to me, he said. Then he turned to the servants, his tone sharp and controlled. Sharp words are wasted on people like you. You are not the type who would listen. Turning back to Lucian, Hugo added, I have already identified what needs to be done. Lucian raised an eyebrow, mild curiosity flickering across his face. You already have an idea? Hugo's expression turned cold. Dealing with people who do not know their place is simple. Loyalty can be drilled into them, though the process may be a little rough. May I have your permission? The servants' faces turned pale as the weight of Hugo's words settled over them. Lucian listened quietly, then allowed a faint smile to form. Hugo really is quick thinking. He thought that was precisely why he had recruited him. Luck had also favored them. Hugo had been caught early. While the drug operation was still in its nascent stage, if it had progressed further, even Lucian might not have been able to intervene. Placing a hand on Hugo's shoulder, Lucian granted his permission. This was exactly what he had wanted. With a faint, satisfied smile, he observed as Hugo prepared to act. A villainous smile curled on Lucian's lips as he spoke. Hugo, do not worry. Give him a proper show. Hugo answered calmly, his tone steady and controlled. I will follow your command. A chill ran down the spines of the servants. They watched frozen as Hugo walked toward the servant standing in the middle of the room. Up close, the servant realized the sheer weight of Hugo's presence. Standing before him felt like an ant facing a towering wall. He forced himself to calm down. After all, Hugo was just an outsider, a newly recruited subordinate. Gritting his teeth, the servant finally spoke. Do not step forward without understanding the situation. He warned, if you want to survive, choose the right side. Hugo's cold gaze fell on him. Do you have any idea, he asked softly, how cruel the people backing you truly are? The servant scoffed, trying to mask his fear. Surely you're not foolish enough to risk your life for a few coins. Hugo clenched his fist. Those are truly pathetic last words, he murmured. The servant frowned, confused. What? Before he could finish, Hugo struck. The punch landed with brutal precision. The servant flew across the hall, crashing to the ground with a sickening thud. His face immediately swelled and distorted, and consciousness slipped away from him like water through fingers. The hall fell into stunned silence. Hans froze, color draining from his face. The other servants instinctively recoiled as Hugo calmly walked past the fallen body. Finally, one servant shouted, voice trembling with fear and anger, this has gone too far. Violence like this is unacceptable. Even if the young master brought Hugo here, he does not have the right to act this way. Hugo turned slowly, his gaze heavy and irritated. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and lethal. I have more than enough authority to act. My specialty is educating crazy bastards who do not know their place. The servants instinctively stepped back, shrinking from his presence. Moments later, heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. Before anyone could react, the large doors at the far end were thrown open. Two servants dragged someone inside. It was the head maid. She struggled violently, shouting, let me go. Do you think you can get away with this? One of the servants snapped sharply. Shut your mouth and follow quietly. If you still cannot understand, then you truly are foolish. Fury lit her eyes, and she turned sharply toward him. But the moment she looked inside the hall, her words died in her throat. Servants knelt on both sides of the room, bruised, trembling, and utterly subdued. Lucian stood near the window, his back to the room, calmly gazing outside. As if nothing unusual had occurred, a servant hurriedly spoke. As instructed, we have brought the head maid. Lucian slowly turned, his expression composed, a faint smile touching his lips. She is finally here, he said. His tone was light, almost casual. I merely asked the servants to bring her over, though it seems they became a little too enthusiastic. Shock quickly turned to fury. The head maid's eyes blazed. What is the meaning of this? Do you think you can get away with such behavior? She forcefully freed one arm, raising it threateningly. Lord Geordie will never allow this. The tone stays controlled, cold, and cinematic. I stand. The head maid straightened her posture, forcing herself to appear composed. If you stop now, she said sharply, I will make sure today's incident ends here. Lucian smiled, completely unbothered. Whoever said anything about ending this? He replied calmly. He reached over to the table and picked up a whip, gripping it firmly with both hands. The leather creaked softly as he lifted it. This, Lucian said evenly, is only the beginning. The moment the head maid saw the whip, her confidence shattered. The color drained from her face. Her lips trembled as she hurriedly spoke, her voice cracking. You can say whatever you want. I take back what I said earlier. Lucian's smile vanished. In its place was a cold, emotionless gaze, devoid of hesitation, devoid of mercy. Today, he said quietly, each word cutting deep. You will die right here just then. A single word echoes through the space: execution. It is not spoken lightly. It is a method one used since ancient times. Demonstrative punishment meant to warn others, efficient, brutal, unforgettable. Execution has justification. It has a clearly defined target, and most importantly, it leaves a lasting impression. That alone is enough. At the same moment, Lucian begins walking forward, straight toward Jenny. Instinctively, she steps back, the two lock eyes, standing face to face in complete silence. An eerie calm settles between them, heavy and unnatural. The air feels frozen, as if even breathing would disturb the moment. Yet despite that outward calm, the tension on Jenny's face is unmistakable. Her lips part and she speaks once more, even without changing the entire structure. With this I can inform the Grand Duke that the weak and trashy third prince no longer exists. Lucian doesn't reply. Instead, he lifts a hand and gestures calmly. A servant is summoned to his side. The meaning of the order is immediately clear. He wants Jenny to be taught properly how one should stand before their master. Without hesitation, the guards move. They seize Jenny and force her down. Her knees hit the floor with a dull thud, the pressure unrelenting as they hold her in place. Still, even now, Jenny does not panic. She speaks. Young master, you should think this through carefully. You said you would kill me, but if you harm me even a little, do you really think Lord Geordie will stay quiet? Her voice is low, calm, almost indifferent. There is no fear in it. Then she continues slowly, deliberately. Moreover, my mother is Lord Geordie's wet nurse. I am that wet nurse's child, so technically I am a sibling. The words hang in the air, heavy, dangerous. A single sentence that dares the entire room to move forward. After listening to her words, Lucian finally responds. Is that all you have to say? You really say the same thing, even in your final moments? As he speaks, the temperature of his voice drops sharply. The coldness in his tone is unmistakable. If you keep bringing up your brother while you're dying, isn't that just pathetic? If you have anything else to say, say it now. Hearing Miss Jenny freezes. Her confidence shatters instantly. Her eyes widen and her expression changes completely, panic flashing across her face. So as I said, Lord Geordie. Before she can finish, Lucian steps closer. The distance between them shrinks until his presence alone feels suffocating. Do you know, he says quietly, it seems you have seriously misunderstood this. He continues, his voice steady and merciless. I have more than enough reasons to kill you. Crimes such as insulting a noble, neglecting your duties, incitement, embezzlement, and more. His gaze sharpens, cutting straight through her. But you seem to have forgotten your place. Just because you were raised by the same wet nurse. He leans slightly forward. Do you really think the Geordie you keep babbling about and save you? His voice turns colder still. At most he would beat me a few times, and that would be the end of it. With a cruel calm that sends a chill through the room, Lucian adds, or even worse for you. The words stop there, but the silence that follows is far more terrifying than any threat. If father steps in, he won't even be able to do that. Lucian pauses for a fraction of a second, then or rather, father might even reward me. As he speaks, his expression shifts little by little. Whatever warmth remained drains away, replaced by something colder, something utterly ruthless. But he doesn't stop. For properly dealing with a troublesome person, his eyes lock onto Jenny. Geordie is just one of the heirs, just like the person standing before me. His voice grows heavier with each word. I already gave you a chance, but you're the one who chose this end. By now Jenny's hands are trembling uncontrollably. Fear surges up from deep inside her chest, overwhelming everything else. Her breathing becomes erratic as panic finally breaks through. I was wrong, young master. She cries out desperately. Please forgive me. Lucian does not answer. He does not hesitate. He remains perfectly calm. Then suddenly his energy surges. In the next instant he attacks. Blame your own bad luck. The strike lands. Blood spills, far too much of it, splattering across the floor as Jenny's body goes limp. The silence that follows is absolute. The scene shifts outside the residence. Chaos erupts as Prince Geordie charges forward, sprinting toward Lucian's estate. With his knights close behind him, his breath is ragged as he shouts, "This can't be happening." His mind races. Just a few days ago he was the one who backed down, the one who endured humiliation at Jenny's hands. And now he's suddenly acting insane, declaring that he'll kill me. Geordie clenches his teeth as dread coils tighter around his heart. Something has changed and he's already too late to stop it. Geordie continues thinking as he runs, that's not the only strange thing. Just in case something like this happened, I had servants posted at the separate estate where Lucian resides. His breathing grows heavier. Those servants should have stopped Lucian, but if things have turned out like this, then that can only mean he has reached the door of the room. His body is exhausted, sweat running down his face, his legs trembling from the sprint, and at the same time, realization strikes him like a blade. He has taken control of the servants. Before he can react further, one of the knights steps forward. Young master, that report must be wrong. Perhaps you should calm down for a moment. Another knight quickly adds, "That's right, a person like him would never lay a hand on anyone." A third knight speaks, trying to reassure him. Besides, he's afraid of Lord Geordie. Geordie exhales sharply. "Right, just as I thought. It must be wrong." But even as he says those words, anger turns violently inside him, and then a scream, sharp, piercing, filled with agony. It echoes clearly from inside the room. Geordie's expression freezes. In that instant, he understands exactly what has happened to Jenny. The scene shifts inside the room. Blood drips slowly to the ground. Drop by drop, we see the hunter, the same one from before, his body soaked, blood trailing down and pooling beneath him. At the same time, Hugo is gripping Jenny tightly, restraining her with overwhelming force. She struggles weakly, but it's useless. Despite witnessing all of this, Lucien shows no reaction, none at all. His expression doesn't change, his breathing remains steady. To him, the scene unfolding before his eyes makes absolutely no difference. He stands there calmly, cold and unmoving, like an executioner who has already passed judgment, and in that moment it becomes clear. Whatever fear Lucien once had is gone. Only control remains. Seeing everything unfold before his eyes, Druid finally snaps. Rage explodes from him as he shouts, "What the hell are you doing?" Lucien turns his head slightly, his expression calm, almost bored. "What brings my esteemed brother here?" He replies coolly, "Sorry, I'm busy right now, please come back later then." His voice hardens. "Today, I will tear out the root of this rebellion." Without hesitation, he gives another order. "Hugo, put her back on her feet." Hugo answers instantly, "Yes, master." At the same time, Geordie turns sharply toward his knights, his voice shaking with fury. "Oliver Kerr, save Jenny right now." "Yes." The two knights respond at once and rush forward, charging straight toward Lucien, intent on freeing her. But before they can take another step, Lucien speaks again, his voice icy. "Merciless, if anyone comes within 3 feet of us, slash her throat." The words caught through the air like a blade. Jenny freezes. Terror overwhelms her completely, her body stiffening as fear grips her throat. Lucien continues, his tone calm and unwavering. "I will take full responsibility." The moment those words leave his mouth, both knights halt abruptly. They stop at the exact same spot. Confusion twists across their faces. They cannot tell whether to advance or stay still, because they cannot disobey their master's command. On the other side, Hugo speaks in a low, dark voice, cold enough to send chills through the room. "There will be no chance for her to survive in any way. Leave it to me." As he speaks, the knife is already pressed firmly against Jenny's throat. One wrong move, and it will all be over. Jenny, who has already been beaten badly, becomes even more terrified. Fear completely overwhelms her. Her body trembles as she slightly turns her head backward. Tears stream down her face, and in a weak, broken voice she cries, "Lord Geordie!" The sight ignites Geordie's fury. His voice erupts, filled with uncontrollable rage. "How dare you do this? Your head won't be the only one. Your entire family will be executed and hung from the city walls." Hugo does not flinch. He replies calmly, his tone steady and emotionless. "That will never happen." The words hit Geordie like a blow. His eyes widen in shock. "What did you just say?" Hugo answers without hesitation, "My master is Lord Lucien. Any order not given by my master means nothing to me." He continues, his resolve unshakable. "Whatever happens from here on, if it is my master's order, carrying it out is my duty." As Hugo speaks, his expression remains firm and unwavering like iron. Seeing this, Geordie's hands begin to tremble violently. Rage floods through him, so intense it nearly robs him of reason. Grinding his teeth, he roars, "Lucien, what did Jenny do to deserve being treated like this?" Lucien responds coldly, still holding his hunter in his hand. "She insulted her superior, defied orders, and interfered with financial matters." His voice remains flat. "I merely gave her the punishment she deserved." Then he glares at Geordie, fury blazing in his eyes. "Don't you understand the difference between duty and personal emotion?" Those words only fuel Geordie's anger further. His chest heaves, his body shaking with rage. Yet despite everything, he can do nothing at all, and that helplessness burns worse than any wound. That moment of voiceover informs us of the situation. Here's how the line of succession in House Waldeck currently stands. First in line is the young master, Tristan Waldeck. Between the two brothers, a firmly entrenched bipolar rivalry has already taken shape. In other words, until the day Geordie makes his decisive move, the balance of power will remain unstable. For now, the most crucial task before him was clear: to further strengthen and secure his own faction. However, his reputation has just taken a devastating blow. He has been publicly humiliated by Lucien, the brother he once considered a non-threat. But the loss of his loyal knight, Sir Hunter Percariority, clenches his jaw. If this time he fails to protect Jenny, who is like his own hands and feet, his position will be threatened. It would inevitably become a turning point, one where distrust would begin to spread among those who follow him. He tightens his fist in frustration. In short, it was a complete checkmate. He was utterly cornered, left with no other choice. Geordie is forced to yield from a distance. He surrenders and shouts, "You win." Let her go. Upon hearing the surrender, One of Lucian's men smiles smugly, while Geordie's followers are left stunned. The young servant by Geordie's side cannot hide his shock and despair at seeing his master admit defeat. The reason for his surrender is Jenny, Geordie's loyal mate Hugo. Lucian's kidnapper is holding her hostage, pressing a dagger to her neck as she cries in terror. Lucian, the mastermind behind his humiliation, walks away with an air of superiority. With a malicious smile he mocks Geordie's surrender. That's not even funny. You really intend to sweep this under the rug? With a single word he continues his accusations, referring to the alleged crime he claims Jenny committed. After plundering another person's precious livelihood, Lucian's eyes gleam with contempt as he scoffs at his brother's words. You think your tongue is painted with gold, noble? With biting sarcasm Lucian turns to Geordie. Fainting innocence, what are you talking about? Brother winning. Geordie grits his teeth in rage as Lucian continues his farce. I simply fulfilled my duties as the third young master. Besides, embezzlement is a crime no one can escape from. Regardless of status, Lucian stomps his foot, reaffirming his authority in the hall. If we were to cover this up and move on, what would everyone think? Looking at his defeated brother, Lucian pretends to speak with passion. Since my respected brother begs so fervently, I too would like to leave this matter here. But a sinister smile spreads across his face, revealing his true intentions. With an expression of false regret, he delivers the final blow. Unfortunately, I lack the justification to do so. Geordie clenches his fist so tightly that his knuckles turn white, his suppressed fury on the verge of exploding. Unable to endure the humiliation any longer, he finally demands to know Lucian's price. Stop beating around the bush and speak plainly. What do you want? Before revealing his exorbitant demand, Lucian first hints at the physical punishment awaiting Jenny, displaying a whip. Since ancient times, he says coldly, those who laid their hands on the property of others have generally received punishments like this. Jenny trembles in terror upon hearing Lucian's demand to return several times the amount supposedly stolen as compensation. Upon hearing such an outrageous price, Geordie clenches his teeth in powerless fury. Completely humiliated, with a triumphant smile and surrounded by a shower of gold coins, Lucian mocks his brother. Brother, what price did you have in mind? The scene shifts to the majestic palace of the Grand Duke, the center of power of the Valda family. Inside an opulent study, the man who governs the house, the Grand Duke Baldec, waits with a stern and calculating gaze. The Grand Duke, father of Lucian and Geordie, observes the events unfolding within his domain from the shadows of authority. Later, the chief butler, Edwin, appears before the Grand Duke to deliver his report, and thus the incident was resolved in that manner. The Grand Duke reviews the written report with an unreadable expression, fixing his loyal servant with a piercing gaze. He asks, is this report accurate? Chief Butler Edwin responds with a respectful bow, confirming the truth of the matter. I have personally verified it. Edwin proceeds to detail the humiliating outcome. For the second son, Master Geordie paid young Master Lucian 10 times the amount involved as compensation. He also adds information about Lucian's swift actions, and young Master Lucian has recruited an outsider known as Hugo to swiftly eliminate the spies planted in his annex. The Grand Duke listens as the report concludes. As a result of Lucian's actions, his annex is now more heavily guarded than any other area. The Grand Duke turns his gaze toward the window. Seeing Lucian's reflection overlapping with his own, he reflects on the bold maneuvers of his youngest son, his expression thoughtful as he evaluates the sudden shift in the family's power dynamics. Having heard the full report, the Grand Duke makes a decision and orders that his son be summoned. Bring him in. The doors open and Lucian enters the lion's den, presenting himself before his father. The Grand Duke turns to face him, his expression a mask of authority and scrutiny. Lucian stands in a vast study. The tension between father and son thick in the air. Lucian senses that something has changed. What is this, he thinks to himself. His father's gaze feels different than before. For the first time, his father is truly looking at him as a player. The Grand Duke speaks first, his voice resonating with authority. You've caused quite a stir recently. Lucian unfazed. Lucian replies calmly, it was nothing extraordinary. I merely disciplined servants who failed to recognize their own master. The Duke places a hand on his desk, his gaze hardening. However, as a result, you disgraced your brother. Then he issues a direct challenge. You will not forget this for a long time. Can you bear the consequences? From across the room, Lucian's reply is as cold as steel, revealing unwavering confidence. No, there is nothing to handle. Lucian justifies his actions with cold logic and unwavering confidence. It was simply a matter of setting the hierarchy in order straight. With a defiant smile, he frames his ambition as duty. If I were to avoid such obvious responsibilities out of fear of retaliation, how could I dare to claim the name of Val? The Grand Duke listens in silence to his son's bold declaration. I merely made a decision that would not bring shame to our name. A faint smile appears on the Duke's face, perhaps impressed, perhaps amused by the audacity of his youngest son. He then lays out the rules of the game for the War of Succession, revealing the family's crest. If Geordie continues to provoke you, You are free to strike back. With these words, the Grand Duke grants Lucian official permission to fight for his place. However, this freedom comes with a harsh condition. Lucian listens carefully as his father continues. I warn you, however, if the conflict escalates too far and damages the family, I will side with Jordy. Regardless of who is right or wrong, Lucian is visibly taken aback by such an unfair and biased condition. He blurted out in disbelief, attempting to question his father's logic. As he extends a hand, Father, what the hell? The Grand Duke cuts him off, his expression almost mocking. Why are you so surprised? He explains his reasoning, presenting an image of Jordy actively contributing to the family. Although Jordy has a reckless side, his contributions to the family over the years have been substantial. He then sharply contrasts this with Lucian's past, showing the image of his former weak and idle self. Unlike you who spent an entire year loafing around, he concludes his point with cold logic. As the head of the family, choosing the one who has contributed is the natural choice, is it not? Lucian remains silent for a moment, processing his father's ultimatum. Then a cunning smile slowly forms on his lips as he grasps the true meaning behind those words. He reinterprets his father's order not as a restriction, but as a challenge. If I'm not mistaken, that sounds like an instruction to trample my brother and rise above him. His father seems to confirm this interpretation when he tells him, build your strength and become an asset to the family. With those words, his counsel comes to an end. Then you will know the answer to your question. The message is clear: prove your worth. Lucian's sharp intellect quickly processes the situation. He's deliberately amplifying the sense of crisis to push me forward. He also deduces the deeper implications of his father's ultimatum. If he's stating it so definitively, that must mean the structure of the succession will be decided soon. A smile of pure confidence spreads across his face. He understands his father's game perfectly. That's why he wants me to hurry and seize the opportunity before I lose it. Lucian finds amusement in his father's manipulative methods, wondering to himself, by the way, are all fathers usually like this? With an ironic smile, he pulls a document from inside his jacket, thinking, well, since he cares so deeply about his son, I'll have to live up to his expectations. Drawing his father's attention once more, he says, by the way, Father. The Grand Duke startles, not expecting Lucian to have anything more to add. Lucian boldly places the document on his father's desk. What if I've already prepared my move? Then, with a triumphant smile, he adds, in a very big one. Sigma. Lucian snatched the paper from his son's hands. Without warning, the moment his fingers closed around it, he crushed it into a ball and tore it to pieces. The fragments fell to the floor like snuff. But the atmosphere in the room only grew heavier. An overwhelming authority radiated from him as he demanded to know whether the report was truly accurate. If this was nothing more than an overzealous and foolish attempt to play at public service, then Lucian was to admit it at once. Sigmund's voice was calm, yet every word carried the weight of command, the kind that allowed no lies to survive. In its presence, Lucian did not waver. He met his father's gaze and replied evenly that there was not a single falsehood in the report. Acting under the guidance of the writer Lauren, the investigation had already advanced far beyond its early stages. Several insiders involved in the distribution of drugs had been secured, and the evidence they provided was solid enough to be verified immediately. At that instant, a vast blue aura exploded from Sigmund's body, flooding the room with crushing pressure. Lucian's instincts reacted before his mind could. His body stiffened, his muscles tightening as if caught beneath a mountain. Sigmund's expression darkened, his eyes sharpening into something like a death glare. The name Bernhard rose in his thoughts. The shameless son of a marquis. Fury surged through him as he reflected on the audacity of allowing such filth to defile the lands of Wald. The pressure only intensified. Sweat streamed down Lucian's face as his breathing grew labored, each breath feeling heavier than the last. He recognized the sensation immediately. This was not mere anger, it was a test, the same invisible weight borne by those who guarded the empire, the force wielded by the sword of the Wald family, and the overwhelming presence of its master. Lucian knew that if this continued much longer, he might collapse still. He forced his racing heart to settle and asked for permission to make one final point. Sigmund paused, studied him, and gave a brief nod, allowing him to speak. Lucian explained that even if the truth were reported to His Majesty, Marquis Logan would simply cut off all loose ends and escape responsibility. Every illegal act had been carried out through the upper layers of the organization, leaving no direct evidence that could be traced back to him. Even if the imperial authority attempted to dig deeper by force, the Emperor's concern over factional conflict would inevitably lead to arbitration instead of decisive punishment. In the end, the Waldic family's heinous crimes would result in nothing more than a financial loss. Lucian stated calmly that losing money alone was far from sufficient. Such a crime demanded a far greater price. Silence filled the room. Sigmund observed his son closely, genuinely surprised by the sharpness of his insight. He wondered when Lucian had grown so capable of reading the flow of power and consequence After a brief pause, he asked Lucian to explain what he had in mind. Lucian revealed that he had already secured a way to prevent the enemy from escaping. Earlier, an insider had surrendered to him. Though the man possessed a noble title, he was deeply trusted by Logan and had risen to an executive position within their ranks at that. Sigmund recalled the head butler's earlier report about Lucian recruiting a man named Hugo from outside. Understanding dawned on him. This Hugo must have been the insider Lucian was referring to. As the pieces fell into place, Sigmund realized that the current situation matched the third scenario he had once anticipated, a path he had hoped would never need to be taken, yet one that now seemed inevitable. Lucian's plan had been anticipated. He intended to use the traitor as bait and turn the situation into a reverse trap. From Logan's perspective, it would be inconceivable that the very executive in charge of the drug operations would ever betray them. Lucian had carefully arranged every detail so that the negotiation plan appeared to be progressing smoothly, without the slightest hint of danger. It would only be a matter of time before Logan's core figures were forced to step into the open themselves. Sigmund admitted that such a strategy could not be dismissed lightly, yet he immediately pointed out its greatest weakness. The entire plan rested on a single variable. It depended completely on a man from the back alley. Human nature, Sigmund said, could never be fully trusted. A person like that would always be unreliable, and walking even one step alongside such a man was dangerous. Lucian fell silent for a moment, then calmly replied that he was not trusting the man himself, but the man's desire. That desire was a burning ambition to become a knight and to spread his name across the empire, carving his existence into history. Sigmund was struck by the familiarity of those words. They were old, almost forgotten, something he himself had once believed in. Lucian explained that such a dream was the kind any man could cling to obsessively. He chose to believe in that dream just as he had in his previous life. Sigmund found the reasoning sentimental yet sincere. It explained why Lucian was willing to stake so much on this gamble. Sigmund then asked what Lucian would do if everything were to fail. Lucian answered without hesitation. He had no intention of escaping responsibility. Any mistake would be his alone to bear. He was prepared to pay the price himself, even if it meant placing his own title on the line. Hearing this, Sigmund gave his decision. Once Lucian's body had fully recovered, he was to report to the training ground. Lucian accepted the order at once, and Sigmund revealed what would follow. He would personally teach Lucian the lion's heart sword. With those words, Lucian was formally acknowledged as one of the candidates to become the next head of the household. Night fell quietly over the estate. Sigmund stood alone in his chamber reading. Beside the window was pale moonlight spilled across the floor and illuminated the room's corner. The head butler entered softly and bowed in deep shame. He lamented that such disgraceful acts had taken place in Melheim, the very heart of the Waldeck family. Under their watch, Sigmund stopped him at once and took responsibility upon himself. He admitted that he had ordered the butler to focus entirely on border affairs, and that this had weakened their internal defenses. The fact that the third son had discovered the truth first was nothing but luck. Bernhard's scheme had been carefully constructed to avoid detection. The head butler added that Bernhard's true aim was not profit or territorial expansion, but to stain his master's honor. Sigmund agreed. He believed that Bernhard intended to use this incident later as leverage when dealing with them, turning disgrace itself into a weapon. Sigmund believed that Bernhard ultimately intended to use this incident as leverage when dealing with His Majesty. He reflected on how the Marquis, blinded by fear for his own safety, had lost sight of the true reality of the Empire. Then Sigmund turned the conversation to Hugo, the man now standing beside his third son. The head butler explained that on the surface, Hugo was known as a gangster who ran a gambling house. In truth, he was the leader of a newly formed organization that had already shaken the underworld. He was now a man who would easily bend his knee to serve another. In fact, the head butler himself had personally gone to meet Hugo and formally welcomed him as a subordinate. He could not hide his admiration as he praised the astonishing growth of the young master. Sigmund repeated the word growth quietly, as if tasting it. His thoughts turned to Hugo. In a world where cunning and cruelty rule, a man like Hugo would never have survived if he relied on empty promises. Someone so sharp and ruthless would have been trampled long ago if he lacked true judgment. Hugo had seen Lucian's potential, and within him recognized the image of a lord worth risking one's life for. That realization alone spoke volumes about Lucian's worth. Sigmund then informed the head butler that, although it was earlier than he had planned, he intended to open the path for his third child. Lucian had already demonstrated abilities that could no longer be ignored. The head butler immediately understood the weight of those words. This was not merely praise. It was a declaration that would reshape the future of the household. Sigmund followed by stating that he would begin passing down the family's vision. Starting the very next day, the head butler smiled in quiet approval, saying it was a proper and decisive choice. He then asked whether Sigma had already chosen a swordsman instructor for the young master. Sigmund replied that Lord Ison was to be summoned. The head butler stiffened in shock at the name. Sigmund remarked that it would be a pity to let such a fine horn break with old age, and that this opportunity would surely become a meaningful chapter in Lord Ison's life as well. After hearing the news that Lucian had officially become a successor candidate, Han completely lost control of himself. Laughter burst out of him, even as tears streamed down his face, the two emotions mixing chaotically as if his heart could not decide how to react. Overwhelmed by the revelation, he kept shaking his head, repeating again and again that what he had just heard could not possibly be a joke. Each time he spoke, he emphasized the same point, as if trying to convince himself more than anyone else that Lucian had truly become an official successor candidate. His strength finally gave out, and his hands slipped from his knees as he collapsed onto the ground, sitting there openly crying without any attempt to hide it. Lucian, clearly irritated by the overreaction, tried to stop him with a firm tone. He repeated that he had already confirmed the matter multiple times and demanded to know exactly how many more affirmations it would take before Han finally believed him. It became obvious that the situation was spiraling further out of control. Lucian turned toward Hugo and told him to handle the kid. Hugo stepped forward immediately, lifted Han up with ease, and asked him to calm down, his voice respectful yet steady. He then explained that, given the young master's abilities, such an outcome was only natural. Looking ahead to the path Lucian would walk in the future, Hugo added it would not be fitting for a senior who served as his right-hand man to be shaken so deeply by this news. Those words hit Han like a sudden blow. He froze completely as the realization sank in. He had just been acknowledged as the right-hand man. The shock lingered for a moment before a visible smile slowly spread across his face, pride rising unmistakably within him. He brushed it off with exaggerated nonchalance, giving a casual shrug, as if the matter were nothing special. After a brief pause and a light gesture, he downplayed himself, admitting that, although he had served the young master the longest, he was still lacking in many areas. With someone as outstanding as Hugo around, he claimed, there was no way he could boldly assume such a position for himself. Hearing that, Hugo smiled calmly and remarked that Han remained as humble as ever, noting that it was exactly what one would expect from senior Han. Han returned a smile, then teased Hugo in response, asking why he kept saying things like that, and mockingly dubbing him the left-hand man. Junior Hugo, watching their exchange, Lucian smiled quietly to himself. Experienced hires really were different. He thought their composure, mutual understanding, and effortless balance stood apart from anything else. After that brief reflection, Lucian crossed his arms and addressed Han seriously. He said that what Hugo had mentioned earlier was not wrong. Before the matter was officially announced within the house, it was only reasonable to inform the two of them first, and the logic behind that decision was sound. As he spoke, Lucian glanced at Han, who looked visibly thrilled, unable to fully hide his excitement. Observing him closely, Lucian's thoughts became more analytical. Han was timid by nature, and his frailty could easily become a weakness. Yet at the same time, Lucian recognized that Han genuinely cared for him. More importantly, he possessed the grit to remain steadfastly by his side, even under harsh and unfavorable circumstances, a quality Lucian weighed with certainty. Lucian continued his silent assessment. If Han gained more experience, matured further, and became capable of managing internal affairs, he would eventually grow into a rear guard more reliable than anyone else. His gaze then shifted naturally to Hugo, and there was no hesitation in his thoughts. There was simply no room to doubt Hugo's ability. All that remained was to open a proper path for him, to help him become a knight. Only then could Hugo's talents be drawn out to their fullest, allowing him to serve Lucian directly as a powerful sword in the future. With that realization, Lucian reaffirmed his resolve. From this moment on, it was time to prioritize quality over quantity. One by one, he simply needed to build them up properly. With that thought settled, the scene shifted smoothly to the following morning. At the peaceful castle, warm sunlight streamed through the quiet halls, slipping past tall windows and reaching deep into the interior. Lucian stood alone, his eyes closed, his breathing calm as his thoughts drifted far away. Without realizing it, his mind returned to memories of his past life, memories of a time when he had scoured every corner of the continent in pursuit of a single goal. That pursuit had been the very essence of the ancestors' martial arts, a power said to elevate the realm of the sword itself. Those teachings centered around sword forms, structured paths of mastery that defined a swordsman's growth. Among them existed a realm that stood one step above the rest, known as advanced sword forms. Yet no matter how desperately he struggled, no matter how many hardships he endured, or how deeply he humbled himself, living like a dog just to survive, what he ultimately gained was far from what he sought. He had not obtained the advanced sword forms he longed for, nor had he even reached the intermediate sword forms, reserved for knight captains. Instead, the only thing he managed to acquire was a degraded version meant for apprentice knights. In truth, even learning sword forms at all was impossible without noble blood for a mere mercenary like him. Being granted the chance to learn any sword form was nothing short of miraculous. Even so, reality had been merciless. Those weaker than him continued to advance, learning higher-ranking sword forms simply because of their status, and one by one they surpassed him in battle. They overwhelmed him with techniques he could neither replicate nor counter. Each time he failed to protect his squad members. Because of that gap, the thirst for sword forms carved itself deeper into his heart. The craving never faded, it only grew sharper, more agonizing, until it became a constant torment. As those memories resurfaced, Lucian clenched his fist unconsciously, his knuckles tightening as if grasping something he once could never reach. Now, however, fate had placed an entirely different opportunity in his hands. Someone like him had been granted access to something that only the successor candidate of House Vale and their closest aides could ever hope to touch. It was an ancient sword form, a legacy that far surpassed even advanced sword forms themselves. The Lionheart Sword. Just the name carried an overwhelming weight. The sheer magnitude of that swordsmanship filled him with awe, and tension built within his body. Even though the training had yet to begin, the scheduled time to learn it was still some distance away, yet his excitement was already impossible to contain. Lucian let out a quiet, almost self-aware smile as he realized he had been pacing since dawn, unable to stay still because of his anticipation. Acknowledging his own restlessness, he decided it would be best to calm his mind before the lesson began. Slowly he sat down on the ground, crossing his legs as a gentle smile formed on his face. As he began circulating his energy, his thoughts turned reflective. In his past life, he had learned swordsmanship without any proper system. There had been no guidance, no foundation, only stolen techniques, fragments of knowledge gathered wherever he could survive long enough to take them. Because of that, he had never once had someone he could truly call a master. That realization did not bring bitterness. Instead, his smile deepened slightly. Living a second life, he understood, truly was something extraordinary. Unbeknownst to Lucian, he was not alone. From a distance hidden within the shadows, a figure observed his every movement with calm, unwavering focus. Time passed quietly before the watcher was revealed, Sir Eisen himself. A faint smile appeared on Eisen's face as he watched the young master sitting there in composed silence. Within his eyes was quiet approval, and within his thoughts a single reflection surfaced. A considerable amount of potential was already taking shape. Of time had already passed. Yet Lucian had not wavered even once. His posture remained steady, his breathing even, and there was not the slightest trace of hesitation or instability within him. As Sir Eisen continued to observe, he began to notice certain aspects that stood out. Subtle details in Lucian's composure and control that were impossible to ignore. These were qualities that deserved careful attention. Eisen found himself thinking that guiding Lucian would not only be meaningful but might also serve as a brief form of entertainment for him as well. Listening calmly at the time, Sigma had acknowledged that if the Duke himself had made such a request, then Lucian's talent could not be ordinary. However, Sigma had gone further in his thoughts, emphasizing that this matter went beyond simple talent alone. What had truly surprised him was Lucian's mindset. It was something entirely unexpected, something that could not be measured by skill or lineage. Sigma had believed that Eisen would understand the weight of those words the moment he saw Lucian with his own eyes. The narration then returned to the present. Once more the scene showed the great sword saying, Eisen Breitner, watching Lucian closely from afar. He continued to observe in silence, his sharp gaze never leaving the young man. Slowly a proud smile formed on his face. That expression reflected his recognition, not only of Lucian's talent, but of his unwavering resolve and extraordinary inner strength, qualities that could not be forged through training alone. A sword saying, an existence born only when one pushes circulation to its absolute limit, when body and mana are refined to their furthest edge. It was not merely a title, but a summit reached by those who had mastered every known sword form and carved their names into the peak of the blade's path. Across the Empire's long and blood-soaked history, such figures were spoken of with reverence, almost like gods among swordsmen. And now that very being stood before Lucian. For a brief moment Lucian forgot how to breathe. He remained rooted in place, eyes widened and lips slightly parted, as an immense presence sold over him. The pressure was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was not violent or suffocating, like the aura of a battlefield veteran. It was calm, vast, and boundless, like standing before an endless night sky, overwhelming yet tranquil. A legend stood within arm's reach. The man offered a gentle smile. With quiet dignity, he placed a hand over his chest and bowed. It has been some time, third young master. The last time we met was during His Grace's birthday celebration, several years ago. From today onward, I will be the one instructing you. My name is Eisen Breitner. Lucian's expression tightened. So this was him that morning. Hans had mentioned that his instructor would be a knight who had served the Voltic family since the previous generation, but he had left out the most important detail. This man was the Sword Saint. Lucian immediately mirrored the gesture, placing his hand over his chest and bowing deeply. It is an honor to receive instruction from the Sword Saint. I look forward to your guidance, I said, waved the hand lightly, a faint smile tugging at his lip. That title is nothing more than an undeserved name given to an old man besides. You are a successor candidate. You should not lower your head so easily. Lucian straightened at once, his posture composed and firm. I will not lower the dignity of my family, but that does not mean I should neglect proper respect, setting aside status and position. You are someone worthy of it. For a heartbeat, Aizen studied him in silence, and he let out a soft laugh. If you insist, then do as you feel comfortable. Young Master. Lucian inclined his head slightly. Thank you for your understanding. The warmth in Aizen's expression faded, replaced by sharp focus. Then let us begin the training immediately. Without hesitation, Lucian stepped forward. Yes, that sounds good. Aizen gestured toward the outdoor training grounds, sunlight spilling across the wide perimeter. Young Master, would you like to run around the perimeter? The moment the words left his mouth, Lucian dropped into a runner's stance, his body coiled and ready. Should I start right now? Aizen blinked, visibly caught off guard. Third Young Master. Please wait a moment. Lucian straightened, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Is something wrong? Aizen regarded him carefully. Do you not have any questions about why you are running? Or what purpose this exercise serves? Lucian offered a small easy smile. Of course I'm curious. But if you ordered it, then it must be necessary. There must be a reason. You felt no need to explain. He placed a hand over his chest, his voice steady with conviction. A student receiving instructions simply follows the master's words. That is enough for me. Aizen's gaze sharpened. This reaction, this clarity in his eyes, was completely different from the other young masters. There was no hesitation, no pride wounded by a simplicity, no demand for justification, only a pure longing for the sword itself. A faint smile curved across Aizen's lips as realization dawned. So this was what the Duke had meant. Very well, young master. Let us begin. The instant he finished speaking, Lucian launched forward like a bolt of lightning. Excitement surged through him as he ran, the wind tearing past his ears. From above, Aizen observed closely. Arms folded behind his back, Lucian's speed did not falter. If anything, it increased. With every lap, his strides grew lighter, more fluid, as if the ground itself were pushing him forward. Yet Lucian's thoughts remained sharp and deliberate. There was another reason he had obeyed without question. This run was not mere training. It was an evaluation, a test of his qualifications as a disciple. In his previous life as a mercenary captain, he had often used the same method. Assign a task that appears trivial, then judge the rookie's reaction, mindset, and resolve. He had already demonstrated his attitude. Only one thing remained to prove tenacity. He would run until he collapsed. An hour passed. Lucian's brows drew together slightly. Something was wrong. He had been running continuously, yet fatigue refused to come. Instead of exhaustion, strange lightness filled his body. Each breath felt effortless, each step weightless. His speed increased further, to the point that faint afterimages began trailing behind him like flickering shadows. This made no sense. He had done nothing to rebuild his body except consume mass-produced nectar. His only recent activity had been light walks. By all logic, he should have been drenched in sweat by now. From above, Aizen's expression gradually shifted. The run had been meant only to gauge Lucian's general condition. He had expected little in terms of raw physical ability, but not a single drop of sweat appeared on Lucian's skin. His breathing remained steady, calm as the surface of a still lake. Even Seasonite struggled to sustain mana output. At this intensity, concern flickered across Aizen's eyes. Could it be? Without delay, he descended to the training grounds. Stop in the run here. Lucian halted immediately, turning with clear confusion. Huh? Did something happen? Aizen stared at him, his gaze piercing. Third Young Master, I have one question. The method you used earlier this morning to calm your body and mind, was that circulation, not meditation? Lucian nodded. If you're referring to what I did in the indoor training hall, and yes, it was circulation. There is nothing better than clearing one's thoughts. Aizen froze. A thin sheen of sweat formed along his brow. So his suspicion had been correct. He stepped closer, voice firm but controlled. Forgive me, but I must examine your physical condition. Even if something feels strange, do not move. Placing a hand on Lucian's shoulder, Aizen carefully guided his manon into the young master's body. Slowly, meticulously, he traced the internal flow, following the pathways of circulation with the precision of a master craftsman inspecting a priceless blade. Moments passed in silence, and Aizen's eyes widened as Aizen had feared. His examination confirmed it. Lucian had already reached the very end of circulation, the absolute limit that most martial artists spent their entire lives chasing. But it did not stop there. What lay within Lucian was not merely the perfected state Aizen himself had once attained. It extended beyond it. The sensation overwhelmed him. It felt like standing before an endless ocean with no horizon in sight, or beneath a roaring waterfall whose torrent could swallow the world. The flow inside this child was not just complete, it was expanding, pushing outward into territory Aizen had never touched. Lu Xun was not walking a known road, he was opening an entirely new path. Sir Aizen held the third young master's hands and examined them in silence. His fingers pressed lightly along the veins, sensing the smooth and powerful flow beneath the skin. His sharp eyes narrowed as he processed what he felt. Then in a low voice he asked, since when this had been the case. The sudden question caught Lu Xun off guard. He had expected instruction, not doubt, before he could answer. Aizen asked again, more directly this time. What exactly had he reached the end of circulation? Lu Xun blinked. The end of circulation. He did not understand what Aizen meant and asked him to clarify. Aizen responded calmly, explaining that he had just examined his body. The purity of Lu Xun's mana was like fresh snow, spread across a winter field, untouched, clean, and flawless. The internal structure of his body allowed mana to move with perfect efficiency like a water wheel, turning without the slightest resistance. This was not ordinary talent. It was a level that only a handful of martial artists could reach after dedicating their entire lives to cultivation. Lu Xun kept his expression steady, but his thoughts shifted rapidly. He had always sensed that something about his circulation was unusual. From the beginning it had felt too smooth, too natural. Still, hearing it confirmed by a sword saint made his heart tighten. It was closer to perfection than he had imagined. If that was true, then hiding it served no purpose anymore. He too had questions about his condition. Unless someone stood at the level of a sword saint, no one could truly explain what was happening inside him. Lowering his head slightly, Lu Xun answered honestly. It had been about a month since he began circulation. From the very start, all his mana paths had been open. There had been no struggle, no resistance, no barriers to break through. Everything had flowed freely. Aizen's eyes widened, shock flickering across his face. Lu Xun continued explaining that he had heard how circulation usually brought pain and obstruction. Others described burning veins, blocked channels, and broken pathways, yet he had experienced none of it. His mana had moved smoothly from the beginning, almost naturally, as if his body had been waiting for it all along. Silence fell between them. Aizen's thoughts raced. Even he had required decades of hardship and discipline to reach such a state, yet this young man had achieved it within a single month. Perhaps the ancient swordsmen, who were said to split mountains and divide seas, were not mere legends after all. Perhaps such overwhelming talent truly existed. After a moment of visible hesitation, Mason spoke again. His voice carried weight, as though he understood the gravity of what he was about to say. He wished to ask something, even if it sounded disrespectful. And he posed the question, would Lu Xun be willing to give up the successor position of House Valdek? The world seemed to pause. Lu Xun's eyes widened. He had never expected those words. Above them the sky stretched bright and clear, and a gentle wind carried dry leaves across the courtyard stones. For a moment everything felt distant, muted. The request echoed in his ears. Give up the successor position. Confusion gave way to unease, and unease to fear. His voice tightened as he demanded to know what Sir Aizen meant. Aizen met Lu Xun's anxious gaze and understood the storm running through the young man's mind. Was there something wrong with his body? Was he incapable of learning proper sword forms? Would his mana eventually turn against him? Lu Xun's thoughts spiraled from one terrible possibility to the next, but Aizen's answer was steady, calm. It was the opposite. Lu Xun froze. The opposite. Aizen looked at him with firm, unwavering eyes and spoke clearly. Lu Xun's body was an ideal vessel. Not only could he draw out the full efficiency of both mana and flesh, but he also possessed the potential to surpass even that limit if he chose to devote himself entirely to the sword. Becoming the next sword saint would not be difficult for him. The words struck like lightning. A sword saint. Lu Xun lowered his gaze to his own hands, flexing his fingers slowly. Could he truly step into that realm? From the beginning, he had known this body was extraordinary. He had felt its balance, its natural strength, its flawless circulation. But this was beyond even his expectations. He had already considered himself fortunate to inherit the ancient sword form known as the Lionheart Sword. Through it he believed he had gained a path toward the height he once longed for. In his previous life that alone had felt like a miracle, yet now he was being told that he could reach something greater still. Not merely mastery, but the very pinnacle of the sword. But such a path would demand everything. Talent alone would not be enough. It would require undivided focus, a life without distraction or divided loyalties. Lu Xun lifted his head and met the old swordsman's eyes. His voice was quiet but steady, as he asked whether that was the reason for the choice. Because he could not walk both paths at once. The path of successor to House Valdek and the path of a sword saint. Aizen nodded without hesitation. That was correct. To be precise, it was because he did not have enough time, though circulation allowed him to stand tall and move with strength even at nearly 100 years of age. Aizen could not ignore the slow decay of his body. His power remained sharp, but time was merciless. If he wished to pass down everything he possessed while he still lived, the years remaining were already too few. Even if the third son focused solely on the sword, the schedule would be tight. Lucian's eyes widened faintly. 8 years, if his memories served him right, that was how long the Sword Saint had left before death claimed him. The truth settled heavily in his chest. There truly was not much time. Ideally, he should accept the offer. Devote himself completely to the blade. It was an opportunity he had yearned for across 2 lifetimes, to pursue the summit without restraint, to stand at the peak and carve his name into history. But the future, he remembered, was not shaped by strength alone. Coming years would descend into chaos. Nations would clash, alliances would fracture. Power would shift like sand beneath the storm. Those who survive would not simply be the strongest warriors. They would be those with legitimacy, names that commanded loyalty, positions that united armies, authority that others could rally behind. Martial might could win battles, but it could not control the storm by itself. This was the moment he had once dreamed of, to chase the ultimate peak of the sword, to live only for the blade. Yet dreams were not the only things that mattered. Lucian lowered his head respectfully and apologized to Aizen. He wished to remain of all that until the end. The offer was greater than his station, and he was deeply grateful for it, but he could not accept. His voice remained calm, though something tightened painfully inside him. As he spoke, Aizen studied him in silence for a long moment. Then he let out a soft sigh. "It is I who should feel ashamed," he murmured. "What did I do in my youth, that I now grow greedy in old age?" Through the third son, it seemed he had sought to leave something behind, proof that his sword would not vanish with time. Perhaps he had wanted to see his legacy carried forward by hands worthy of it. Lucian did not answer it immediately. The weight of Aizen's quiet regret lingered between them. Then carefully he asked a question. "If by any chance, there were another talented individual besides me, what would you do?" The scene shifted. Far from the quiet courtyard, under the blazing sun near a wide farmhouse field, a young noble rode at full speed across open land. The horse thundered forward, leaping cleanly over low wooden fences and weaving through scattered obstacles with precision. Dust rose in swirling clouds behind them. The rider's posture was confident and sharp, his control firm and practiced. Behind him, a heavy-set butler struggled to keep up on foot, his face flushed red as he shouted desperately into the wind. As he ran, news about the third son had been confirmed. The rider pulled sharply on the reins. Stopping the horse, he turned, disbelief clear on his face. So the ridiculous rumors were true. The fool had been recognized as a new successor candidate. This young noble was Joshua Valdick, the 4th son of House Valdick. He stepped down from a horse and wiped the sweat from his face with a towel. The butler, catching his breath, explained that it was exactly as the rumors claimed. The Archduke had officially included the third son in the line of succession. Not only that, he was under the direct guidance of Sir Aizen and had begun formal swordsmanship training. Joshua's expression darkened. From beginning to end, Lucian had been a stumbling block. It was already difficult to build a support phase while being overshadowed by 2 older brothers. Every ally had to be earned carefully. Every neutral faction required persuasion. Now there was another option for them to consider. His anger flared. He threw the towel aside in frustration. Could Lucian not simply remain hidden in the corner of his room? As before, would it truly have killed him to stay useless and quiet? The butler nervously urged him to mind his words. That only made Joshua angrier. How could he possibly remain calm? What if the fragile loyalty he had barely gathered began to waver? Political support was like glass. Once cracked, it could never fully return to its original state. Even calling Lucian brother made his blood boil. They were only months apart in age, yet now that insignificant difference carried weight. Joshua forced himself to breathe. Rage alone would solve nothing. He bit lightly on his nail, thinking he could not sit still. There had to be a way. Then an idea formed. His eyes sharpened. Since Lucian had begun learning the sword, he would soon need a sparring partner. That was only natural. Josh, he would turn to the butler and ordered him to prepare 2 sharp swords, not wooden practice blades, but real weapons, live steel, meant for true combat. A butler froze in shock. Joshua's lips curved into a thin, controlled smile. He only needed to teach his dear brother one simple lesson: hair to sharp swords, not wooden practice blades, but real weapons, live steel, meant for true combat. A butler froze in shock. Joshua's lips curved into a thin, controlled smile. He only needed to teach his dear brother one simple lesson. Scene shifts to Lucian in a sword saint. Lucian looks at him calmly and asks, "What would you do if someone with genuine talent appeared? Besides me, I mean. It may take some time to find him, but he is the kind of person who can make up for that delay. A man with the talent to leave a scar on Sword Saint Aizen. Even 100 years from now." Hearing those words, the Sword Saint smiles faintly. Then he speaks in a gentle, almost weary tone. "My heart feels heavy, as if I am leaving a burden upon you. Young master, I am already quite happy that you think so fondly of this old man. So please do not trouble yourself with such matters any longer." "Thank you for your kind words, young master." After listening to him, Lucian quietly responds, "Sir Aizen." Yet, in his heart his thoughts run deeper. As I expected, he must think it is all nonsense. Even a famous swordsman would not easily catch his eye, so it is only natural that he doubts me, especially when someone who has only recently begun training claims he will present him with a disciple. Even so, you can look forward to it. If Lucian is a heaven-sent vessel, acknowledged by the Sword Saint, then surely there must be another person sent by the heavens as well, someone blessed with a gift for the sword. In fact, despite his frail physique and his currently inferior swordsmanship, with his talent alone he will one day become the embodiment of the blade itself, a figure who sweeps across the battlefield like a stone of steel sword. Demon Felix, you will become my most powerful follower, and the disciple who will inherit everything you pass down, sir. After some time the scene shifts again. Lucian and Aizen have arrived at the training grounds. The air is calm yet filled with quiet tension. Aizen begins to speak in a steady, instructive tone. In that case, before the lesson on swordsmanship styles begins, let us first see how much you have improved. Young master, against the wooden training dummy, perform vertical, horizontal, and diagonal strikes. And if you have truly practiced circulation, you should be able to manipulate mana. He carefully explains everything that is important for Lucian to demonstrate, leaving no detail unspoken. Then after a brief pause, he adds at the very end, show me a strike infused with mana. Hearing this, Lucian reflects inwardly. This is the first time I have held a sword. With Lucian's body, I need to control my strength, but Lucian said he had studied swordsmanship before, so with that thought steady in his mind, he prepares himself. His grip tightens around the hilt. His stance settles, and without hesitation, he delivers a clean vertical strike. The wooden dummy trembles slightly from the force. Immediately after, he follows with a precise horizontal slash, then a sharp diagonal cut, each movement flowing more naturally than the last. Finally, he takes a quiet breath and focuses, channeling mana into the blade. A powerful surge of energy begins to gather. It is not only the sword that responds, an intense light seems to flare within his eyes as well, as if energy itself is burning behind them. In the next instant, he steps forward and unleashes the final attack. The blade, infused with mana, slices through the air with overwhelming force. The training statue in front of him cannot withstand the impact. It shatters violently before collapsing to the ground, struck down by the sheer power of his blow. Lucian watches the fallen training dummy with a faint smile spreading across his face. In that moment, he feels as though he has done remarkably well. It was his first attempt using this body. After all, inwardly, he reflects with quiet satisfaction. This is my first attempt in this body, so my movements were a bit lacking, but perhaps my form was decent for a beginner, right? I wonder, is Sir Isen expecting more than this? A flicker of doubt begins to creep into his thoughts, though he still believes he performed fairly well. Standing a short distance away, Isen observes him closely. His gaze is calm, unreadable, as if measuring something far deeper than mere technique. After a brief silence, he finally speaks. I suspected that you had ability, young master, but once again you have surprised me. For a fleeting second, Lucian feels a spark of pride at those words, only for it to be extinguished in the very next breath. To put it simply, it was pathetic. A blunt judgment strikes harder than any blade. Lucian's eyes widen in complete shock, his earlier confidence shattering instantly. Sir Isen, what do you mean? He asked, unable to hide his disbelief. Isaac meets his gaze without hesitation. His expression does not change. You did not mishear me, young master. The Sword Saint continues, his voice steady but merciless in its honesty. I do not know the reason, but terrible habits are clouding every swing of your sword. By ignoring the fundamentals, the way you wield it resembles that of a mercenary, one who is struggling desperately just to survive. You focus only on power and speed, yet there is no balance between your body and your mana. Because of that, even a sharp sword becomes dull, and gaps appear in every movement you make. Furthermore, when you deliver that final blow, how long do you think it took you to coat the blade in mana? Lucian listens carefully, the weight of each word pressing down on him. After a brief pause, he answers honestly, well, since I was channeling mana into the sword, it seemed to take about 1 to 2 seconds. Upon hearing that, Isen repeats his words in a low, pointed tone. That 1 to 2 seconds you mentioned so casually. Lucian blinks in confusion, unsure why those seconds matter so much. Before he can fully process it, Isen suddenly raises his wooden sword and points it straight at him, gesture sharp and deliberate, as if to make him understand just how costly those 1 or 2 seconds could truly be. Aizen's wooden sword remains pointed steadily at Lucian's throat as he finishes his warning. That is more than enough time for an enemy to kill you. His tone is neither loud nor angry, it is calm, which somehow makes the truth cut even deeper. This lesson should begin by understanding that burden. An enemy will not let such an opening pass them by. Lucian feels the tip of the wooden blade resting lightly against his neck. Only then does he truly understand. He hadn't even sensed when Aizen moved. In his mind, a cold realization echoes. I didn't even realize it until the blade touched my neck. How stupid of me, the thought chills him further. I could have died without even noticing. My head had fallen, and yet I'm thinking so calmly. He recalls fragments of past memories, battles, near-death moments, the thin line between life and death, the difference between survival and defeat can be no more than a single heartbeat or one careless second. Slowly, he lowers his gaze in acknowledgement and then looks back up with renewed seriousness. I will keep your words in mind, he says firmly. I will fix my habits and my mindset first, before Aizen watches in silence, measuring not just Lucian's skill, but the resolve forming behind his eyes. After hearing Lucian's resolve, Aizen speaks again, his voice firm and unwavering. Young master, a talented body cannot necessarily do everything. You cannot defeat an experienced mana user by relying on physical strength alone, and if the body cannot properly support the mana, that energy will only be wasted, creating gaps that are nothing less than an invitation for death. Each word lands with a weight of hard-earned experience to draw out the sword's true power. He continues at that moment. Mana begins to rise from Aizen's blade. It is not wild or explosive. Instead, it flows smoothly, like a quiet current beneath still water. The air around him seems to tighten as the energy gathers with perfect control. Internal and external strength, though they may be different, must form a single flow. That is the rule. Greatness is born from harmony. As he finishes speaking, he steps forward and unleashes a mana charge strike toward the training dummy. The attack appears almost ordinary, clean, simple, without unnecessary motion. For a brief second, it seems as though nothing has happened. The dummy stands untouched, unmoving. Then, without warning, it collapses into fine dust, scattering into the air as though it had never truly been solid to begin with. Aizen lowers his sword calmly and looks at Lucian with steady eyes. This is the path of the sword you must walk from now on, young master. A few days later, we are shown a scene inside the training hall where the swordsmen are locked in an intense practice session. The atmosphere feels heavy, filled with the sharp echoes of steel clashing against steel. Practicing in the center of the hall are Lucian and the Sword Saint Aizen. The Sword Saint speaks firmly, his voice calm but commanding, as he instructs third young master. The flow of mana must not be interrupted. Just as training the body allows for precise movements, your mana control must also reach that level. His words are steady, each one carrying the weight of experience. In front of him, Lucian is clearly struggling, pushing himself to keep up while exchanging blows with such a master. As their swords collide again, Lucian launches an attack, but it is effortlessly blocked without missing a beat. Aizen continues his lesson. Also, when wielding mana while reinforcing your entire body, you must leave enough power to circulate separately, deployed in the right place at the right time. His blade moves with flawless precision, every motion controlled, every strike calculated. Lucian grinds his teeth and gathers his strength before unleashing an incredibly powerful attack. The force behind it is overwhelming, yet the Sword Saint calmly blocks the strike and redirects its energy back toward Lucian, demonstrating complete dominance over both swordsmanship and mana control. As the clash settles, Aizen speaks again, his voice unwavering. When these factors mesh together to form a balance, only then will you understand the true power of the sword. Lucian lands skillfully a short distance away, managing to steady himself despite the immense pressure. Sweat drips down his face as he readies himself for the next exchange. Across from him stands the Sword Saint, his blade radiating an immense and terrifying energy, far more powerful than before. The air itself seems to tremble around him. Then, with sharp focus in his eyes, Aizen declares, now then, apply what you've just learned and try to defend yourself. However, this time, let us introduce a slightly more advanced step. With those words, the two of them stand face to face once again. The tension between master and disciple rising. The next stage of training is about to begin. Right after that, the Sword Saint suddenly moves from his position with incredible speed. His movement is so fast that it becomes almost impossible to follow. With the naked eye and the blink of an eye, he appears right in front of Lucian and says in a firm, composed voice, consider the enemy's speed and movements, and respond with the appropriate amount of force. At the same time, an overwhelming surge of powerful aura begins to radiate from his body. The air around him feels heavy and sharp. He raises his sword upward in a smooth motion, and in the very next instant, he unleashes an extremely powerful and terrifying attack. Seeing that monstrous wave of energy rushing toward him, Lucian's mind races. Even in that critical moment, he remembers the essence of Sir Aizen's teachings. The essence of Sir Aizen's teaching is the union of naturalness. Like a flow of water, he thinks to himself, the attack is already dangerously close, and his thoughts continue to move rapidly through. This one overcomes the gap and minimizes the loss of power to exert maximum force. Don't be overwhelmed, look straight at it. With that realization, Lucian gathers every bit of strength within him. Mana burst out from his body, surging violently as he concentrates it into his blade. He steps forward and launches his own attack straight ahead. Their swords collide head-on, and the moment they clash, the explosive shockwave erupts from the impact, releasing an immense and destructive force that shakes the entire training hall. The Sword Saint watches Lucian calmly. From the other side of the clash, from his expression it appears as if he hasn't applied even the slightest bit of real force. In this exchange and contrast, Lucian is visibly struggling just to block and withstand the overwhelming power pressing against him. After holding the clash for a brief moment, the Sword Saint finally pulls his sword back and lowers it, his voice returning to its usual composed tone. "We can end today's training here. Ingrain the sensation you felt today within you." The Sword Saint looks at Lucian one last time and says calmly, "That alone will be enough to make you a first-rate swordsman." Hearing those words, Lucian can help but smile. His body is exhausted, his breathing heavy, and his arms trembling from the intense clash, but there's satisfaction in his eyes. Even while struggling to steady himself, he respectfully replies, "Thank you for the lesson." With that, the day's training officially comes to an end. The servants quickly begin clearing the training hall, which has suffered considerable destruction from the violent shock waves and powerful collisions. Broken tiles, cracked walls, and scattered debris are everywhere. One servant looks around in disbelief and mutters, "Just what kind of training did he undergo?" Another, glancing wordly toward Lucian, asks softly, "Will the young master be alright?" The scene then shifts to Lucian, who is sitting alone to the side, trying to recover. His condition is clearly terrible. His clothes are drenched in sweat, his muscles ache, and every breath feels heavy. Yet despite that, there's a strange calmness in his expression. "I somehow managed to survive today's training as well," he thinks to himself. "It's absurd to think this harsh method is ultimately intended to strip away the bad habits of my past life. Well, what can I do if this is what it takes to fix them?" He closes his eyes for a moment, reflecting on everything he just experienced. "Thanks to it, I'm quickly getting the hang of it anyway. The more I watch him, the more I'm in awe of him. He constantly creates crises tailored to my skill level, and draws out the correct reaction with precise instructions. That's something easier said than done. It would be impossible unless he completely saw through my body's condition." Lucian clenches his fist slightly, feeling the lingering sensation of mana still circulating within him. "I'm just entrusting my body to his teachings, but I can feel my growth with my own skin." Until now he had believed that only the secrets of excellent sword forms were the path to reaching a higher realm. But today's training made him realize something deeper. That true strength wasn't just about mastering techniques, but about refining the foundation itself, breaking down flaws, and rebuilding from the very core. "I never thought deeply about things like balance, reserve power, and flow like I have this time." Lucian lowers his gaze as a quiet thought echoes in his mind. "Even though what was truly important was always inside me. If I had known these teachings in my past life." For a brief moment, faint visions from his previous life flashed before his eyes. Blurred battlefields, unfinished tools, missed opportunity, and the overwhelming regret of never reaching the height he once chased. The memories feel distant, yet painfully vivid. The scene returns to the present. Lucian exhales slowly and continues thinking, "When do we have exchanged at least a few blows? It feels a bit shameful to end it like this today. Could there be a perfect opponent somewhere? Is that guy?" Before his thoughts can settle, footsteps echo through the training hall. The fourth young master has arrived. He walks forward confidently and bows slightly. "Have you been well all this time, master? Your disciple Joshua greets you." The Sword Saint responds in his usual composed tone, "Welcome, fourth young master. However, to what do I owe this unexpected visit? I am currently training the third young master, so if you have words to share with this old man, please come back later." Joshua smiles faintly and shakes his head. "There is no need for that, master." The Sword Saint's eyes narrow slightly as he asks, "Then the reason you sought this place out is yes?" "That's correct," Joshua replies calmly. "Since brother has opened his closed doors and committed to training as a younger brother who learned first, I wanted to help with his training." He then turns his gaze toward Lucian, a subtle competitive spark shining in his eyes. "What do you say, brother Lucian?" A perfect opponent just strolled right in the air. Inside the training hall shifts once again. What was moments ago quiet exhaustion now becomes sharp tension. Lucian slowly lifts his head, meeting Joshua's gaze, realizing that the perfect opponent he had just wondered about might have arrived far sooner than expected. The training ground gradually sinks into a heavy silence as tension spreads through the air. Every night guard an attendant nearby watches closely, their eyes fixed on the three figures standing at the center. Everyone is waiting for Sir Ison's reaction. The atmosphere feels far more serious than an ordinary training session, as if something much bigger than simple practice is about to happen. Sir Ison turns toward the fourth young master, his brow slightly furrowed. Confusion lingers in his voice as he asks for an explanation. Why would the third young master suddenly be involved in this training exercise? Joshua lowers his gaze politely. From the outside, his posture appears respectful and well-mannered. In a calm and controlled tone, he explains that certain training methods require sparring in order to practice the practical application of mana control. As he slowly lifts his head again, a bright and innocent-looking smile spreads across his face. He volunteers himself as the opponent. Then Joshua returns toward Lucian. With carefully measured humility, he explains that due to recent circumstances, he has had very few chances to interact with his brothers. Moments like this are rare opportunities for them to grow closer while improving their abilities. Placing a hand over his chest in a respectful gesture, he admits that approaching the situation this way may appear somewhat rude. However, he insists that his intentions are sincere. Finally, Joshua respectfully asks for permission. Throughout the entire explanation, Lucian remains silent. His head tilts slightly downward, as if he is simply listening without forming any reaction. But inside, Lucian cannot help but smile. The children of this household truly possess a remarkable talent for twisting words. Joshua's explanation sounds noble on the surface, helping with training, strengthening brotherly bonds, improving together. But the hidden intention behind those words is painfully obvious. Lucian's eyes slowly drift toward Joshua's side. Carefully wrapped in cloth rests a real sword. Lucian's thoughts immediately sharpen. Joshua has brought a real blade to spar against a brother who has barely experienced a week of formal lessons. The intention behind it is so obvious that it almost feels childish in its transparency. The goal is simple: crush the weak older brother in public and strengthen his own position within the family hierarchy. Lucian lifts his gaze toward Joshua's smiling face. The challenge has been cleverly disguised as a sincere attempt to assist his older brother's training. Refusing it would only create complication. Lucian quietly considers the situation. If the Sword Saint supervising them acknowledges the spar, then the match will carry real meaning. Even if the boy standing before him is nothing more than a brat trying to corner him, backing down now would only make things worse. Lucian's thoughts briefly drift towards Sir Ison, the very man who has been pressuring him to withdraw from the line of succession. If Lucian retreats now, Ison will be placed in an awkward and difficult position. After a moment of thought, Lucian finally steps forward. This small movement instantly captures the attention of both Ison and Joshua. Their eyes follow him closely. Lucian calmly requests that Sir Ison accept his younger brother's proposal. Ison's eyes widen slightly in surprise. The third young master accepting the challenge is the last thing he expected. Lucian lightly gestures with his hand as he explains his reasoning. His younger brother's enthusiasm for training is admirable. However, such disrespectful behavior, along with the assumption that stubborn pressure can force obedience, cannot simply be ignored. Lucian's gaze shifts directly toward Joshua. If that is the case, then he will personally educate his immature younger brother. Joshua's expression stiffens. The calm words slice directly into his pride. Anger surges inside him, but he forces himself to suppress it. Lucian continues speaking calmly, informing him that today will be the final day. His childish behavior will be tolerated. Continuing to cause trouble will only place Sir Ison in an uncomfortable position. While they speak, Ison carefully observes everything. He understands the fourth young master's intentions perfectly, yet despite recognizing the trap, the third young master has chosen to confront it head-on. After a brief moment of consideration, Ison finally nods and grants permission. However, he immediately establishes strict conditions. The spar will happen only once. If the fight becomes dangerous in any way, he will stop it immediately. Both Lucian and Joshua place their hands over their chests and agree without hesitation. Lucian then turns toward Joshua with a calm smile and suggests that they have a wonderful sparring match. As he finishes speaking, Lucian casually pats Joshua on the shoulder. This simple gesture instantly irritates him. Joshua forces a laugh in response, though the annoyance in his voice is impossible to hide. Sometime later, the three of them stand at the center of the training ground. Sir Ison steps forward and announces the rules. Clearly, this is not a fight meant to harm one another. It is only a spar intended to verify what each of them has learned. He turns toward Lucian and reminds him that this is his first spar. Therefore, he must approach it with the mindset of learning rather than winning. Men. Ison looks toward Joshua and reminds him of his responsibility as the younger brother who is trained with the sword for much longer. He must behave with the dignity expected of a senior. Finally, he addresses them both. Together they must conduct a match that brings honor to the name of House Veldic. The signal to begin will be given once both brothers draw their swords. The moment arrives. Both brothers grip their swords firmly. Steel slides from its sheath. The two blades rise and settle into ready positions. As tension thickens across the training ground, Joshua stares directly at Lucian. Frustration burns inside him. In his mind, inane Lucian Velvic echoes with irritation. Joshua cannot understand when his older brother. Suddenly he began acting like a proper elder sibling. Every sentence Lucian speaks carries the word youngest, and each repetition grinds painfully against Joshua's pride. The difference between them is nothing more than a slightly earlier birth, yet Lucian behaves as if he stands far above him. Joshua tightens his grip on the sword until his knuckles turn pale. Fine, if Lucian wants to act superior, then the spar will decide everything. He silently promises that by the end of this fight, Lucian will never again have the confidence to speak. That way his anger grows so intense that the reflection of his face in the blade begins to look almost frightening. Joshua convinces himself that birth order means nothing. Today will reveal who truly stands above the other. Across from him, Lucian quietly observes the vicious expression on Joshua's face. Even if he were confronting a mortal enemy, Lucian doubts he would ever make such a twisted expression. Lucian adjusts his grip on the sword. The weight of the weapon sends a familiar, cold sensation through his hand. It has been 2 months since he last truly held a blade. For a brief moment, memories from his previous life surface. Back then, Lucian would have used every dirty trick imaginable to win a fight. A faint smile touches his lips, but today is different. Today he stands here not as the man he once was, but as the third young master of House Veldic. Lucian's gaze briefly shifts towards Sir Ison, who watches carefully from the side. If he accidentally uses sword techniques from his previous life, the Sword Saint will certainly notice. Lucian quietly reminds himself to remain cautious. Joshua may be arrogant and foolish, but he is still a child who has not yet experienced the harshness of the real world, and now he is Lucian's younger brother. Lucian decides he will keep things within reasonable limits, but Joshua suddenly interrupts his thoughts. With mocking laughter, Joshua glances around the arena and sarcastically asks where Lucian's earlier confidence has gone. Now that he is holding a real sword, perhaps the situation finally feels real. He continues his taunts. Accidents often happen during spars involving real blades, but those accidents usually occur when the fighters are evenly matched. If Lucian feels afraid, perhaps they should switch to wooden swords instead. Joshua smiles confidently, clearly believing humiliating Lucian in front of everyone will be effortless. Lucian watches him quietly. Then he calmly changes his mind. The idea of holding back within reason has already been withdrawn. For a disobedient younger brother, a proper beating may be the only lesson that works. Joshua grows even more irritated as the word youngest echoes again in Lucian's calm voice. His eyes widen with anger. Without waiting any longer, Joshua steps forward and lowers himself into a combat stance. In the next instant he burst forward. His eyes burn with fury as he charges directly toward Lucian, determined to make him regret every arrogant word. Lucian immediately raises his sword into a defensive cross, and inside his mind, Lucian calmly analyzes the situation. Joshua has received proper training from the Sword Saint. His fundamental and movements are not something to underestimate. But Lucian also notices another problem. Earlier training has already drained most of his mana. Still, Joshua's lack of real combat experience remains a major weakness. Falling for such a simple provocation proves exactly that. Lucian shifts his stance. His rear leg slides back into a runner's position. Mona quietly gathers around that leg as he applies the teachings he learned from the Sword Saint, focusing power through precise Mona control. Joshua continues charging forward. At that exact moment, blue mana suddenly burst around Lucian's back leg. In the next instant, Lucian explodes into motion. His body vanishes from its original position and slides forward in the blink of an eye, leaving streaks of blue light trailing behind him. The sudden burst of speed shocks everyone watching. Sir Ison's eyes widen. The butler and nearby guards freeze in disbelief. Joshua barely has time to react before Lucian appears directly in front of him. Lucian raises his sword high above his head. In that single split second, Lucian calmly decides to seize full control of the exchange. The blade descends to a powerful vertical strike. Joshua instinctively looks upward as the attack crashes down toward him. Lucian coldly warns his younger brother to grit his teeth and block the strike, otherwise the impact might knock his jaw shut. News of the duel spread through the Velvet family estate almost as soon as it ended. What had begun as a quiet sparring match on the training ground quickly transformed into the most talked about story in the entire mansion. Servants carried the whispers from corridor to corridor, each retelling growing slightly more dramatic than the last. In one corner of the estate, a small group of servants gathered while pretending to continue their duties. One of them leaned closer to the others and asked in a hushed voice if they had heard the news. Yet another servant looked confused and asked what he meant. The first servant lowered his voice even further before revealing the rumor that was spreading throughout the estate. Young Master Lucian had completely overwhelmed young Master Joshua during their duel. The second servant frowned immediately and shook his head in disbelief. That simply didn't make sense. Lucian had only recently started learning how to use a sword. Joshua, on the other hand, had been training for years under the Sword Saint himself. How could such a thing possibly happen? The first servant admitted that he had reacted the same way at first, but then he added a crucial detail that silenced the doubt. The Sword Saint himself had personally supervised the match. Elsewhere in the mansion, a group of maids whispered among themselves while continuing their chores. One maid tried to hold back her laughter as she explained what she had heard. According to the story, the fourth young master had walked into the duel with complete confidence, acting as though victory was already guaranteed. Yet by the time the match ended, he had left the training ground, looking utterly miserable. Another maid giggled softly and confessed that when she first heard the story, she had nearly cried from laughing so hard. Of course, the reason the rumor spread so quickly and became more exaggerated with each retelling was largely due to one person, Yuko. Throughout the day, he had moved around the estate with perfect timing, appearing in exactly the right places. Whenever someone began discussing the duel with enthusiastic energy, he shared the story again and again, always adding just enough detail to keep the listeners captivated. At one point, Angus approached him with curiosity and said the timing of the story was perfect. He had already heard another rumor that young Master Lucian's talent had even been acknowledged by the Sword Saint. You can lean closer, as though you were about to reveal a dangerous secret. Since the story had already spread this far, he said he might as well explain what truly happened during the duel. However, he first lowered his voice and warned everyone that the information he was about to share was strictly confidential. Naturally, that warning only made everyone lean in closer. From that moment on, Angus began repeating the story with even greater excitement than before. According to his version of events, Lucian had completely dominated the fight, effortlessly disarming Joshua and casually taking away his sword, while everyone present stood frozen in shock. Meanwhile, far away from the buzzing rumors, Lucian stood quietly beside the window of his room. A soft humming sound escaped his lips as he gazed outside with calm eyes. It was obvious that he was already aware of the rumors, now racing through the mansion like wildfire. A faint smile slowly appeared on his face. What a perfect day for rumors to spread. His thoughts drifted back to the duel earlier that day. The memory replayed clearly in his mind. During the final moments of the fight, Joshua had looked up at him with fear filling his eyes. His voice trembled as he called out to Lucian, calling him brother. Lucian had raised his sword high above his head and looked down at him with a cold expression. So now I am your brother only when you are cornered, he had said calmly. The blade then came crashing down in a powerful vertical strike. Joshua had panicked immediately, shouting an apology and desperately calling him brother Lucian. But it was already too late. The strike had landed. Lucian's sword sliced cleanly through Joshua's weapon, splitting the blade into two pieces as if it were nothing more than brittle wood. After the broken halves fell to the ground, Lucian slowly lowered his own sword and stared down at him in a cold voice. He warned Joshua never to attempt something like this again. If he did, the consequences next time would be far uglier. The moment those words were spoken, Joshua's legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed to his knees, trembling in fear. Lucian had looked down at him with a faint grim smile and given him one final command. Learn your place if you understand not. Joshua had nodded immediately, again and again, his head moving rapidly as terror filled his face. Back in the present, Lucian slowly turned away from the window and glanced toward the table where a document rested. His expression remained calm. Had to keep those troublesome young masters quiet for a while now. As the internal problems of the family had been temporarily settled, his attention naturally shifted toward another matter entirely. Marcus Robron's house. Not long afterward, that same document found its way into the hands of the Duke himself. The Duke studied the paper for a moment before raising his eyes toward Lucian. They were seated together in the quiet garden of the estate with a thoughtful expression. The Duke asked if this was the secret letter Lucian had received from Yuko. Lucian calmly explained the situation. According to the information in the letter, 1 week from now Yuko was scheduled to meet someone from the Ragran faction in the vaster territory. Hearing this location caused the Duke's brows to furrow slightly. He tapped a finger lightly against the table while thinking the vaster territory, even though the region had lost much of its former importance, still lay dangerously close to Kalavitz. The Duke muttered that the choice of location was preposterous. Lucian nodded calmly and offered his own interpretation. The enemy likely believed that such a place would slip past the Duke's notice. A blind spot. The Duke lowered his gaze for a moment as he considered the idea carefully. Then he lifted his eyes and looked directly at Lucian. What exactly was the true reason Lucian had brought this information to him? After all, he had already entrusted the entire matter to Lucian's authority. Lucian answered without hesitation. He needed power. The Duke raised one eyebrow slightly. Power? What kind of power? Lucian explained calmly that just because a beast had been caught in a trap did not mean the hunter possessed the proper tools to finish it. The Duke understood immediately. So Lucian had come to the man who possessed those tools. The Duke lifted his cup slowly, then studied Lucian with a thoughtful gaze. It was certainly a rational decision, however. For someone who claimed he wished to prove himself, It sounded suspiciously like relying on the Duke's authority. Would people truly acknowledge the results as Lucian's own achievement? Lucian listened silently while the Duke continued speaking. A man earned his reputation by bringing down his prey with his own strength. If someone else did the work for him, the result would always be considered a half-baked achievement. The Duke reminded him that he had given Lucian both the opportunity and the authority to resolve the matter independently, yet instead of facing the challenge directly, Lucian had chosen a safer path. Suddenly, the Duke struck the table sharply with his hand. The sound echoed through the quiet garden. Was this truly the best Lucian could do? He demanded an answer. Lucian lowered his gaze briefly. Think carefully before speaking. When he finally replied, his voice remained calm and steady. If choosing that path ensured the task would be completed successfully, then he would gladly choose it. He raised his head and met his father's eyes. Without hesitation, the royal road his father spoke of was a path open only to those who possessed overwhelming power. Everyone else had no choice but to move through the shadows beneath it. Calling reckless bravery, courage was nothing more than arrogance. Even if someone succeeded through recklessness, it remained reckless, and if they failed, everything would be lost. Lucian explained that in his view, the essence of a hunt was not the act of killing the prey. What truly mattered was what the hunter was protecting. As he spoke, he rubbed the back of his neck thoughtfully. If the threat could be eliminated completely, why should it matter whether others called the achievement half-baked? However, that did not mean he intended to act like a sane, who smiled foolishly and accepted everything quietly. While speaking, Lucian reached toward a nearby flower and gently plucked it from its stem. Holding it lightly between his fingers, he continued explaining. If the person who received the credits someday reached a point where they could no longer even draw their bow, then the one who would inherit that bow had already been decided. The Duke listened quietly without interrupting. After a moment, he lowered his gaze toward the cup resting before him. Then a small chuckle escaped his lips. That answer was sufficient. He admitted that he could not even remember the last time someone had argued with him so directly. And he certainly had not expected such words to come from Lucian. It had been a good answer. Lucian felt a quiet sense of relief. The Duke continued speaking calmly. A man must have conviction in the path he chooses. If someone allowed themselves to be shaken by a single word, they would accomplish nothing. Lucian asked whether this had been some kind of test. The Duke confirmed it without hesitation. He had wanted to see whether Lucian would waver when confronted with authority and pressure. It was understandable if someone hesitated, because they could not find the answer themselves. But no one would follow a person who could not even protect their own convictions. Such a person would not only be unfit to lead the family, they would not even deserve to be called a man. Lucian silently thought to himself that he had suspected as much. There had been no way his father truly believed this situation was within Lucian's current ability. That was why the Duke's earlier harshness had seemed strange as expected. There were no shortcuts when dealing with him. Still, the conversation had turned out well. Lucian then tried to ask about the support he would receive for the upcoming operation, but the Duke interrupted him before he could finish. Its father, he corrected calmly. Then he continued speaking. He would lend Lucian the tools he needed. However, mobilizing a large force would attract far too much attention. The Rogren faction would likely move with only a small elite group as well. Lucian nodded in agreement and said that he had been hoping to borrow a few skilled knights from within the family. If possible, the Duke looked directly into his eyes. Before giving his answer, he would lend Lucian the Black Lions. Leaning slightly forward, the Duke added one final remark. If Lucian truly wished to understand the weight carried by the person who sat in the Duke's seat, then he should experience it himself. 1 week later, Bestrel lies in decay. The city has long lost its purpose, its streets empty and buildings rotting under years of neglect. Despite its proximity to Kaon, it lacks resources and has been abandoned as a reserve city, leaving only passing vanguards and no real population. The silence itself feels unnatural, making it the perfect place for something hidden. As Lucian and Hugo walk through the deserted streets, Lucian quickly notices the absence of people. Sensing something off, Hugo explains that Vestra lost its strategic value long ago, which is exactly why they chose it. No attention, no interference, the ideal place for a trap. As they move forward, Hugo quickly presses the question. He can no longer hold back, demanding to know how Lucian uncovered his plan with such exact precision. Lucian pauses, then lets out a short laugh, casually noting that even Hans has no knowledge of it, making Hugo's secrecy meaningless in front of him. Instead of explaining further, he cuts the topic off, saying he will reveal it later, and immediately shifts his focus ahead. For now, the prey comes first. Lucian confirms whether the trap has been set correctly. Hugo answers without hesitation. Inside the plant, everything has been arranged to perfectly match the false reports they sent out to lay out the goods. And even the details mentioned earlier have all been replicated to lure their target in without suspicion. Everything is ready. Only one thing remains: reinforcements. Lucian questions whether relying on his father's help. Others, Hugo. The question catches him off guard. but he quickly denies it. He understands the weight of this mission. Failure is not an option. Yet as he looks down at his own hand, his frustration surfaces. He admits to himself that his strength is lacking. If he were stronger, this entire achievement could have belonged solely to Lucien. Lucien listens, then places a hand on his shoulder, acknowledging the feeling, but warning against impatience. They have only just begun, and losing direction now would be a mistake. Growth takes time and Hugo still has a long road ahead. Then Lucien casually assumes Hugo is already 30. The moment turns awkward instantly. Hugo corrects flatly he is 23. A brief silence follows. Lucien freezes, clearly embarrassed, whilst Hugo stares ahead with a stone face, pointing out that 30 is still far away, and their age gap is not significant. Lucien awkwardly tries to fix his words, but Hugo shuts it down immediately, making it clear that the correction only makes things worse. The tension lingers before Lucien shifts his focus. He scans the surroundings. The meeting time is close, but there is still no sign of their reinforcements. Then suddenly a voice cuts through the silence, calling out to the third young master. Both react instantly. Hugo draws his sword and turns toward the sound in one swift motion, ready to strike, but the attack never happens. A man appears within reach and catches the blade barehanded. His movement is flawless, his presence overwhelming. He coldly notes that Hugo is far too slow. Hugo is stunned. He tries to pull his sword back, but it does not move. The grip holding it is absolute. For the first time, he finds himself completely suppressed. Unable to resist, the realization hits hard. He is being overpowered effortlessly. Before anything escalates, Lucien calmly intervenes. He assures Hugo that the man is not an enemy. Hugo hesitates, then lowers his guard slightly. Still confused, Lucien steps forward, his gaze sharp as he questions the man's intent. The killing intent is undeniable. Such an approach demands an explanation. Then he identifies him, Black Lion. The atmosphere shifts instantly. Hugo steps back as realization hits. These are the reinforcements Lucien mentioned. The Black Lions, the hidden force of the Welwick family, operating in the shadows, immobilized only under direct authority. As if summoned, more figures emerge silently from the surroundings, forming a perimeter around them. Each one radiates control, terrifying strength. An older man steps forward, clearly their captain. He places his hand on his chest and respectfully greets Lucien as the third young master. He explains that the earlier flash was only a test meant to evaluate their reactions and combat readiness. There was no real hostility. Lucien studies them carefully. Even in his past life, their existence had been uncertain, spoken of like ghost stories. But now, standing before them, the truth becomes clear. Not only did he fail to sense them earlier, but even now their auras are perfectly suppressed. They are completely unreadable. Every single one of them is a monster. Lucien acknowledges internally that this level of support is overwhelming. His father has sensed something far beyond ordinary reinforcements. Time passes. Inside a ruined house repurposed as a base, Lucien sits while the Black Lions gather around him. Hugo stands nearby, still processing what he witnessed. Lucien begins outlining the mission. House Logan has taken the bait and is already on its way. The trap has worked perfectly. Now the objective is simple: capture the leader alive. Everyone else can be eliminated. Lucien makes it clear there is no reason for mercy. The enemy crossed the line first, and the consequences others to bear. He then entrusts the rest of the operation to the captain, granting full discretion. The captain observes Lucien closely. At first he assumed this mission was simply meant to hand an achievement to the young master. But now, it is clear that Lucien is calculating everything, testing their strength, and preparing for every possible outcome. This is not an experience. This is control. A faint smile forms on the captain's face as he realizes something is changing. A new force is beginning to rise. He accepts the command without hesitation. As the sun sets, the final phase begins. A carriage rolls into Vestre. The door opens and a young noble steps out, immediately covering his nose in disgust. The air irritates him and his expression twists with annoyance. A maid quickly hands him a handkerchief, which he presses tightly against his face. The journey has clearly frustrated him. He finds the place unbearable and beneath him. If not for his father's orders, he would never have stepped into such a rotting city. Still, his intent is clear. He plans to finish this quickly and leave, completely unaware that every step he takes is leading him straight into a carefully constructed trap. The fourth son of House Logan, Ap Logan, has arrived, and from the shadows, unseen eyes lock onto him as the hunt begins. After that, Lucien begins walking quickly toward them and says, "Oh, my lord, my deepest apologies. I committed a grave discourtesy, not realizing such a noble personage had arrived." At that moment, one of the knights accompanying the young master points his sword directly at Lucien and warns coldly, "One more step and I'll cut you down. Identify yourself immediately." Seeing this, Lucien pretends to be frightened. With a trembling voice and stumbling words, he replies, "Please forgive me, Sir Knight. I am merely here to guide you under Boss Hyogo's orders. I'm just a lowly wretch not worth your concern." Hearing this, the young master Philip Logan speaks with clear disdain. Sheath your sword. It's disgraceful even to exchange words with such filth. Lucian lowers his head slightly and responds, thank you for your mercy, my lord. He then begins leading them toward the main location, exactly as he had intended from the start. However, deep inside his mind, his thoughts take a completely different tone. Looks like we're about to bag a bigger prize than expected. That attitude, that way of speaking, he must have been born arrogant. The kind of complacency to show. Not even a shred of tension, despite stepping into enemy territory. He's definitely one of the Marquis's sons. As Lucian continues observing them carefully, he analyzes their strength. The number of guards is small, just as expected, around a dozen. They are likely apprentice knights of the Logan family, at the very least Owl, while he outwardly maintains the image of a fearful and insignificant guy. Inside, Lucian is already calculating every detail, preparing for something far bigger than anyone present could possibly imagine. That as Lucian continues forward, his thoughts sharpen, observing every detail with quiet precision. And that man who hasn't left the brat's side, he's the one to watch out for. If there's anything else unusual, it's the pathetic fact that he even brought mates into a situation like this. His eyes suddenly scan the group, measuring their strength, their roles, and their carelessness. Suddenly, the young master Philip Logan snaps impatiently, what are you standing around for? Guide us already. Lucian quickly hurries ahead, slightly bowing as he speaks in a nervous tone. It's my first time seeing such noble people from so close. I suppose I got nervous without realizing it. Philip clicks his tongue in disgust. What a pathetic fool. At that moment, Lucian briefly turns his head back, his expression still humble on the outside, but his mind racing. But that maid? Why does she look so familiar? There's no way, no. It couldn't be. She probably just looks like that person. Shaking off the fog, he immediately continues walking, pushing the doubt aside. As they approach their destination, soon the scene shifts to the main location. As they step inside, Philip's face twists with visible displeasure. This place is even more wretched on the inside, and this stench is piercing my nose. That commoner Hugo. Did he embezzle the funds provided by my house? The exterior was merely to deceive others. Hearing Miss Hugo responds calmly, almost dismissively, it's what's inside that counts, isn't it? Philip narrows his eyes. And you are with a slight bow. Hugo introduces himself, the man in charge. Hugo, my greetings. The item requires extremely careful handling, so our preparations were slightly delayed. Philip studies him coldly before replying, seeing as you've shown your face, I take it you haven't tried anything foolish. Hugo lets out a low chuckle, clearly unfazed. Would I really cast off the Logan leash just to pocket some spare change? Even after all the tedious reports I've sent, the fact that you've graced us with your presence shows just how curious you must have been. His smile deepens, carrying a hint of something far more dangerous as he continues about the existence of the item, the one that will rot Rockelheim to its very core. A Jillian silence lingers for a moment before Hugo gestures forward, his voice smooth and confident. I shall let you see it immediately. Hearing all of this unfold, Lucian quietly reflects to himself, Hugo, I did well to entrust him with these affairs. He's got guts spout lies so calmly, without even the slightest tremor in his voice. There's a hint of approval in his thoughts, as if he's watching a performance unfold exactly as planned. On the other side, Philip Logan's patience begins to crack, his expression twists with anger as he stammers, what an insolent hound. If the results are unsatisfactory, you'd best be prepared for the consequences. Then turning sharply, he barks, hey you commoner, go get that from your master. Lucian immediately bows his head, yes sir. Without hesitation, he steps forward towards Hugo and says, boss, please take out the item we prepared. In a smooth, almost rehearsed motion, he takes the object directly from Hugo's hands. For a brief moment the two lock eyes, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Then Lucian turns back, holding the item firmly as he says, I've got it right here. Then swiftly and accurately, before he even finishes properly, the arrogance and strange confidence in his tone make everyone uneasy. The knights and even Philip himself begin to feel a sudden wave of dread creeping in, and in the very next instant, Lucian hurls the item straight toward them. I'll make sure it's delivered. The reaction is immediate. Panic spreads across their faces as Philip shouts in fury, you bastard, what do you think you're doing? Have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea what that is? But it's already too late. Something strikes the object midair like a precise, unseen attack, and it shatters instantly. The moment it breaks, an overwhelming burst of light erupts from within, flooding the entire area. The guards react instinctively, rushing to shield the master. Young master, get behind me. The light intensifies rapidly, becoming so blinding that it swallows everything in sight. Vision fails completely. I can't see what on earth is happening. Amid the chaos, Philip drops low, trying to make sense of the situation, his voice filled with rage and disbelief. You incompetent fools, I'll have you severely punished once we return to the estate. Why aren't you answering? But no response comes, only the suffocating brilliance of the light, and the growing sense that something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. At that moment, a voice suddenly calls out, "Young master, yes, I'm right here, hurry, and protect me." Philip shouts back in panic as he forces his eyes open. His vision is still overwhelmed by the fading brilliance through the haze. He can barely make out a blurry figure in front of him. The shape is indistinct, almost ghost-like, but the voice is clear enough, urgent. Desperate, someone is yelling for him to run, warning him to get away. Another guard's voice breaks through the chaos, filled with shock and anger. "He betrayed us." Before Philip can fully process what's happening, one of his men collapses right in front of him. His fear skyrockets instantly. His body trembles as he struggles to understand the situation. But there's no time. His companions are being cut down one after another. In the confusion and blinding aftermath of the light, the members of the Black Lion group move swiftly, eliminating the guards with ruthless efficiency. Watching this unfold, Philip's mind races. A flash magic stone. It emits a blinding light when it receives a certain amount of impact. They're rarely used because they're difficult to store and extremely expensive, but there's nothing better for stealing an enemy's vision in an instant, even so to take out all of the Marquise's guards. In that fleeting moment, his thoughts are cut short as the leader of the Black Lion group steps forward, his voice calm and decisive. "All threats have been neutralized. I will escort the women and the man in charge to Kelheim." Meanwhile, Lucian stands quietly, his expression unreadable as he reflects inwardly. His father's words echo in his mind, heavy and meaningful. "The weight of the seat you occupy. Bear it yourself." He exhales slowly, his thoughts settling. "I think I'm starting to understand." On the other side, Philip has completely lost his composure. He stumbles backward, collapsing to his knees, his voice shaking uncontrollably. "Don't come any closer," I said. "Stay back." His pride desperately clings to what little authority he thinks he still has. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I am the fourth son of Logan." A noble knight steps forward, cutting him off coldly. "Your fate will be decided by His Highness Grand Duke Valdic. Submit to your arrest quietly." Philip's eyes widen in pure shock. "What? House Valdic?" His mind spins as realization dawns on him. He glances toward Lucian, his voice trembling. "Then don't tell me the one disguised as a commoner is a son of House Valdic." Panic grips him completely. I definitely can't let myself be captured like this." Desperate, he turns around, shouting frantically, "What are you all doing? Guards outside, protect me at once." "Are they really all dead outside too?" Lucian steps forward calmly, his voice steady. "It's over. There are no more threats." But his words suddenly stop. His eyes widen in shock as he looks toward one of the maids. At the same time, Philip, clinging to his last shred of control, shouts desperately, "I grant you permission to take up the sword. You should be able to handle this." The maid begins to move. "This is impossible," Lucian mutters under his breath, staring in disbelief as she walks toward the sword. The moment her hand grasps it, everything changes. Her presence, her aura shifts completely. Lucian's mind races as realization crashes over him. The same face, a similar name. Even the change in aura. At the moment the sword was grasped, his voice drops to a whisper filled with disbelief. "Sword Demon Felix. Is it really you?" The air had grown unbearably heavy, as if even drawing a breath required effort. The young master stood rooted behind Felix, his entire body trembling uncontrollably. Panic had completely overtaken him, crushing whatever pride he once carried. His lips quivered as he struggled to speak, his voice breaking under the weight of fear. "Say something. Isn't protecting me your purpose?" he managed to say, desperation seeping through every word. Felix didn't answer right away. He didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge him. His gaze remained fixed straight ahead, calm, unwavering, locked onto the enemy in front of him. "Keep quiet if you want to stay alive," he said coldly. There was no emotion in his voice, no hesitation, only a blunt, undeniable truth. As he adjusted his grip on his sword, a faint trace of irritation crossed his face. It wasn't fear that filled him, but annoyance. The young master's constant whining had long since worn away his patience. Behind him, the young master fell silent, swallowing his fear as he clung to Felix's presence, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Not far away, the white-haired knight watched everything in silence. His sharp eyes moved between the two, carefully observing every detail. There was clear contempt in his expression, yet beneath it lingered something else. A faint acknowledgement. "To think you would hide behind a woman without any shame," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. His gaze briefly shifted toward the young master, before returning to Felix. "Still, your willingness to fight is worth noting." He paused, tightening his grip on his sword. "But don't throw your life away over empty pride. Consider this mercy for a child and a woman." The moment he finished speaking, his focus sharpened completely. Everything else faded away. Only Felix remained in his sight. And in that instant something changed. A heavy, suffocating aura began to rise from Felix's body. It wasn't explosive or loud, yet it was impossible to ignore. Very air around him seemed to distort, reacting to his presence. The white-haired knight felt it immediately. "So that's your decision," he murmured, The next second he moved. The ground beneath his feet cracked as he shot forward like a flash of light, erasing the distance between them. In an instant his sword came down with deadly precision. Clang, steel collided with steel. The sharp sound ringing through the battlefield. The knight's blade stopped, mere inches from Felix's face. A strike meant to kill swiftly and cleanly. Yet Felix didn't flinch. His body moved with effortless precision, his footing perfectly balanced. With a slight twist of his wrist, he redirected the force, guiding the blade away. As though it had never posed a threat, it was smooth to smooth, almost unnatural. A faint smile formed on his lips, as if he had already foreseen the attack before the knight could react. Felix struck back. The counter-attack came without warning, cutting through the air with terrifying speed. For the first time the white-haired knight's eyes widened. The battle escalated instantly. Their swords clashed again and again, faster and sharper with each exchange. Sparks burst with every collision, and the air trembled under the force of their strikes. Then a thin arc of blood scattered into the air. But it wasn't Felix's. Despite the intensity of the fight, he remained completely untouched. The knight, on the other hand, had been pushed onto the defensive. Watching from the side, Lucian stood frozen. His mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. The speed, the precision, flawless reactions, it defied logic. It was as if Felix could see every move before it happened, as though the future itself guided his blade. It wasn't just that. There was no fixed pattern in his style, no rigid form. Every movement was fluid and unpredictable. It perfectly calculated. Then Lucian noticed something. Felix's stance. It was a small detail, easy to overlook, but the moment he saw it, his eyes widened. A memory surfaced, striking him like lightning. That stance realization hit him instantly. It's the sword demon. Fragments of the past began to fall into place. He remembered Felix, or rather who Felix used to be. Even back then, there had always been something different. In a world filled with brutal mercenaries, Felix had never truly belonged. Calm, refined, almost out of place. His slender frame and delicate features had always contrasted sharply with the blood-soaked battlefields he walked through. And now everything made sense. Back in the present, the young master remained glued to Felix's back, too terrified to move even a step away. Meanwhile, Lucian pieced together the truth. Felicia, the abandoned illegitimate child, had never truly disappeared. She had simply taken on a new identity and now stood before them as Felix, the white-haired knight, stepped back, regaining his footing. His expression had changed completely. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something far more serious. "If I had been even slightly slower," he said quietly, "I would have lost my head." His grip tightened once more. "It was a mistake to underestimate you." He took a deep breath, shifting his stance again. "I'll treat you as a true opponent from now on." The moment those words left his mouth, a powerful aura erupted from his body. The pressure in the air surged, growing heavier with every passing second. It pressed down on everything, suffocating, overwhelming. This time he wasn't holding back. Facing him, Felix remained still, but his body reacted. A faint tremble ran through him, a subtle tension tightening his muscles. He understood this opponent was far beyond him, someone he couldn't defeat like this. Luck wouldn't save him, skill alone wouldn't be enough. And worse, this wasn't the only threat. His gaze flickered upward for just a moment. Another presence equally dangerous was watching from above, and beyond that, something even greater loomed, a pressure so vast it couldn't be measured. There was no escape, no victory. Only one path remained. For a brief moment his mind fell silent. Then came calm. "If this is the last strike I can make," Felix thought, "then I won't hold anything back." His grip tightened around his sword, his breathing steady. Everything unnecessary faded away. Above them, two figures observed the battlefield. "Incredible," one of them said quietly, admiration clear in his voice. "She hasn't lost her composure." Even now, the other gave a slight nod to face killing intent, head-on like that, without hesitation. They both understood. The next exchange would decide everything below. Both fighters moved at the same time. The ground shattered beneath their feet as they dashed forward, their speed blurring, their forms beyond recognition clash. Their swords collided once again, unleashing a violent burst of energy. A shockwave tore through the surroundings, sending dust into the air as the ground trembled under the sheer force of their impact. Everyone watching held their breath, unable to look away. The pressure between them peaked, the battle reaching its absolute climax. And just as everything was about to break, stop, the voice rang out across the battlefield, sharp and absolute. "Lucian." The command cut through the chaos like a blade. Both Felix and the white-haired knight froze. Instinctively the tension snapped. Slowly they stepped back, creating distance between them. Lucian walked forward, his presence immediately dominating the space. Both fighters recognized him and lowered their guard. His expression was firm, carrying both authority and restrained anger. "That's enough," he said. "There will be no more bloodshed." The white-haired knight frowned. "Third young master, you gave us full authority. He replied sharply, if she is left alive, she will become a serious threat to House Valerian. Lucian's gaze hardened instantly. Have you forgotten who granted you that authority? He asked, his voice calm but heavy with power. I understand your concerns, he continued, but if this continues... He paused briefly. Someone will die. He stepped forward, his presence becoming even more overwhelming. I am the third young master of House Valerian. The weight of his identity alone silenced the battlefield. Then his eyes turned toward Felix, now toward her true self, Felicia. There was no hesitation, no doubt. He had already seen through everything. As the one leading this mission, Lucian said slowly, I have a proposal. A brief silence followed. Let's settle this with a duel. His tone remained calm, but final. If I lose, you and your companion will be allowed to leave safely. A slight pause, the tension in the air tightened once more. But if you lose, his voice dropped quieter, yet far heavier. Then lay down your sword. Lucian stood calmly in place, his presence steady and unshaken, as if the tension in the air meant nothing to him. On the other side, Felicia stared at him, clearly caught off guard by his sudden declaration. Her brows furrowed slightly, confusion flickering across her face as she spoke, her voice hesitant yet firm. The duel with you, young master. What do you mean? She asked, trying to understand his true intention. But before Lucian could respond, a sharp voice erupted from behind. The young master shouted impatiently, his tone filled with frustration and arrogance. Felicia, what are you hesitating for? Hurry up and accept that offer. The only thing you should be thinking about is my safety because of these incompetent fools. Don't you feel sorry for your brother going through such hardship? Prove that you're actually useful, unlike them. Prove that you are cut from a different cloth than your mother. The moment those words left his mouth, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Lucian's calm demeanor shattered, replaced by a cold, burning fury. His eyes darkened as he turned slightly, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Shut your mouth. The words were low, yet filled with overwhelming anger. They are not people, a piece of trash like you can speak of so lightly. Don't insult those who died trying to protect you, or Felicia, any further. If you keep barking, I'll cut out your tongue first. As he spoke, an immense killing intent poured out from his body, pressing down on everyone present. Like an invisible weight, the air itself seemed to grow heavier, suffocating under the sheer intensity of his aura. It was no longer just anger, it was a warning, sharp and absolute. Then, without hesitation, Lucian raised his voice, so that everyone present could hear him clearly. His tone was firm, unwavering, carrying the weight of his resolve. I declare to everyone present here, the consequences of what is about to happen are entirely my responsibility. Even if I happen to lose, I expect everyone to honor my promise. Every word echoed in the silence, reaching the ears of the knight captains and Hubo, who watched the scene unfold with growing seriousness. Stepping forward slightly, Lucian continued, his pride evident in both his posture and his voice. The third son of House Valdic, Lucian Valdic, I stake my name and challenge you to a duel. After that, Lucian stepped forward slightly, his voice firm and unwavering as he gave his command. Felicia, draw your sword for yourself. His words were calm, yet carried a weight that left no room for refusal. The moment he finished speaking, a heavy silence fell over the entire area. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if even the air itself had paused, waiting for what would happen next. Amid that silence, the white-haired man walked up to his master, his expression serious and filled with concern. Stopping beside him, he spoke in a low but urgent tone. Raymond, are you really going to just stand by and watch this? Though I didn't go all out, since my goal was only to subdue her. Not only did she block my sword, but she even managed to injure Amy. His brows tightened as he recalled the encounter, his voice growing heavier with each word. Looking at her sword's form and mana management, it is obvious that she hasn't received formal training, but it all feels meaningless in the face of her outstanding talent for the sword. In her keen eyes, he paused briefly, glancing toward Lucian and Felicia, the tension clearly reflected in his gaze. With the third young master's current prowess, he will never be a match for her. The young master's boldness and judgment were impressive, but martial prowess is an entirely different matter. We need to make a decision, Raymond. Hearing this, Raymond remained silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. Then in a calm and composed voice, he finally responded, yes, I am of the same opinion as you. However, for just this once, let us observe the situation. The white-haired man's expression immediately shifted to confusion, unable to understand such a decision. What in the world does that mean? He asked, clearly puzzled. Raymond turned his gaze slightly, his expression thoughtful yet confident, as he began to explain. The moment the third young master borrowed my sword for the duel, he told me exactly what you realize. Will you cross swords with her? His voice remained steady, carrying a quiet certainty. He spoke of the mysterious girl's talent. With a sword in her keen eyes, there was a brief pause before he continued, his words now filled with deeper meaning. Which means the third young master clearly understands the situation he's in. His gaze returned to the battlefield, unwavering. So for now, let's just watch. Let's see what kind of picture the third young master is painting Felicia. As those words lingered in the air, Felicia quietly repeated his name in her mind. Lucien Valdec, a breed completely different from any noble I know. Her thoughts flowed steadily, trying to make sense of the man standing before her. Not only did he disguise himself as a servant to inspect Logan's forces, he also personally stepped up for a duel. That seems entirely unnecessary. The more she thought about it, the more confusing the situation became. Nothing about him followed logic or expectation. I cannot fathom his true intentions. But one thing is certain. He is absolutely no match for me. Despite her conclusion, Felicia straightened her posture and spoke with a respectful tone, her voice calm yet sincere. For granting a lowly person like me such an opportunity, I will not forget your grace. If I manage to subdue you, young master, I will acknowledge my shame and quietly leave this place. As if I were dead, her words settled into the silence. But Lucien's response came without hesitation, his tone cold and resolute. But if I subdue then? On the contrary, you will be coming with me to Helheim. It seems you've made your resolve. The air between them grew sharp as both of them stood face to face. Their gazes locked. Their body is perfectly still, yet ready to explode into motion at any moment. This was no longer just a conversation. It was a clash waiting to happen. Inside her mind, Alicia made her final decision. I don't want to leave any unnecessary wounds on him. I will neutralize him in a single strike. Her eyes sharpened, a cold glint flashing through them. As her focus reached its peak, in the very next instant she moved. Her figure blurred as she lunged forward with incredible speed, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her blade cut through the air as she launched a precise and decisive attack toward Lucien just as swiftly. Lucien reacted with perfect timing. He raised his sword and blocked her strike head-on. A flicker of surprise crossed Felicia's eyes. He blocked my attack, the thought echoed in her mind. But she didn't hesitate. The moment Lucien attempted to counterattack, she immediately leaped backward, creating distance between them in a single fluid motion. Her landing was light, controlled, and ready, her eyes never leaving him for even a second. The duel had only just begun, yet the intensity between them had already reached a level that left no room for underestimation. As the clash continued, a thought echoed through Felicia's mind, sharp and unsettling. Neither his breathing nor his reaction speed could keep up with my movements at all. So how could he block my sword? The question lingered, refusing to leave her as doubt slowly crept in. But before she could find an answer, her eyes widened slightly. In the very next moment, Lucien was already in front of her, closing the distance with terrifying precision. His sword came down toward her without hesitation. Caught off guard, Felicia barely managed to raise her blade in time. Struggling to block the incoming strike, the impact sent a jolt through her arms, forcing her to tighten her grip as she steadied herself. From that point onward, the duel escalated rapidly. Their swords collided again and again in a relentless exchange of strikes, each clash ringing sharply through the air. Sparks seemed ready to fly with every impact. However, despite her skill, Felicia found herself being pushed back step by step. Each movement of Lucien's blade carried pressure, forcing her into a defensive position she hadn't expected to be in. Amid the storm of clashing steel, Lucien's voice cut through with calm clarity, as if he had complete control over the situation. This situation where you're currently being pushed back, you are exhausted from overusing your mana during your clash with the Black Lions. And even if you are conserving your strength, just in case, the gap between you and me right now is just as stark. Before she could fully process his words, Lucien launched a powerful, lethal strike. The force behind it was overwhelming, far beyond what she had anticipated. Felicia gritted her teeth, struggling to hold her ground as she blocked the attack, her body straining under the pressure. And as if that wasn't enough, Lucien spoke again, his tone steady, almost chilling in its certainty. But I know you better than you know yourself, your habits, your weaknesses, and even the flow of your sword's path. His words carried a weight that went beyond mere confidence. It was as if he wasn't just fighting her, he was reading her, predicting her, controlling the very rhythm of the battle itself. In the past, though my encounter with you was brief. As those words echoed, the scenes seemed to overlap with fragments of the past. Back then, the two of them stood face to face, just like now, their blades meeting without hesitation. We clashed swords fiercely and made what the other had into our own. It wasn't just a fight, it was a silent exchange of skill, instinct, and understanding. In that fleeting moment, they had learned from each other, absorbing movements, reading intentions, and refining themselves through the clash. Felicia, my body remembers you, and you alone. The memory faded, and reality came rushing back. In the present moment, the outcome had already been decided. Felicia's sword had shattered. The broken blade reflected the stunned expressions of everyone watching. Silence spread across the battlefield, heavy and absolute. The knight captains, Hugo, and even the young masters stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Lucien stood firmly before her, his posture unwavering as he pointed his sword directly toward Felicia. As that image settled in, fragments of the past surfaced once again. Back then, Felicia had looked at him with quiet sincerity and said, "Of course, the time I spent with you could only be called sparring for a fleeting moment. Even so, you generously taught me the way of the sword. Even knowing that we might become enemies one day, thanks to that I was able to survive." Those words now echoed in her mind, clashing against the reality before her eyes. Felicia stood there completely stunned. She had never imagined that she would lose, especially not like this, not to him. The very person she once sparred with, the one she had learned from, had now surpassed her in a way she couldn't comprehend. Meanwhile, a quiet thought surfaced in Lucian's mind, calm and resolute. "With this, I will repay a fraction of the debt I owe you." From back then there was no arrogance in his expression, no mockery, only a sense of closure, as if this duel had been something long overdue. Night had settled over the Duke's castle, wrapping it in a quiet, almost suffocating stillness. At its center stood the Duke, alone and unmoving, his posture straight, his gaze distant as though he were weighing something far beyond the present moment. Silence lingered for a while before he finally spoke, his voice calm yet carrying a natural authority. He asked about Lucian, whether the boy truly had what it would take to carry the future of House Valdek. From the darkness, the captain of the Black Lion stepped forward, composed and respectful. He bowed his head slightly before answering, his tone steady and certain. "Lucian," he said, possessed an unwavering core. The answer caused a faint shift in the Duke's expression, a subtle surprise breaking through his otherwise controlled demeanor. He admitted he had expected far less, that simply keeping up would have been enough. But this was something entirely different. The captain hesitated for a moment, as if stepping into dangerous territory, then carefully voiced a question. The Duke moved closer, each step heavy with presence, and made it clear that the situation was far too serious for conclusions to be drawn so easily. The matter of succession was not something to be decided yet. Realizing his overreach, the captain lowered his head further and apologized, but the Duke dismissed it without concern. If the report held no exaggeration, then what he had witnessed must have been remarkable. Indeed, as the moment settled, the Duke's attention shifted to a document in his hand, his eyes scanning it with quiet intensity. His expression revealed nothing, yet it felt as though the weight of the future rested within those pages. Then, without warning, he stepped closer to the captain and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. His voice dropped quieter now, almost personal, as he spoke a few words meant only for him. Captain let out a small breath, his tension easing, and replied with a faint acceptance. He would indulge the boy for a while. The Duke's expression softened just a little, and another thought came to him. Lighter in tone, it had been a long time since they had shared a drink together. He mentioned a fine liquor he had recently obtained, something he knew the captain favored, and invited him to join. A small, knowing smile appeared on the captain's face as he answered. "One night," he warned, would not be nearly enough to tell the full story of the mission. By morning the mood had shifted entirely. The mission was over, and Lucian's group had already begun their journey back. The air felt quieter now, but not peaceful. More reflective, as if carrying the aftermath of everything that had happened. Felicia had collapsed shortly after her fight, her body pushed beyond its limits by excessive mono use to ensure a recovery. Meanwhile, Philip Logan was left alone with his thoughts, fear slowly taking root beneath his pride. The realization crept in again and again. He would likely be cast out of his family, yet even then his arrogance had not truly left him. As punishment, he had been forced to dig the grave of his own vassal, his hands shaping the very earth that marked a life lost under his command. The land they passed held its own story. Rows of graves stretched endlessly, each one a silent reminder of fallen soldiers and knights. The weight of death lingered heavily in the air, pressing down on everyone who walked among them. It had all been done for a reason, to force understanding, to make him face the true cost of a life extinguished. At the front, Lucian rode calmly, leading the group forward without a word. The morning seemed still, almost fragile, until it was suddenly broken. A loud, furious voice erupted from behind, tearing through the silence. Philip shouted with unrestrained anger, his voice sharp and filled with resentment. He hurled accusations, calling out betrayal, demanding recognition, insisting on being treated with the dignity of a noble prisoner. His outrage grew louder, more desperate, until it grated against everyone present. He even went so far as to question whether Lucian intended to make an enemy of his entire house. Lucian slowly turned back, his expression unchanged, calm, yet unmistakably cold. In that moment, one thing became clear to him. Philip had learned nothing. After a brief pause, Lucian spoke, his voice quiet, but carrying a sharp edge that cut through the air. He offered only a single piece of advice. If Philip wished to keep breathing, even for a moment longer, he would be wise to choose his words carefully. There was no anger in Lucian's voice, only a quiet, suffocating authority that carried far more weight than any outburst ever could. It was the kind of tone that didn't need to rise because the danger within it was already unmistakable. Without even a hint of hesitation, he continued, his composure unshaken, as he made the reality of the situation painfully clear. This was not a place where empty status or borrowed pride could offer protection. This was Kelheim, the very heart of House Valdek. Domain so absolute that even Philip's powerful father would never dare step into it lightly. The words settled heavily in the air, stripping away whatever illusions still lingered. The scene shifted forward, and what awaited them was a sight that felt almost overwhelming. In its scale and brilliance, a vast city stretched out ahead, alive with motion and filled with a ranger that reflected generations of power and legacies. At its entrance stood an enormous gate, towering high above all who approached. As it slowly opened, a deep, echoing sound rolled outward, as if the city itself was acknowledging their return. Lu Shen was the first to move, without haste yet without pause. He guided his horse forward and passed through the gates with calm confidence. Behind him, Hugo and the knights followed in formation, escorting the prisoners as part of the procession. The moment they entered, the quiet dignity of the city gave way to something far louder. Cheers erupted from both sides of the street as crowds gathered, their voices rising in excitement and pride. People leaned forward, calling out, eager just to catch a glimpse of him. They spoke his name with admiration, their words carrying stories that had already spread ahead of his arrival. How he had crushed the schemes of House Logan, how he had returned with their leader captured alive. The energy surged, growing stronger with each passing second, until the streets themselves seemed to vibrate with it. Some voices rang out even louder, filled with almost reverent enthusiasm, hailing him as the Lion of House Valdec. Hugo, caught in the middle of it all, could barely process what he was seeing. His eyes moved from one side of the crowd to the other, disbelief clear on his face. Unable to hold back his confusion, he turned to Lu Shen and asked what exactly was happening. Even surrounded by deafening cheers, Lu Shen remained composed, his expression unchanged as he explained it simply. He had only requested an opportunity to expose the crimes of House Logan, but it seemed the Duke had chosen to go far beyond that. This was not just acknowledgement, it was full open support. Lu Shen told him to stand proud and accept it, because this moment marked the first great achievement of his life. Hearing those words, something stirred deep within Hugo. Pride swelled in his chest, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore, as he allowed himself to truly take in the moment. As the procession moved deeper into the city, the perspective shifted once again, this time to a place far above the celebration. From the height of a tower, the Duke stood watching it all unfold. Beside him was his butler, silent and attentive as always. The Duke's gaze remained fixed on the streets below, his expression thoughtful, almost distant. After a moment he spoke, his voice carrying a faint trace of self-reflection. He remarked that perhaps he was growing old to arrange something as grand as a victory parade, simply because his son had asked for it. The butler responded without hesitation, his tone steady and certain. What Lu Shen had achieved, he said, was more than enough to deserve such recognition. But more importantly, the letter Lu Shen had sent was never just about securing his own position. The butler continued, his words precise and perceptive, explaining that it had been a calculated move. It showed the people of their territory that House Valdec remained resolute and unyielding, while also sending a clear message outward to the imperial family and to House Logan alike. And the Duke, of course, had understood that from the very beginning. Hearing this, the Duke's expression shifted subtly, his thoughts deepening as his gaze remained locked on the distant horizon. The world itself was beginning to change. He reflected forces that once seemed eternal were now showing signs of strain. Even the empire, which had stood like an unshakable sun, was no longer without flaw. Even the claws of a lion, once thought unbreakable, were beginning to wear. If he wished to avoid being swept away by what was coming, then he would need to sharpen himself further than ever before. His words carried a quiet weight, as though he were already looking beyond the present and into a future filled with uncertainty. And with that, the scene slowly faded. The next moment brought a stark contrast. Back within the castle, Lu Shen finally returned to his room. The instant he stepped inside, he let himself fall onto the bed without restraint, his body giving into the exhaustion he had held back until now. For a brief moment, he simply lay there breathing quietly, allowing himself to feel the rare comfort of rest. A faint murmur escaped him as he admitted, almost to himself, that he finally felt alive again. It was a strange realization, that he had grown so accustomed to the noble lifestyle that he had come to miss it. Closing his eyes, he let his thoughts settle, organizing everything that had happened. The Duke had already set aside time for a separate report later that evening, which meant he had a small window of freedom. But more importantly, this mission had given him far more than he had anticipated. One by one he went through it all, securing Felicia ahead of schedule, turning public perception completely in his favor, with the victory parade igniting a new sense of purpose in Hugo, and even establishing a connection with the Black Lions. Each outcome on its own was valuable, but together they formed something far greater. Slowly, those scattered pieces began to align in his mind, forming a clear path forward. It wasn't enough to reach his goal yet, but it was a step, a solid foothold, that brought him closer to a position that once felt impossibly far away. The thought lingered, and with it came a brief memory of his past life. As a mercenary, his world had been entirely different, simpler in some ways, harsher in others. A faint, almost amused smile appeared on his face, as he imagined how those old companions would react. If they saw him now, they would hardly believe it, but the moment didn't last long. His expression sharpened as he suddenly sat up, the clarity returning to his eyes. Rest was over, thinking was over. Now it was time to move again. His mind began to turn toward what came next, already calculating, already planning. There were still opportunities ahead, things to gain, advantages to secure. Among them one stood out above the rest. With a quiet, deliberate tone, he murmured to himself, almost as if confirming it aloud. The next step was exactly what he intended to take from the Grand Duke. After that, the scene shifts, and we are shown an elegant dining room where the Grand Duke and Lucian are having dinner. Together, the atmosphere is refined and calm, yet carries a quiet weight of importance. As they sit across from each other, the Grand Duke speaks in a composed and authoritative tone, praising Lucian for his recent mission. He tells him that he was blessed with great luck on his first assignment, and that, after carefully cross-referencing the information, they have confirmed that the child Lucian captured alive is indeed the offspring of the Marquez family. This, he says, is the most definitive piece of evidence they could have hoped for. Acknowledging the success, the Grand Duke commends him, saying, "Good work, Lucian." Hearing this, Lucian responds with humility, saying that his father honors him too much and that all of this was only possible thanks to the Grand Duke lending him the sharp sword known as the Black Lion. However, his thoughts soon shift to a more serious concern, and he asks what will happen to Philip Logan. He points out that, after witnessing his own child die like this, it's unlikely that the Marquis will simply sit back and do nothing in response. The Grand Duke remains unfazed, calmly stating that they will have to wait and see. He describes Bernhard Logan as a snake of a man, someone who would not hesitate to weigh his own child against the interest of his family. In his view, as long as there is one child left to inherit the family, the Marquis would not act recklessly. He then dismisses Lucian's concern, telling him not to trouble himself with what comes next, as he has already done more than his fair share. Shifting the topic, the Grand Duke then asks Lucian what he wants as a reward for successfully completing the mission. He points out that Lucian went out of his way to send a letter, implying that he must have had something specific in mind rather than something simple like a celebratory procession. Hearing this, Lucian gives a slight, somewhat hesitant smile and admits that he feels a bit awkward being asked so directly. Still, since the topic has been brought up, he decides to humbly make his request. Before speaking, however, he pauses internally, questioning whether he should really say it out loud. Then, gathering his resolve, he begins to Hugo, who made a great contribution this time. But before he can even finish his sentence, the Grand Duke cuts him off sharply with a single word. Impossible. The sudden interruption catches Lucian completely off guard, and for a moment he is left stunned, confused, and slightly shaken. He looks at his father and stammers, "Father, I haven't even finished speaking yet." However, the Grand Duke, already having seen through his intention, responds without hesitation, stating that Lucian was about to request a knighthood for Hugo. Was he not? The Grand, unwavering tone. He says that, while it is true Hugo was helpful this time, his past ties with the Marquis family cannot simply be ignored. Had Lucian not intervened and captured him, Hugo would have gone all the way with them. Without hesitation, Lucian immediately pushes back, his voice steady but carrying a hint of urgency. He argues that such a claim is purely hypothetical, emphasizing that what truly matters is the present reality. That Hugo clearly chose to cooperate and played a significant role in achieving their success. But before he can continue any further, the Grand Duke cuts him off sharply. Calling his name, he tells him that's enough, explains that a knight must build his own honor, and could ever question them. Then, looking directly at Lucian. Hearing this, Lucian falls silent. A trace of disappointment crosses his face. Though he keeps his composure, deep down he had already expected this outcome. But hearing the outright rejection still stings. In his mind, he quietly admits that it really is a no. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke continues offering alternatives in a measured and practical manner. If Hugo desires wealth, he says, he can reward him with chest full of gold coins. If necessary, he can even arrange a completely new identity for him. However, becoming a knight is out of the question, at least for now. Lucian, now clearly resigned, lowers his expectations. Inwardly, he apologizes to Hugo, thinking that they will have to wait for another opportunity in the future. Outwardly, he nods in agreement and admits that his father is right, acknowledging that he may have been a bit hasty in making such a request. Seeing this, the Grand Duke tells him to ask for something else, instead something more reasonable this time. After a brief pause, Lucian speaks again. Then, with a slightly unrestrained, almost mischievous smile, he asks, "Please allow Felicia to meet the Sword Saint." The moment those words leave his mouth, even the Grand Duke is visibly taken aback. For the first time, his composure falters as he reacts with genuine surprise, questioning what exactly Lucian just said. Before the tension in the room can fully settle, the scene suddenly shifts. We are taken to a completely different location, a prisoner camp. The atmosphere here is starkly different. Guarded and tense, the guards stand watch outside. As the focus moves inside, where Felicia is seated quietly, as she looks around she reflects on her situation. Realizing that this is no ordinary prison, instead it appears to be a special facility meant for nobles. What confuses her even more is the treatment she has been receiving. Despite being nothing more than a maid, she has been placed in such a place, provided with proper meals, and even given medical care. Unable to make sense of it all, Felicia questions what their true intentions could be. Why go to such lengths for someone like her? Yet after a moment of thought, her expression softens slightly. Perhaps she tells herself, this might actually be for the best. As the scene lingers on Felicia, we slowly watch her eyes begin to close, her expression softening as she drifts into her thoughts. In that quiet moment she reflects on her past, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion as she admits that, sitting there in silence, she continues thinking to herself, almost as if speaking a final wish out loud. She says it would be nice if she could hold a sword just one last time before she dies. As these thoughts unfold, the scene transitions into a vivid memory, the intense sparring match between her and Lucian, the clash of blades, the sharp movements. Watching it all again within her memories, but almost immediately, she dismisses the thought herself, calling it completely absurd, as if such a wish could never come true. Just then, a voice suddenly breaks the silence from outside. It states that according to the physician, her mana control is still unstable. The voice continues, now clearly revealed to be Lucian, as he calmly adds that she is also suffering from severe malnutrition and fatigue. His tone is measured but direct, as he asks whether her body is feeling any better now and whether she is well enough to hold a sword again. Hearing this, Felicia is visibly startled. The unexpected question catches her completely off guard, and she immediately responds in confusion, saying that more importantly, what does he mean by holding a sword again? In response, Lucian looks at her with a composed expression and counters with a question of his own. Is she really planning on staying here forever? He even remarks with a hint of dry irony that surprisingly prison life seems to suit her. Then moving closer, he gestures toward the bed nearby and makes it clear that this was never the reason he went through all that trouble to bring her here. Dropping any pretense, he speaks plainly. Addressing her directly, he asks if she truly doesn't want to let her talent with the sword bloom. In this place he firmly states that he has no intention of allowing her to remain just an average sword fighter. Instead, he reveals his plan. He intends to recommend her to become a disciple of the Sword Saint Surizen. Her disbelief is immediate and unmistakable. She questions him sharply, asking if he is mocking her. To her, the idea itself sounds ridiculous, absurd even. She points out that it is already unbelievable enough for someone like her, a mermaid and a woman, to even become a sword fighter, but to go as far as becoming a disciple of the Sword Saint. That in her eyes is something far beyond reason. Her frustration finally spills over as she speaks with a firm, almost trembling voice. She declares that her status may be lowly, but she is not a fool who doesn't understand her place. Watching her react like this, Lucian quietly reflects to himself, realizing that he may have pushed things too quickly. He admits inwardly that he was a bit too hasty, and that Felicia's response is only natural. After all, despite carrying the blood of the Marquis, she was born an illegitimate child, and a woman at that, which meant she was never even allowed to hold a sword, let alone properly learn how to wield one. Instead of opportunity, she was met with envy, jealous, and relentless persecution from her own siblings. Those circumstances eventually gave rise to the figure known as the Sword Demon Felix, the one who abandoned House Logan. Bringing himself back to the present, Lucian addresses her directly in a calmer tone. He tells her that he understands why she cannot trust him and that she should take all the time she needs to think things through before making any decision. Hearing this, Felicia looks at him confused and asks what exactly he means by that. Lucian responds without hesitation, explaining that he is placing the freedom of choice entirely in her hands. He even tells her that she could leave as soon as today, if she wishes. However, before ending the conversation, he leaves her with one final thought: never give up on the sword. He tells her that she is at her truest self when she holds a sword in her hand. Those words linger with her. Felicia, now slightly shaken, repeats them quietly to herself, questioning their meaning. She wonders if she is truly at her truest self when holding a sword, especially when even her own blood relatives had taken that very right away from her. Then, raising her voice just a little, she turns back to Lucian and asks something far more personal. Does she really have the right to do that? Is it truly okay for her to focus solely on the sword without being bound by anything else? Lucian meets her question with unwavering certainty. He tells her that if that is what her will desire, then he swears it will be so, staking his promise on the name of Lucian Baldock. At that moment the scene briefly shifts into the past. We see Lucian speaking casually with Felix, asking him what his dream is. While others talk about living comfortable or showing off their success, Lucien remarks that Felix doesn't seem like the type to want such things. He even suggests possibilities like becoming a knight captain or earning a noble title, but Felix responds differently. He admits that he hasn't thought deeply about it before, but if there is one thing he truly wishes for, it is simple to devote himself entirely to the sword without being bound by anything, and for him that alone would be enough.